Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. There is a hand on the floor. The young man gets up, he tries to understand where he is. Mountains and the sky are visible through the window, the guy hears birds singing. He notices his reflection in the mirror. The hero looks at himself in amazement, he cannot understand who is in front of him. The guy touches his cheek, he asks what is wrong with his face, and notices that he looks very bad. A system window appears in front of the hero, which causes him confusion. It says that he belongs to the goblin race. The guy looks at the information about himself in bewilderment. He asks loudly if he really was reborn as a goblin. The system window in front of him leaves no doubt about it. The hero, armed with a sword, fights monsters. The guy remembers that Fantasy Frontier was a game with high ratings, and people loved it for its incredible graphics and well-thought-out plot. This RPG became incredibly popular due to its high rating among players. A young man sits in front of a computer. He remembers that he also could not pass by this game, and it sucked him in completely. The fighter kills a goblin. The hero, putting his hand to his face, remembers that yesterday he just finished off one such creature and raised his level, and then fell asleep. The young man tries to understand whether he could have become a goblin as a result, and why exactly him, when there are incredibly many possible options. The guy looks in the mirror, he says that, despite the fact that he looks like a human, he belongs to the goblin race. The system launches a program to merge the memories of a person and a game character. Memories flash through the guy's head. He understands that the young man whose body he got into did not have the sweetest life. A girl looks in the door, shouting for her brother to get up. Since it is already morning, she says that they have a lot to do. The hero looks at his sister, apologizes to her, and asks to give him a couple of minutes. The little girl, smiling happily, carries a basket. She promises to cook the most delicious dinner for her brother today. The guy, raising his right hand, says that he is really looking forward to it. He sees the road and landscapes, and they seem very familiar to him. People are walking around the children. The hero no longer doubts that he has ended up in the world of the Fantasy Frontier game, as he recognizes the familiar setting and surrounding atmosphere. The guy has a black hood on his head. Judging by the memories that have appeared, he lost his parents, and now lives alone with his sister under the protection of a black market merchant who uses them as hired labor. We see houses with red roofs. The girl stumbles and screams in fear. The hero picks her up and asks her to be careful. The little girl, smiling, tells her brother that she is completely fine. The young man, who has a very kind smile on his face, declares that he will always look after Lily. The girl, smiling, says that all this is because she is blind, and she can only rely on her brother. The young man looks down sadly. He thinks that he promised to protect the baby, but belongs to the goblin race, the weakest of all possible. The hero, looking up, tries to understand why he was reborn here, and what he should do about it now. In front of us are houses. It is reported that this is the mansion of a black market merchant. The guy waves his hand to his sister, and says that they will see each other later. The hero remembers how he caught his falling sister. He thinks that he mainly carries out all the orders, since his sister cannot see anything, while the baby does the work available to her in the customer's house. An unpleasant man, holding out his finger, orders the hero to get black ore. The guy sadly replies that he will do it. He pulls a cart with ore behind him. Someone hits its wheel. The cart falls to the ground and pulls the guy along with it. The boy with blonde hair shouts at the hero to move, and that this lazy goblin can't handle even the simplest job. The hero puts the cart on its wheels. The teenagers talk, ignoring him. One of them asks if it's true that Butch entered the Magic Academy. The second says that only representatives of high society are accepted there. The blonde confirms that it was very difficult to get in. The hero sits in front of the filled cart. Butch asks him if the goblin has finished his work yet. Smiling mockingly, the nasty boy says that at this rate the guy won't even have time to eat. The hero is incredibly upset. He thinks that being reborn as a goblin is the worst thing that could happen to him. The system window reports that the boy's intelligence is 2, magical abilities are 1, physical strength is 0, and he has no special skills. The hero sits with a food box. He thinks that, according to the map that is in the mansion, 125 years have passed since the main events of the game, and his age corresponds to the one he had in his previous life. The boy continues to wonder why he became a goblin. A vague figure is visible in the boy's iris. A knight flies down. We see the glowing visor of his helmet. The boy looks up in shock, trying to understand where these warriors came from. The hero, whose profile we see, remembers that in this game there was a special squad of holy knights. One of these fighters goes forward with a sword in his hand. Someone shouts loudly that the village is under attack. Lily hears this cry. A man in a cap orders everyone to run, promising that the guards will protect everyone. The hero's face is perplexed. He thinks that they are now in the depths of the continent, and if the dominance of people has increased so much over the past time, then this means that the deviation from the plot of the game Fantasy Frontier known to him is very large. The knight kills someone. The gray-haired old man with a beard laughs loudly. He shouts that this is exactly what happens when damn monsters dare to challenge people. The hero opens the door and shouts to his sister that they need to run away from here. A scared girl is sitting in the corner. The guy runs up to her and tells her to come with him. Butch rushes past the brother and sister, demanding that they get out of the way. He shouts that all the pathetic scum should not dare to get in his way. The hero, hugging his sister, asks if everything is okay with her. Lily answers that she is fine. The gray-haired old man bursts into the room and shouts that he has come to kill. Noticing the children, he says that it seems that the two freaks did not have time to escape. The hero covers his sister with his body. He gets to his feet and tries to fight back, realizing that he will not be able to defeat this enemy. The guy shouts at his sister to run away from here. The knight strikes and hits the hero in the chest. Blood gushes from the guy's mouth. The old man laughs merrily. The guy falls down. He thinks that he was reborn just recently, and after that he died very absurdly. In front of us is a white silhouette. The hero is trying to understand whether he really died. He is tormented by the thought that although he was reborn, he could not do anything and did not protect his sister. We see a blue window. The hero thinks that Lily will die now too. In front of us is a vague silhouette. We see the system window again. Someone says that he will lend the hero his strength. The guy receives a notification that all types of magic have been studied. A geometric figure and inscriptions are visible in the system window. The guy opens his eyes. He looks at the window and understands that his status is in front of him. The hero notices that all his characteristics have increased greatly. The guy sees the white silhouette again. He is asked to listen carefully and is told that he will not be able to use all the powers he received at once. But he will gradually master them, and immediately after that their previous owner will die. The hero sees the vague outlines of a face. He tries to clarify something, but he is told that there is no time for chatter. A powerful flash occurs. The guy hears that time is running out, and he must finish off all the enemies. The hero, lying on the floor, comes to his senses. The old man, pointing his finger at his sister, shouts that she will now go after her brother. A disgusting smile is on the knight's face. Suddenly someone orders the villain to stop. The hero slowly approaches. Two knights are trying to strike him from behind. The old man says that the guy is still alive, but not for long. Blue energy flows from the boy's eyes. He looks up, remembers that he must kill all the knights, and then uses the dark magic, demonic leap skill. The boy stands with his legs wide apart. He rushes into the attack and strikes multiple times. The defeated knights are visible behind the boy. The old man looks at the hero in amazement. The boy takes a sword in his hand. He appears behind the gray-haired knight and says that he dared to raise a sword against his sister. The old man, with his mouth wide open, calls the hero a scumbag and asks who he is. The boy calmly looks at the enemy. He strikes, hitting the knight right in the chest, and then declares that he is just a goblin. Lily sits on the floor, cowering in horror. Smoke rises above the village. The unpleasant man the hero works for declares that, according to the guards, the invaders have already left the city. The children are discussing these words animatedly. The first of them asks if the guards managed to do it themselves. The second says that someone saw a demon in a cloak who dealt with the nasty people. The girl says that thanks to whoever did it, they are all safe. The hero and his sister are sitting by the wall. A system window hangs in front of the guy. It reports that the awakening of the first level has occurred, and the study of dark magic is in progress. The hero grabs his head. He tries to understand what all this means. The sister asks her brother if everything is okay with him, and if he is in pain. Smiling, the boy says that everything is fine. He understands how exactly he will receive his new powers. Butch, spreading his arms out to the sides, thanks the gods that everything is okay with his father and friends. The boy says that he did not want to brag, but he was the demon in a cloak who dealt with the nasty people. The impudent man smiles happily. The man the brother and sister work for asks in amazement if Butch really defeated them all. The boy says that it was worth training and entering the magic academy. The hero looks at the child angrily. The children, joyfully clenching their fists, praise Butch. One of the girls says that only thanks to him they were all saved. Raising his right hand, the impudent man says that there is no need to thank him, because protecting the residents of the city is his duty. Smiling smugly, Butch says that if anyone wants to see what magic he used to defeat people, they can look into his mansion, but it will not be free. The hero looks down sadly. He understands that this disgusting child is looking for easy money and fame. Someone shouts that he wants to see this magic with his own eyes. Another spectator exclaims that he is ready to pay any amount. Butch notices someone to his right. This is the hero and his sister. The blonde man says in bewilderment that it seems the goblins have survived after all. He notes their stubbornness and great will to live. The hero gets up from his seat and menacingly calls out to the impudent man. Looking at the deceiver, he declares that it was not Butch who defeated the people, who says that the hero is talking nonsense, and he would not lie. The hero, boldly looking at the boy, declares that if he is not lying, then let him try to defeat him, and if he loses, then he will confess to everything. A boy with a horn on his forehead appears next to Butch. He says that the hero speaks too boldly. Butch smiles. He puts forward his right hand and asks what the hero will do if he loses. The guy's eyes emit a purple glow. Butch stands with his arms wide apart. He calls on everyone to watch how this goblin will burn in a dark flame. The boy, turning his head, declares that this is how, with the help of his incredible dark magic, he defeated people. Purple streams crawl onto the child's face. Ominous energy swirls around the boy. The hero asks if he really defeated an entire squad of knights alone. Butch answers that it was he who did it. He is told not to dare lie, since he will have to pay for it with his life. Butch admits that he lied. He says that he hid in a warehouse and did not fight anyone. Butch, clutching his head, stands in front of the hero. He turns his head with a mad look and giggles strangely. The hero frowns at the enemy. He thinks that he used illusion, a dark magic spell that causes hallucinations in the enemy if he meets the gaze of the caster. The boy moves away from Butch. He takes his sister by the hand and tells her to go with him. The people around are amazed. They ask the guy what just happened. Someone guesses that it was the hero who dealt with the knights alone. The young man turns to them and says that this simply cannot be. The guy walks away with his sister. He tells her that he is very interested in who the hero is who protected their city. We see the face of the young man. He thinks that he was reborn as a weak goblin, but after dying, he received the greatest power, and now, using it, he can protect both himself and his sister. Brother and sister are sitting on the threshold of the destroyed house. Raising her finger, the girl says that a lot has happened, and she is a little tired. The hero looks at the little girl and asks if Lily can move closer to him for a second. She asks why. The guy touches his sister's face and uses the skill Heal Darkness level 38. The healing begins. The hero stares at his sister. The girl sits with her eyes closed. The guy thinks that Lily has been blind since birth, but he thinks that he can now heal her with magic. The little girl sees a vague silhouette of her brother. In front of us is her eye. Lily asks in amazement what happened. The hero, smiling, looks at her. The little girl asks if she can really see now. The young man, smiling, says that something happened, and now he can use black magic. Lily, looking at her brother in shock, asks again. She says that she is not satisfied with this explanation. The guy, thoughtfully rubbing his chin, suggests that he probably awakened a huge potential in himself. Lily, leaning on the ground, asks what this could even mean and reminds that they are goblins. The hero smiles. He puts his hand on the little girl's head and says that he is just glad she is healed. The little girl, crying with happiness, says that her older brother, as always, is incredibly cool. The guy hugs the girl's head to himself. He sees system messages in front of him that the Reincarnated has completed the task, receiving the second level of awakening. The range of black magic skills has been increased, and the data packet to the Goblin Fairy has been unpacked. The hero, whose hand is on his sister's head, is amazed. He cannot understand what the last message means. A creature with white hair appears, who apologizes for interrupting the conversation. A fairy appears from the system window. She says that this was her wish, and nothing can be done about it. A tiny creature hangs in the air in front of the children. She introduces herself as the Goblin Fairy and says that she was tasked with escorting them to a hidden goblin village. Wings are visible behind the green-skinned girl. She offers to be friends, and calls one of her interlocutors an unrivaled mutation. The fairy smiles. The hero asks with a displeased look what village she is talking about. The children follow the fairy through the forest, and are told that they are in the wilderness on the continent of demons. The fairy flies in front of the boy with a happy expression. We see the boy's eye. He thinks that Fantasy Frontier had a wonderfully developed open world in which anything could happen, and this game system could be called the best of its kind. The fairy looks forward. The hero thinks that the well-developed game engine provided complete freedom of action when creating a race. The fairy looks around in bewilderment, and asks what the boy just said. He, pretending to smile, says that his companion imagined it. The hero and his sister enter a small village. The fairy says that they are there in a hidden goblin village on the continent of demons. The boy thoughtfully says that he could not even imagine that there was a settlement here. The fairy, landing on Lily's head, declares that this village is hidden from outsiders by special magic, and if it weren't for this, someone would have found it for sure. The hero says that he understood everything. The guy looks at the fairy. She declares that she will now take the children to the head of the village. The goblins look at the brother and sister passing by them. The green creatures talk to each other. Small children run up to Lily. One of them says that the girl is very cute, and offers to play with them. Lily seems touched. The fairy, folding her arms on her chest, says that it would be better if the hero goes to the head of the village alone. The guy looks at his sister, and offers her to play with the children for a while. Smiling happily, Lily agrees. The hero understands that his sister, having regained her sight, began to look much happier. The young man, looking at the baby, thinks that this is simply wonderful. The hero sits by the fireplace in front of an old man, who says that he is very glad to know that in addition to the inhabitants of this village, there are other surviving representatives of their race. The goblin, who has a thick white mustache, says that this is exactly what was said in the divine prophecy. He says that it described a fairy who acted as a guide, and a boy whom she would bring to this village. A picture hangs above the heads of the interlocutors. The old man says that, according to the prophecy, he must give the boy a secret treasure. The hero looks at the goblin in surprise. He understands that the divine prophecy was most likely left by the one whose voice he heard after his death. The old man gets up from his chair and asks the hero to wait here, promising to return soon. The fairy hangs next to the shoulder of the young man. A fire burns in the fireplace next to them. The fairy says that the goblins in this village are kind and hospitable, but living here, having little food and resources, is very difficult. We see representatives of different races mocking the Green Goblin. The fairy says that other tribes avoid these creatures and laugh at them, and the heroes think of them as blood stains on their swords. A fighter with a blade in his hand walks past the killed goblins. The fairy says that this is not just natural selection, everyone around is deliberately oppressing the goblins, and it seems to her that the destruction of this village is just around the corner. The hero, angrily clenching his fist, says that this is exactly how it is, and in the game the goblins were just helpless creatures of the initial level. He remembers how he killed one of them, and realizes that now he himself has turned into a goblin. The hero takes the mask in his hand. Having removed it, he sees himself killed. The young man cannot believe the absurdity that is happening to him. The old goblin hands the hero a scroll and asks him to take this item. The young man unrolls the scroll. Both he and the fairy are shocked. The old man steps away from the boy. We see the ear of this creature. The village chief states that their tribe is weak and fragile, and this is the result of the fact that they have avoided other tribes. The hero looks closely at the interlocutor, who states that the goblins are now on the verge of extinction. The old man states that perhaps the boy will be able to change this situation. He calls him the chosen one, and says that the villagers trust him with their fate. Getting up from his chair, the hero calls out to the elder. Children look in the window. They look at the boy with admiration. One of the girls tells her comrades that if they are ready, they need to begin. The children look at the hero with a pleading look and ask him to help them. A whole crowd of goblins stands in the doorway. They say that they believe in divine prophecy. The green creatures kneel and begin to beg the hero to save them all. The young man looks at his fellow tribesmen. The fairy hangs between the brother and sister. The hero looks into the distance with detachment. He thinks that at the beginning of the game goblins are the weakest creatures, but they can also cause trouble if there are many of them, and among them there can be representatives of a higher rank, possessing unusual abilities. The young man, whose eye we see, remembers that in Fantasy Frontier, goblins were never threatened with imminent extermination. Lily looks at the fairy in shock. The hero remembers that these creatures in the game developed unusually quickly, so they could stand up for themselves. The guy frowns to the left of himself. He understands that, apparently, something is happening in the world that he could not even suspect. The fairy raises her hands. The young man asks why they came here. The hero notices something in front of him. The guy's hand is on his knee. He says that he wants to check something. System windows appear in front of the young man. He says that he needs to check how well he can use the abilities he currently has. There is a list of skill names hanging in front of the guy. He guesses that he cannot use those marked in gray, and most likely, he will unlock them by completing tasks. The hero understands that there is no specific hierarchy in this list. Most of the skills are still marked in white. The guy understands that, most likely, in their final form, these skills will form the familiar skill tree. The hero looks to his left. In front of him are his parameters. The guy understands that now he owns not only dark magic, but also quite decent parameters. The young man approaches the rock. We see this natural formation up close. The guy swings his fist, declaring that first you need to measure physical strength. He strikes. Huge cracks appear on the surface of the rock. Lily and the fairy look at the hero in shock. The guy, whose eyes we see, uses the flare bomb skill of the 10th level. Lily grabs her head. A powerful explosion occurs. The girl flies back. In front of us is the edge of the cloud from the explosion. The hero rubs his chin thoughtfully and says that it is time to sum it up. He sees a list of his skills in front of him. The hero sighs heavily. He seems to have finally begun to understand what is happening, in particular that the range of his magic is quite large, and therefore he can even afford some tricks. The young man, looking at the scroll, says that it remains only to make the final touches. The children and the fairy approach the stone. The hero thinks that on the scroll received from the elder there was a mark located in the middle of the village. Lily and her brother stand in front of a secret tombstone. The fairy is visible next to the hero's head. The guy realizes that he is in the place where the real heroes of the goblin tribe rest. The young man's eyes glow. He declares that he is using the most powerful dark magic spell of those that he managed to learn, namely, the summoning of level 99 goblins. Goblins appear next to the children. In front of us is a hobgoblin. Gobdragon is shown next. We see a girl. It is said that she is Goblin Girl. The last one shown is the Goblin General. The fairy, smiling, says that something incredible is starting to happen. The hero states that over several thousand years, even among the weakest and most insignificant creatures, which are goblins, individuals with mutations were sometimes born. We see the legs of a young man. The eye under the knight's helmet emits a purple glow. The young man says that such creatures had strength and special abilities. The guy stands in front of a huge knight. He says that he is talking about the spirits of heroes of the past, whose memories he can call up. The knight calls the hero Lord Messiah. He kneels before him and declares that he is waiting for his orders. The young man declares that with such power, he is going to put an end to the war between the heroes and the demon lord, and will force both of these forces to bow their heads so that peace will come to the world. The young man, hugging his sister, declares that he is going to become Goblin Messiah. The hero hangs in the air. He is asleep. The guy's arms are spread out to the sides. He hears someone calling him. The hero wakes up when he is called an idiot. We see a blonde with horns. Looking at her in shock, the boy asks who she is. Putting her hand out in front of her, the girl introduces herself as the Goblin Goddess. The hero looks at her and asks again in shock. He remembers the painting he saw in the elder's house and realizes that the girl looks like the one depicted on that canvas. Thoughtfully looking into the distance, the boy realizes that even the lowest tribes of monsters must have their own deities. The hero examines the girl. He thinks that she does not look like a goddess, but simply like a very sexy beauty. The girl, looking at the boy with displeasure, asks if he really thought about all sorts of obscenities. The boy frighteningly denies. Putting her right hand out to the side, the girl says that this time she forgives the hero. She states that the last time they saw each other, they did not have time to talk. Looking down, she says that it is time to tell the reason why she gave the guy her power. The hero looks at her carefully. We see a scene of the extermination of green creatures. The goddess says that tens of millions of goblins were brutally killed during countless runs, and they were always treated as lower forms of life. A goblin in a red cloak raises his hand. The girl says that it is believed that goblins are in this position due to their helplessness, but for this same reason they are the strongest. The guy asks in surprise how this should be understood, because it turns out that they are the strongest because they are the weakest. Green creatures are visible above the girl's horned head. She says that this is about the legacy of reincarnation, and now the guy will receive an incredible amount of knowledge received by her fallen brothers. The girl says that when tens of millions of creatures come together, they become incredibly strong, and Lily is not the only one the hero can save. The guy remembers the girl who, while still blind, carries a basket. The goddess, with her arms outstretched, declares that she entrusts the fate of the dying goblin tribe to the hero. The young man wakes up. The sun shines through the window. The hero gets out of bed, muttering something about the future of the tribe. Clenching his fist, the young man says that he is now confident that he will create a world free of oppression. The young man writes with a pen on paper. On the table lies an envelope with an application for an entrance exam that must be sent to the Academy of Dark Magic. The young man says that this should be enough. The fairy asks the young man if he is sure that this will work. The hero, next to whom a flower pot is visible, replies that he will take care of everything. The young man, looking out the window, says that he wants to create a world in which both his sister and everyone in this village can live in peace. In front of us is a bald character. The young man declares that his first target will be one of the 7 greatest demons of the ruler's army, the one who rules this region, the cruel King Dial. We see a majestic building. The hero says that the Academy of Dark Magic is used to train recruits for the army of this demon, and Dial is the founder of the educational institution. The boy kneels before the man sitting on the throne. The hero declares that if he can enter the academy and become a cadet, he will request an official audience with the founder, and this will be a great opportunity to eliminate him. The young man imagines himself stabbing the villain with a sword. The boy places his hand on his sister's head and asks Lily to stay here for a while for him. He thinks that the girl will be safe in the hidden goblin village. The hero, pulling his hood over his head, promises to return very quickly. Lily looks at her brother in fear and asks him to be careful. The hero looks at the fairy hanging in front of him and asks what she is going to do. The girl replies that her help would be useful to the villagers. The winged creature, smiling, declares that, however, the place where the hero is going seems much more interesting to her, so she will accompany him. A young man comes out of a door. He is told that he is in the city of Castletown, ruled by the cruel King Dial. The young man looks around. He tells the fairy that the Academy of Dark Magic should be somewhere nearby. The hero looks to his left in surprise. Someone is angrily asking if it is really impossible to do even such a simple thing normally. A girl with green hair is cleaning the shoes of a fat man. She fearfully apologizes to him. The bastard kicks the little girl and demands that she stop, since she is holding him up, and he may be late for a business meeting. The hero hears 2 young men discussing what happened. One of them says that this scoundrel always does this when he is in a bad mood. The second states that even though he hit a goblin slave, it still looks ugly. The fairy, folding her arms over her chest, says that everyone always picks on the lower races, and it is simply disgusting. The boy rubs his chin thoughtfully. He remembers that in front of him is a slave trader named Bradley. Around the man are visible gold coins. The boy remembers that in the game Fantasy Frontier he was a minor aristocrat who got rich by selling slaves. He did not disdain blackmail, deception, and other nasty things. A smile appears on the boy's face. He is glad that his love for character art books came in handy here, and it seems to him that now is a great opportunity to test the abilities of one of the heroes of the past. The hero, looking over his shoulder, declares that they will help this girl. The fairy, spreading her arms out to the sides, declares that she had no doubt that the boy would do just that. The boy is sitting on the pavement in a narrow alley. We see the lower part of his face. He calls the goblin hero. The hero puts his hand on the ground and says that, walking the path of light, he calls the one who is in the very depths of darkness, so that she can demonstrate her power. The boy's eyes glow and he asks for Goblin Girl to appear before him. A magical formation is visible under the boy's hand. A door opens in front of him. We see a girl who throws her head back. She joyfully throws her hands up and exclaims that being alive is simply wonderful. Winking at the hero, she asks what her master wants and promises to do whatever he says. The fairy, folding her arms over her chest, declares that one of the great ancestors is behaving quite bravely. The hero points behind him and, admitting that the request will be quite unexpected, declares that he wants Goblin Girl to do something for him. Bradley, yanking the chain, shouts for his slave to get up. The unfortunate girl sits on the ground. The scoundrel says that he knows that she is a cheap slave in front of him, but he could not even imagine that she would be so useless. The girl lies on the ground. Bradley continues to scold her. The onlookers whisper disapprovingly. The villain notices someone. The hero stands in front of him. Bradley asks what this man wants. Raising his left hand, the young man asks if the man could stop torturing the girl. He declares that she is his slave and he can do with her whatever he wants. The hero says that it seems that the merchant does not care about the price at all. Bradley waves the guy off, saying that he is absolutely right. The young man declares that in this case he will buy this slave from the man. The guy, putting forward his right hand, says that he will give 100 times the amount that the scoundrel spent on buying this girl. Bradley, looking at the hero in amazement, asks again. The hero, raising his right hand, says that he will buy the slave, paying 100 times the original cost. Bradley looks at the guy in amazement. The young man in his black cloak stands before the villain, who says that perhaps the slave was cheap, but he paid 30 gold pieces for her, and does not believe that anyone would pay 100 times more for her. The hero states that the money is already prepared, and asks the fairy to bring it. The girl states that everything is ready. Bags of money fall in front of Bradley. The villain, amazed, says that there are 3,000 gold pieces in front of him. He asks the hero if he is sure that he wants to pay. The money falls out of the bags. The hero says that he has no doubt in the correctness of his action. Looking at the merchant, the boy asks if he agrees to make a deal. Bradley, happily clenching his fist, states that even if the boy changes his mind, he will not return the money to him. The cart drives away from the two young goblins. The girl, still chained, asks the hero why he did this. The guy, kneeling on one knee, explains that he is the same goblin, and therefore they must help each other. The young man looks into the girl's eyes and asks her not to worry, assuring that she is safe now. She asks why the young man gave so much money. He replies that they were not his coins, so it would be strange to feel sorry for them. The girl, looking at the hero, asks again in amazement. Bradley brings bags of money into the cart. The guy thinks that this scoundrel always hid coins in the safe, which is inside the cart, and he learned about it while playing Fantasy Frontier. We see the iron safe in question. Goblin Girl gets into the cart. The hero thinks that this spirit of the heroine, which he called, has the skills of stealth and penetration, and he ordered her to get into the cart when he just started talking to Bradley. The girl had a task to take gold from the safe and bring it. Goblin Girl opens the lock. Looking into the safe, she sees bags of money there. The hero says that all this money was earned by criminal means anyway, so no one has the right to blame him. But the most important thing is that he will no longer allow slavery to exist in this world. The long-haired girl looks at the guy in amazement. Goblin Girl happily tells the fairy hanging in front of her that her master is just a great guy, and he made a very good joke when he told the old bastard that all this gold belongs to him. The hero extends his hand to the girl and asks if she can stand up. The little girl looks at the guy with wide eyes. The girl still has a huge iron ring dangling around her neck. She offers her hand to her savior and thanks him. The hero, turning to the fairy, asks her to take the girl to the village. The guy says that he himself, in the meantime, will go to the entrance exam at the Academy of Dark Magic. The young man turns around. He sees a bird above him. In front of him is a magnificent white building. The young man, whose face we see, declares that he must now earn his authority in this institution. The hero stands at the gates of the Academy of Dark Magic, which is run by Dial. The young man thinks that only those who are close to the aristocracy in status are accepted here. We see a young man with a purple sphere hanging over his hand. The young man knows that those with exceptional abilities are accepted here as an exception. Purple streams rise above the guy's hand. He thinks that, despite the fact that he is now just a low-level monster, the Academy workers could not ignore his abilities. The young man clenches his fist. He says that if he becomes the best in this educational institution, he will be able to meet its founder, Dial, and defeat this representative of the Great Seven. The hero walks along the cobblestone pavement. One of the Academy workers asks those who came to participate in the entrance exam to line up. A live queue forms in front of the entrance. The hero becomes the last one. Someone taps his back with a finger. In front of the young man is a pretty blonde, asking for forgiveness. Putting her hands to her chest, the girl asks if the guy has anything to eat, preferably something sweet. The hero looks under the hem of his coat and says that he will look now. The young man notices something. In his hands is a small bag, with a note from Lily attached, which says that she made this chocolate especially for her brother. The blonde snatches the bag from the hero's hands and thanks him profusely. The girl instantly swallows the contents of the bag. The hero is ready to burst into tears. Without noticing this, the blonde thanks the guy and says that in stressful situations she is always very hungry, and because of this her mana is quite unstable. The girl, smiling, says that her mana returns to normal if something sweet gets into her mouth. The hero's eyes emit an unkind glow. He says that it was his sister's chocolate. The blonde asks in bewilderment if she did something wrong. The girl folds her hands in front of her face and begins to ask for forgiveness. She says that she did not even think that it was something important for the guy. The hero looks at her angrily. Thoughts about his sister are spinning in his head, for the most part completely incoherent, but angry. The guy understands that worrying so much about the chocolate is too much. The blonde, putting her hand on her lush chest, promises to definitely return the favor. She says that her name is Letty, and asks what she can call the hero. He thoughtfully answers that he does not have a name. We see the eyes of the young man. He thinks about the fact that for some reason after his reincarnation he cannot remember his name. The blonde asks in amazement if the guy really does not know his name. We see the lower part of the young man's face. He thinks that lower monsters or slaves do not have names, so everyone around him will look down on him. The girl happily exclaims that in this case she will come up with a name for the guy herself. Looking at the young man enthusiastically, she says that the name Lime suits him, since he is a little greenish. The guy, looking sadly at his interlocutor, says that this is a very strange name. A smile appears on the hero's face. The blonde does not agree with him. She says that, in her opinion, the name Lime suits him very well. The girl happily exclaims that in any case she is very glad to meet him. The hero, smiling, declares that this is mutual. The young people are standing in front of the entrance to the academy. They hear an announcement that the entrance exam will begin soon, and the students must gather in the central square. Resolutely clenching her fists, Letty declares that they must give it their all. In front of us are two young men. The blonde says that this is the same damn goblin. He cannot understand what he forgot at the academy. People are standing in the central square of the academy. A guy in a suit calls the next candidate. The young people use spells. The examiner writes down the grades. Letty comes out next. Green energy glows under the girl's palm. With a wave of her hand, the girl easily breaks the target in front of her. Her competitors are amazed. One of them says that nothing else should have been expected from her, because she is, after all, the princess of the dark elf tribe. Red roses are visible around Letty. The hero looks at the girl in surprise, comprehending the information that she is the princess of the dark elves. The girl smiles happily. The guy thinks that you can't judge demons by their appearance, and tries to understand if he needs to change his attitude towards her. The young man thoughtfully rubs his chin. Letty, smiling happily, asks how the hero will evaluate her performance. Raising his left hand, the boy says that it was amazing and she will most likely easily pass the entrance exams. Letty happily throws up her hands and says that she will definitely do it. She says that she is very happy to hear praise from a boy. We see someone's boots. A blonde man in a lush suit says that he sees only some kind of non-entity. It is reported that in front of us is the vampire Hage. The hero looks back at this guy in surprise. Hage points at the boy and says that he seems to have been a servant for Butch. He asks what this goblin is doing here. Spreading his arms out to the sides, the blonde asks not to tell him that the hero is also going to take the entrance exams. The boy turns away and sighs heavily. Letty, with her arms folded across her chest, angrily asks Hage if he has anything against it. The girl states that they really came to take exams. The hero looks at her in surprise, noting to himself that she voluntarily defends him. Letty states that he has no doubt that Lime is much stronger than the blonde. The guy looks at the girl in surprise, trying to understand where she got such confidence from. Hage looks at Letty over his shoulder with disdain, and says that she can bark as much as she wants, and soon they will have a chance to prove themselves in a real case. The girl looks at the unpleasant young man with irritation. Letty, looking at the hero, states that he must demonstrate something incredible to everyone. The young man sighs heavily. He tries to understand why he should prove something to anyone. The guy says out loud that he will try to do what Letty asks. She promises to root for the young man and asks him to make every effort. We see the hero's right eye. The guy understands that if he shows all his strength, the whole academy will simply blow up. There is a target in front of him. The young man, looking at his hand, remembers that he has long wanted to try the power received from the goddess. But now he will have to conduct training in self-control. The examiner, looking at the hero's outstretched hand, demands that he hurry up. The young man closes his eyes. He puts forward his index finger and gives the order to use the skill. A real wall of purple energy is visible in front of the hero. Clouds of white smoke cover the sky. A long and deep funnel is visible in the ground. The examiner drops the tablet and pen from his hands. The young man clutches his head. He understands that he went too far. Hage sits on the ground, his mouth wide open. Letty, jumping in front of the hero, shouts that it was magnificent, and she could not even imagine that the hero was so incredible. The boy rubs the back of his head in embarrassment, thinking that he couldn't control the power of the spell, but the test has already passed. He also understands that he accidentally used a high-level skill. Letty is leaning against the wall. It is said that this is happening during a break after the written test. The hero asks the girl why she is upset. Sadly closing her eyes, Letty says that she is always worried, since she has never been good at written exams. She asks how the hero is doing with them. The guy sadly says that he most likely passed the test. He remembers that the exam was on the game Fantasy Frontier. It was no different from the quizzes that were there, and most likely he should not have any problems. The boy looks up. Hage, raising his left hand, says that the goblin was just lucky on the magic test, so he should not stick his nose up. The blonde says that the guy simply cannot fully use magic. The hero, looking boldly at the enemy, says that he should take care of himself and not get into trouble. Hage asks again in surprise. He grabs his sword and shouts that he will never forgive the goblin. A magical formation is visible on the wall. From there comes an announcement that combat trials will soon begin, and the exam participants must go to the central square. Letty looks up in surprise. Hage sheathes his sword and says that the hero is very lucky. Hage, looking at the hero, says that he must remember this meeting and draw the right conclusions from it. The young man silently looks at the blonde. The examiner, holding a tablet, says that it is time for combat trials, and this time the exam will be different from those held before. Applicants for admission stand in front of the speaker, who declares that if before the academy organized duels in a one-on-one format, now the participants will fight in groups against a common enemy. The young men look at the representative of the academy in amazement. A question is asked about what this could possibly mean. Hage, with his arms folded across his chest, looks to his left. Now Letty is in front of us. The hero calmly looks at the examiner, who states that the founder of the academy, Lord Dial, made the corresponding decision. In front of us is the muscular back of the character just mentioned. The young man says that, in his master's opinion, only the chosen ones will be able to stand up to one formidable opponent. We see the hero and Letty. A huge grate rises. The young men are terrified. They see glowing yellow eyes in front of them. A black paw with yellow claws falls to the ground. We see a yellow eye and fangs. A huge dragon appears in front of the applicants. The hero looks up in fear. He understands that in front of him is the storm dragon, which appears closer to the end of the game, and as a boss. The young man is scared. He does not believe that he must defeat this creature right now. The hero sees a storm dragon in front of him, who, as far as he knows, appears closer to the end of the game as a boss. The guy has a bewildered expression on his face. He does not understand how the academy can force young people to fight such a strong opponent. The applicants are trying to escape from the formidable monster. Electric discharges sparkle near the monster's mouth. The hero notices something. The storm dragon spews a powerful stream of flame. The young people look around in fear. A bright flash occurs in the central square. The exam participants are lying on the ground. Hage says in fear that he has never even heard of anything like this. Letty, clenching her fists, looks at the dragon. She rushes to attack. The hero tries to shout to her. The blonde decisively shouts that she will definitely pass this exam for the sake of all the inhabitants of this kingdom. Putting her hand forward, the girl uses the wind shackles skill. Letty prepares to release the wind arrow at the monster. Green chains are visible on the dragon's neck. The girl looks at the enemy in fear. He shakes off the chains that were entangling him. In front of us is the mouth of the monster. Letty closes her eyes in fear. It seems to her that she is about to die. The girl notices something. The hero stands with his right hand extended forward. Purple circles appear in front of the storm dragon. A glow of the same color is visible next to the guy. The young man looks back at Letty and asks if she is safe. She confirms that she is okay. The hero asks if she can wait a little longer. Putting his fingers out in front of himself, the guy says that he will quickly sort everything out. Letty looks at him in surprise. In front of us is the mouth of the dragon. The monster, raising its head, makes a deafening roar. We see the horn of this creature. The hero looks at the dragon in bewilderment. The monster is struck by a very powerful electric discharge. Electric discharges sparkle around the left side of the dragon's body. The monster approaches the hero and Letty. Its fangs glow brightly. A powerful explosion occurs. The hero picks up Letty in his arms and flies up. He says that it is problematic to fight this creature while it is in a state of super armor. Letty, looking around in amazement, realizes that she is high in the sky. She asks the hero if they are really flying. The hero, who is holding the girl in his arms, apologizes and says that all this may take a little longer than he promised, after which he suggests that she wait in a safe place. Letty screams in fear. We see her tiny figure. Letty falls on some green mass. It turns out that this is the spirit of Melter Goblin jelly summoned by the hero. The girl cannot understand what is happening at all. It is reported that this is an amorphous creature whose body is a conductor, which is very weak in an arid environment, and died as a result of a global drought. Clouds of dust rise above the dragon. A giant horn protrudes from the monster's forehead. The hero looks at the dragon, and it looks at him. Purple streams are visible around the guy's body. He is using the level 54 dark magic skill acceleration. The hero asks the monster if it is ready. The guy rushes to attack. The dragon spews a stream of flame. The fire seems to be about to overtake the hero. Fireballs are visible above the monster's head. The guy quickly moves in the air, leaving purple traces behind him. The storm dragon opens its mouth. The hero appears next to it and kicks it. The monster flies to the side. The young man hangs in the air, arms outstretched. A bright flash is visible not far from him. An explosion occurs. Clouds of smoke are visible next to the young man. Hage runs between the columns. We see the dragon again. The hero's face is very serious. He tells himself that if he does not give it his all, he will lose. The monster's fangs reach almost to the eyes. The storm dragon lifts its head and roars deafeningly. A purple stripe is visible next to the monster. The hero appears behind Hage. He grabs his weapon, declaring that he will borrow it for a while. The blonde turns around in surprise. The hero lifts his head high and uses the elemental coding skill of level 49. Powerful electrical discharges are visible above him. The guy has a huge sword in his hand. The young man, whose face we see, uses the dark sword and lightning strike skills. A bright white discharge is visible in the air. We see the dragon's eye. Stones fly upward. The dead monster lies on the ground. A system window appears in front of the guy. It is reported that the Reincarnated one has completed the Awakening Level 3 quest and received new black magic spells. In addition, he was given a new item as a reward for killing the dragon Mjolnir. Someone is watching the hero from behind the column. The examiner, adjusting his glasses, says that one should be careful with this young man and report everything to the director. Hage looks shocked. Letty sits on the green mass with her mouth open. The hero, adjusting his hood, says that the exam seems to be passed. In front of us is the academy building. It is reported that this is happening several hours later. The hero and Letty look up. In front of them is an announcement that, based on the results of the 8,349th entrance exam, candidate number 153, a nameless goblin, and candidate 154, Letty Luelf, a dark elf, were accepted to the academy. The girl, smiling, says that the reasons for accepting the hero are understandable, since he single-handedly defeated the storm dragon, but she does not understand at all why they chose her. The hero, looking at the girl, explains that she was probably accepted because of the attack on the dragon, since Letty rushed at the monster alone without any fear. The girl, smiling, says that now she understands, and she does not object to it at all. The young man asks why in the notice she was designated as some Letty. Putting her hand to her chest, the blonde answers that her name is very difficult to pronounce, so she shortens it to Letty. The girl hits her hand with her fist, remembering something. She takes a pen in her hand. Letty writes something. The girl crosses out the inscription nameless individual, and writes the name Lime over it. Smiling happily, the blonde says that this is much better, because, after all, she did not give the guy this name for nothing. The young man, smiling, scratches his cheek. The young people are standing in front of the guy in the white cloak. Letty happily clenches her fists. She says that now she feels that this is an official procedure. The young man, smiling, declares that he brought grimoires and robes of new students. The young man puts on a black cloak. The guy from the academy states that there is also a dormitory at the school, but before enrollment, the hero and Letty will have to pass the final test. The hero asks again in surprise. The guy, smiling, states that as a result, the level of darkness of each of the applicants will be measured, after which they will be distributed among the dormitories. The young man rolls out a rather strange object on a cart. The hero and Letty look at it in surprise. He, smiling, states that he is impatiently awaiting news about what classes the new students will be placed in. The students of the academy look at the guy and the girl with displeasure. One of them asks if these are really the ones who passed the new combat test. He is told that this exam was much more difficult than all the previous ones. One of the students turns to his comrades and says that it is not surprising at all that only 2 passed it. The students look at the hero and Letty with curiosity. One of them states that the rumors about the difficulty of the exam are probably greatly exaggerated, since such individuals were able to pass it. Letty, who hears these words, indignantly demands that the students shut up. The hero stops her with his hand and asks her to calm down, since all this is not important now. Letty is angry, but agrees to calm down if the hero asks her to. The guy, raising his right hand, asks what exactly the last test is. The academy employee points to the cylinder, which he rolled out on a wheelbarrow, and says that everything is extremely simple. You just need to stand in front of the device, and it will analyze the level of magical energy of the subjects. We see a hand lying on the screen. The guy says that if the young people touch the device, the result will be displayed directly on the display. We see how it should look ideally. The guy, clasping his fingers, declares that this is a completely new device that was brought from their unrivaled school, and this is the latest achievement of magical art. The guy, smirking, declares that for this very reason the hero and Letty will not be able to deceive him. Raising his left hand, the academy worker offers to start with Letty. The girl agrees to be the first. She stretches out her hand. A blue system window appears above her head. The young man looks at the result in amazement and asks what the hell is this. The academy representative sees a system window, which reports that the girl, who belongs to the dark elf race, has very high intelligence, strength, dark energy and innate darkness. The hero thoughtfully rubs his chin. He thinks that he sees something like a status window in front of him, and the girl really has a lot of dark energy, which indicates her excellent potential. The guy thinks that if Letty continues to develop, she will become an excellent warrior. The system reports that, based on the analysis, a suitable class was found for the girl, and she can move into the Lucifer dormitory. The students look at Letty in amazement, standing in front of the glowing device. One of them says that the Lucifer dormitory is one of the best in the entire academy. The second says that she is still a princess of a rare race of dark elves, so there is nothing surprising in this. The representative of the academy, standing next to his device, calls the next one, whom he calls Lime, The guy says that he is ready. With a heavy sigh, the young man looks at the hero and says that he will have to, according to the rules, evaluate him. Although everything seems obvious, and the goblin in front of him cannot show anything special, the hero remembers that he has not seen his parameters since his reincarnation. The young man puts his hand on the screen. He is very interested in how much his abilities have increased. He also decides to release some dark energy. The hero's hand lies on the device. The academy representative looks at what is happening in fear. He says that this is some kind of devilry. The device breaks into many large pieces. Letty covers her head with her hands. The hero steps away from the destroyed device. The guy covers his face with his hand and mentally curses. The academy worker, whose hands are shaking, shouts that Lime broke his meter, which cost no more and no less than 500 gold. The hero apologetically rubs the back of his head and asks if this could be some kind of glitch. The academy representative says that this simply could not be, since the device was the pinnacle of modern technology. He does not understand what he should now tell the director. The hero, apologizing, says that he did not mean to break anything. The young man angrily points his finger at the young man and declares that he will not receive any grade, so he will be sent to the lowest ranking dorm. Letty clenches her fists in anger. She cannot believe what happened. The hero looks very upset. He thinks that if he gets into the worst dormitory, he will not be able to quickly rise to the rank of cadet. In front of us is a group of young people, among whom a guy with a purple tie stands out. Lime looks down sadly. He understands that he must come up with some way that will help him rise up. In front of us is the lower ranked dormitory of the Seer Academy of Dark Magic. In front of the guy hangs a blue system window. We see the eyes of the young man. He thinks that now his goal is to become an elite cadet, and in this case he will be able to easily request an audience with Dial. The hero wants to get rid of this king first of all, and then seize the territories under his control. In front of us is a map of the Dial Dominion. Lime thoughtfully rubs his chin. He thinks that now he is in the worst dormitory, and this is very sad. The guy is trying to understand what can make the academy recognize his abilities. The hero remembers Letty, who waves to him and says goodbye until tomorrow. Lime thinks that he can talk to her about the transfer, since she got into the most prestigious dormitory. The hero pays attention to something. On the table lies a book with a blue cover. The young man, smiling, looks at the piece of paper and says that this is exactly what he needs. The girl, next to whom a pen is visible, asks if the hero really wants to apply for participation in the magic tournament. He shows her the piece of paper and says that this is exactly why he came here. In front of us are students of the academy, two of whom are fighting each other. Lime knows that once a year the school sponsors a magic tournament to identify the strongest student. This competition is a long-standing tradition, and only students with outstanding abilities can take part in it. The winner receives a magical treasure prepared by the founder of the academy, who is Dial. Here we see the profile of a young man. Lime thinks that he can request an audience with Dial not as a cadet, which he still needs to become, but as the winner of this tournament. The girl at the reception desk says in surprise that Lime seems to be in the academy for only the second day. The guy confirms this. The girl, looking at the boy in amazement, asks if he understands that this can be very dangerous. She says that this is why first-year students are not recommended to participate in this tournament. Lime calmly says that he knows everything, but he will not refuse to participate in the competition. The girl, still with the same sad expression on her face, asks the guy to wait a few minutes. She writes something on a piece of paper. In front of the girl is visible a blue crystal. She says into it that some strange student has come who wants to sign up to participate in the tournament. The young man, who is wearing glasses and a purple tie, says that this is most likely the boy who broke the meter. The girl, covering her mouth with her hand, asks if she should refuse this student. The guy, smiling, answers that no way, and she should let him participate in the competition. The girl says that she understands everything. She takes the piece of paper from the hero and says that she will accept the application. The girl holds the document in her hands. She explains that, as stated in the rules, Lime voluntarily takes the risk, and all responsibility for what can happen at the tournament falls only on him. The hero answers that he knows about it. Lime looks down sadly. He thinks that, apparently, he found a faster way to achieve his goal, and that Dial should wait just a little longer. In front of us is the Lucifer Academy of Dark Magic Dormitory, namely its female half. The girls are washing in the shower. We see the legs of one of them. Water flows down the body of the beauty. She happily washes her hair. The girl closes the tap. Letty dries herself with a towel. She is incredibly happy that she met Lime at the entrance exam. The blonde remembers how she flew into the air with the boy, and understands that he saved her life, just like a prince. Then Letty remembers her fall from a height. She thinks that right after the hero saved her, he threw her down. Letty is sitting in a chair. She does not understand why. When she sees the boy, she gets a feeling that he is about to do something great. Letty looks thoughtfully ahead. She realizes that she cannot take her eyes off Lime, and does not want to stay away from him. The blonde brings her hands to her face. She asks herself why her heart suddenly began to beat so fast. We see a chimney on the roof of the Seer Academy of Dark Magic Dormitory. The hero is lying on the bed. He opens his eyes. Lime lands on the roof. Goblin girl, whom he just summoned, is visible behind him. She says that she is at her master's complete disposal. Lime asks Goblin Girl to use her penetration skill and sneak into the academy. The hero, looking at the girl in surprise, asks why she is in a student uniform. She replies that she likes to get into character. Lime sadly says that this is Goblin Girl's personal business, and specifies that she must infiltrate the academy and keep an eye on everyone there. The girl happily declares that her master can trust her. Lime, looking up, says that someone else will appear here soon. He sees a fairy with a long braid. The girl says hello, after which she says that she delivered the slave girl to the Goblin village, where the hero's sister will look after her. We see the character in question. Lime happily thanks the fairy. The young man looks at the winged creature. He apologizes for not letting her rest after the road, and asks her to draw him a map of the academy. The fairy looks at the guy in bewilderment, and asks him to clarify the technical task. He declares that it should be something like a diagram. The fairy, putting her left hand to the side, says that it should have been formulated this way from the very beginning, and she will provide what the hero needs in the shortest possible time. The winged creature, looking at the hero, asks what he is going to do. Lime, dressed in a black cloak, says that he wants to go to the academy. There is a moon hanging over the building where the young man is going to infiltrate. The hero says that it is time for a secret mission. Lime climbs the roof of the Tower of Directors of the Dark Magic Academy. It is reported that he is using the skill Dark Material Camo level 45. The figure of the hero is covered by a purple dome. The young man understands that the current level of proficiency in this skill is enough only for partial invisibility. Lime finds himself next to a window. He looks into it. People are sitting at the table. In front of us is an old man with a gray beard. It is reported that this is Dean Weskier. Now we see Mylane, who is responsible for holding a magic tournament. We saw the third character earlier. It is reported that this is Professor Eddie. The last one shown is Gaia the Dragonian, the student council president. Eddie, adjusting his glasses on his nose, states that Lime is a threat. He throws a paper on the table and states that no one really knows what this new student is capable of. According to him, the guy does not fit the culture and traditions of the academy at all, so he does not belong here. Weskier looks at Mylane and asks in surprise if this guy really managed to defeat the storm dragon that was released to deal with all the newcomers. The girl replies that this is exactly what happened. She states that it was supposed to be like this to gain a reputation as a prestigious academy. But everything went down the drain because of this young man. Weskier thoughtfully says that Lime must have some kind of extraordinary power. The professor, pounding on the table, shouts that their students must have not only strength, but also dignity to be called demons from noble families. Eddie angrily says that if they allow trash like this goblin to be in the school, they will not be able to look the great founder of Dylil in the eye anymore. Weskier, folding his arms in front of him, asks if this is the reason Eddie allowed the goblin's application to participate in the magic tournament. Mylane, covering his face with a fan, praises the old man for his witty words. Eddie says that, in the end, the students are given complete freedom of choice, and they decide for themselves whether to live or die, and at the tournament, all sorts of unforeseen incidents often happen. Weskier, sighing heavily, says that his subordinates are still as crazy as they always were. Mylane, looking at the indignant professor, says that they are talking about a goblin who should not have even been allowed to take the entrance exam. But if this did happen, then it would be reasonable to impose some restrictions on him. Eddie, whose top of his head we can see, shouts that if no one wants to protect the glorious traditions of the academy, then he will do it. Lime, who is watching the discussion through the window, thinks that initially it was said that everyone has a chance to enter the academy. But all this is meaningless if the educational institution is run by shameless bastards. We see the old man's left eye. Weskier strokes his mustache. He gets up from the table, declares that he understands the complexity of the situation, and gives Professor Eddie permission to do what he thinks is right. Weskier says that it's time for him to sleep. Mylane, looking back at the closing door, asks Eddie if he thinks the old man really understood everything. She asks him not to tell her that Weskier has started to go crazy. Eddie tells Gaia, who is standing behind him, that he will change the tournament bracket so that Lime will meet a representative of his race. The professor looks at the guy with a crazy look and asks him to arrange an accident to protect the dignity of the academy. Gaia sullenly says that he understands everything. We see the young man's right eye. He thinks that Dragonian suits him just fine. The hero frowns in front of him. He understands that he has a worthy opponent. Mylane, hiding behind a fan, says that she cannot believe that a representative of the nobility is trying with all his might to destroy some goblin. Eddie leans furiously on the table. He says that this is not a joke at all. Lime, adjusting his hood, thinks that what he saw was very unexpected in all respects. The young man disappears. He is standing on the roof next to Goblin Girl. The girl, touching her long ear, says that we can summarize. We see bookcases. Goblin Girl says that in the library behind the far shelf she found a passage that leads to some kind of dungeon. The fairy is holding a scroll in her hands. She says that this is a map that shows the area from a bird's eye view. Lime takes the scroll in her hands, thanks the girls and suggests ending the conversation. The guy looks to his right in bewilderment. In front of us is a white sword. It is raised above his head. The blonde in a white shirt actively waves his weapon. Lime says thoughtfully that it is amazing that someone is training so late at night. The fairy says that this guy has been here since she started drawing the map of the academy. According to her, he is a kobold, another representative of the lower race, and he lives in the same dorm with the hero. Lime says that he understands. The kobold continues to wave his weapon. The hero, smiling, says that it seems that he should not leave this academy in a hurry. Lime goes to his bed. He looks at the fairy and calls out to her. The winged creature lies in the middle of his bed. The guy asks in surprise if she is really going to sleep here. With a heavy sigh, the girl says that she is a cute little fairy and cannot sleep on the floor or, for example, on a chair. The fairy settles down on the bed in a seductive pose and asks if the hero wants to sleep with her and if she should try to seduce him. Lime, raising her right hand, tells the girl not to do stupid things, and that he is afraid of crushing her when he tosses and turns in his sleep. The girl's eyes are shining. Purple smoke is curling above the hero's head. Apparently, the fairy is noticeably increasing in size. Sitting on the bed, the beauty asks what the hero will say now. Lime looks at her in surprise. Standing in front of the bed, the young man asks the fairy to let him rest. The girl says that she was just joking. She assumes that if she seduces the guy, she will be forced to listen to boring lectures, and besides, Lily, the hero's sister, will be very angry with her. The fairy acquires her usual size and, stretching sweetly, wishes the hero good night. She snores, lying under the blanket. Lime moves the chair away. He thinks that before going to bed, he must summarize the results of his expedition. The hero examines the map. He thinks that tomorrow he will have a lot to do. Students are having lunch in the cafeteria of the Academy of Dark Magic. It is said that it is happening the next morning. Lime is eating soup. He sees Letty not far from him. The girl also notices him. She waves her hand in a friendly manner. The young man answers timidly, realizing that he should not sit down next to the girls from the most elite dormitory of the academy. Continuing to eat soup, the hero looks at a piece of paper. The young man thinks that there are 5 days left until the start of the tournament. A young man appears next to him. He asks permission to sit next to him. Lime does not object to this. A blonde man with long bangs, smiling, thanks the hero. Lime recognizes him. He remembers that he saw him last night training with a sword. The blonde man looks at the hero and says that he seems to live in the Seer dormitory too. The hero confirms this and admits that he is glad to meet him. The young man asks if it is true that the hero has applied to participate in the magic tournament. Lime replies that it is indeed so. Other students are visible behind the blonde. The guy happily says that he also wanted to take part in this competition. We see a hand. One of the students puts his hand on the blonde's shoulder and, calling him a kobold, asks who allowed him to eat here. Lime frowns at the big guy. The blonde, smiling, asks Nero if it really matters where he sat down to eat. The big guy, opening his mouth wide, declares that trash like this kobold should not enter the cafeteria, and that he can only be here if he is allowed to. The blonde sadly says that he does not know any such rules. Nero asks again irritably. Lime grabs the bastard by the arm. The young people look at each other. Nero asks who else is this. The young man replies that he is a goblin, another weak demon, and, as far as he understood the guy, he should not be here either. Nero looks at the hero in surprise and says that if he is a goblin, then it means he is new to this academy. An evil smile appears on the bastard's face. He declares that he will now teach the young man all the rules, and with the help of his fists. 2 guys standing behind the thug giggle. Raising his right hand, Lime declares that Nero can try to enlighten him. The blonde jumps up from his seat and says that it is all his fault. Nero, standing in front of the hero, warms up his fists. Smiling, he declares that newbies like the goblin should learn to mind their own business. The thug strikes a blow, but it flies past the young man's head. Lime easily waves his hand. Nero looks at him in amazement. The blonde is also shocked to the depths of his soul. The hero grabs his opponent by the arm, thinking that the other students will think badly of him if he causes some kind of commotion here, and if he settles everything quietly, he will not stand out so much. Lime presses on the big guy's arm. He falls to his knees and asks what the hell is going on here. He demands that the hero leave him alone. The guys who came with the villain look at what is happening in shock. Nero screams hysterically, begging them to let him go. Lime removes his hand, which leaves red marks on the big guy's skin. Nero is on all fours, holding his arm. Lime looks him straight in the eyes and says that whoever wants can come to this cafeteria. The big guy raises his head and asks again in surprise. The young man's comrades call out to him. One of them says that he got involved with the guy who destroyed a dragon with one blow. Nero is shocked. His hand is on the floor. He tells his comrades that they are leaving. Pointing at the hero, Nero says that he knows who will deal with him. He says that the Breath of Flame faction has already taken aim at the guy. The villain, smirking, says that he is very interested in how long the hero will last against them. Lime sighs. The blonde comes up to him and apologizes for getting the boy involved in this matter. The hero tells the kobold not to worry about it. He tells the boy that he also applied to participate in the magic tournament, because he wants to test his strength, and if he succeeds, he will be able to stand up for himself in the future. The boy is holding a sword in his hands. The blonde, looking at his weapon, says that, of course, he understands that he hardly has any chance of winning. Lime looks closely at the boy. He says in fear that he completely forgot to introduce himself. The hero says his name first. His interlocutor answers that his name is Lute Arcadia. The hero's face shows amazement. He asks the blonde in shock if he is really that same Lute Arcadia. The kobold asks in bewilderment how the hero knows about him. A drop of sweat runs down the guy's cheek. He says that it is not important at all. Before us is the lower part of the young man's face. A formidable knight is visible behind the blonde. Lime remembers that Lute Arcadia is a guy who will hunt heroes in the future and will be the strongest warrior of the Order of Black Knights. Young people stand in front of the door. It is reported that this is happening in the Seer Academy of Dark Magic Dormitory. Lute says goodbye to his comrade. He says that they will see each other in class, but then calls out to the blonde. Lute asks in surprise what happened. Raising his right hand, Lime asks if he can join the kobold's night training. Lute asks in amazement how the hero knows about them. A joyful smile appears on the young man's face. He gives permission for joint classes, and says that it will be even better this way. The guy offers to meet tonight. The hero looks closely at the blonde and says that now he will say the most important thing. Lute looks at him in shock. We see a girl with a bouquet of flowers. Lime says that if he is not mistaken, the guy's sister is a nun, and she serves in a church in the domain of the demon Shano, one of the Great Seven. Lute asks in surprise how the hero found out about this. He replies that he heard some rumors. The girl walks along an alley between the trees. The hero says that soon she will go to the village bordering on human territory, as a missionary. The girl leaves traces behind her. Lime says that Lute should tell his sister that when she is sent on this mission, she must return home as soon as possible. And if the kobold does this, then he will pay for the favor that the hero did him in the dining room. The guy, looking closely at the blonde, says that he is obliged to repay for what was done for him. In front of us is the hero's right eye. Lime asks if Lute understood him. The blonde is amazed and declares that he understood everything. The hero waves and says goodbye to his new comrade. A fairy appears next to the guy. The girl folds her arms across her chest and says that the hero seems to have something in mind again. He replies that it is a completely trivial matter. Lime looks ahead thoughtfully, thinking that he can help the kobold change his fate, and if he fails, the death of his sister will force Lute Arcadia to go to the dark side, and this will be the worst-case scenario. The blonde stands in front of the coffin. Lime hopes to wake the guy while saving his sister's life. The academy building is visible behind the forest. It is reported that the action takes place several days later. Lime is standing between the trees. A small purple sphere is visible in his hand. He launches it at the target. The guy, thoughtfully looking at his hand, says that it should work. Lute holds a sword with both hands. The boy's eye glows brightly. With a loud cry, he rushes to attack. The blonde strikes. We see the impact mark. Lute happily shouts that he did it. Kobold, happily clenching his fist, says that he simply cannot believe that his sword skills are growing so quickly. Lime says that this is not surprising, since the guy trains hard. Lute is incredibly excited. He says that all this is happening thanks to his comrade's advice. The guy admits that Lime is good not only in magic, but also in the art of swordsmanship. He cannot understand why the hero was assigned to such a bad dormitory. Goblin, smiling, thanks the kobold for the compliment. Lute is reflected in the blade of his weapon. He says that tomorrow is finally the first day of the tournament. The blonde, wiping his sword, says that most likely this is their last training. Lute looks at his comrade in surprise. He says that the guy did an excellent job. While during the exercises he did not even sweat. Lime says that a positive attitude is his strongest weapon. The hero states that after training with his comrade for a couple of days, he realized something, namely that Lute has not yet revealed his true potential. The blonde asks again, upset. In front of us is the hero's right eye. Lime says that potential is usually awakened as a result of a strong emotional shock. For example, if the kobold feels pain that he does not want to experience again, the hero assures that he does not want Lute to go through something like that, but he can live without it, without revealing all his capabilities. Lime snaps his fingers. Lute, smiling, says that he did not quite understand his comrade. The hero, sighing heavily, says that the blonde should not bother his head, and asks him to just close his eyes for a while. He agrees to do so. Lime puts forward his right hand and uses the dark magic skill analysis. The youth's eyes emit a purple glow. A green chain is visible behind the blonde. Lime understands that almost all of the dark element of the kobold is sealed, and now the guy seems to be trying to run at full speed, being bound by strong bonds. The hero imagines his comrade bound by chains. The guy looks at the blonde thoughtfully. It seems surprising to him that he was able to pump up his skills at all, having such limitations. Lime knows that if he gets rid of them, Lute will immediately become many times stronger and will be able to independently develop his potential. We see a broken chain and a grieving blonde. The hero understands that the kobold can become incredibly strong, even without experiencing the death of his sister. Purple energy flows around the hero's fingers. He calls out to his comrade. The young man's fingers acquire strange outlines. He calls out to Lute not to move. Lime looks at the blonde. He opens his eyes. The hero puts his hand on his comrade's shoulder and says that he is already finished. Kobold looks at his hands in shock. He just felt as if his body was pierced by something. Lime suggests ending the training and says that tomorrow will be a hard day. Lute, smiling, agrees with his comrade. In front of us is a round sports facility. The action takes place the next morning in the Coliseum. The spectators enthusiastically welcome the participants entering the arena. It is announced that the opening ceremony of the magic tournament is taking place. The hero looks forward. Now we see Lute. In front of us is Gaia, who looks very serious. Mylane, putting his left hand forward, announces that today the magic tournament begins. The spectators are wildly happy. The tournament manager advises the public to watch everything very carefully, so as not to miss a single moment of this great event. Mylane, smiling, says that this tournament will be opened by the founder of their academy, Master Dial. In front of us is a purple magic formation. We see a vague figure. Lime looks at the character he wants to destroy. A strange purple silhouette is visible behind Dial's head. The hero thinks that the magic used is very similar to the goblin summoning that he uses himself, but it is still something else. It is not teleportation magic, but rather a projection, like a hologram. Dial, with his mouth wide open, addresses his students, calling them the hope of the Demon Lord's army. He encourages them to demonstrate their abilities acquired in battles with other students. The silhouette of the academy's founder trembles. Dial declares that there is only one rule in the tournament: if a participant has no strength left, he must surrender. The participants in the competition joyfully raise their hands. Letty looks down a little sadly. Dial's silhouette is visible next to the column. The hero thinks that the persecution and high taxes that Dial levies have caused the decline of the goblin village. The guy looks with hatred at the owner of these lands, thinking that he will win the tournament, and will definitely kill this adversary. The hero, standing by the wall, is looking at some paper. This is the tournament grid. Lime sees that 128 students are participating in the competition, which means that in order to reach the final, he needs to win 6 fights. The hero knows that he should not have problems with endurance, so he decides to give it his all from the very first fight. The young man looks closely at the sheet of paper. He wants to know who his first opponent will be. Someone brings a glass to the young man's head. The people around him look at the guy in bewilderment, who shouts that he is very cold. The hero flies back and falls on his butt. He asks what is going on. Letty, who is holding 2 cocktails, laughs happily. She says that she had no idea that Lime was so noisy and timid. The guy and the girl are sitting on a bench. The blonde says that she saw her friend in the tournament participants area, started calling him, but he simply ignored her. Lime makes an excuse that it was very noisy, so he did not hear the girl. Letty says that she is not satisfied with this excuse, but she is very glad that they were able to meet. The blonde brings a straw to her mouth and says that she always thought that only seniors can apply for participation in the tournament. Lime thoughtfully replies that this is just a misconception, because he is still participating in this competition. The girl, sipping a cocktail, says that she understands everything. The hero, who does exactly the same thing, thoughtfully asks what the girl doesn't like. She replies that everything is fine, but she is worried that Lime will have to fight against the strongest fighters of the academy, after which she calls the guy a very strange guy. Lime looks at the girl in surprise. She asks what kind of look it is. The guy, smiling, asks not to pay attention to him. He thinks to himself that if he told Letty that she is strange, she would be very angry. The blonde, puffing out her cheeks, looks at her comrade and reproaches him for behaving just like an adult. We see the girl's eye. She remembers something. Letty hands the guy a small bag and asks him to take it. The hero looks at what they give him in surprise. Judging by the expression on his face, the young man understands what it is. There are chocolates in the bag. Lime remembers Letty eating the sweets his sister made. He asks if the girl decided to pay back the debt for that day. The blonde's hands are on her lap. She says that she felt really bad then because she ate something that was dear to the guy. Lime asks if she made those candies herself. The blonde, putting her hand on her chest, admits that this is indeed the case. But the guy should not take it wrong. She says that this is just her way of apologizing for what happened, so the hero should not have any extraneous thoughts. Lime asks what the girl is talking about. Letty covers her face with her hands, realizing that she buried herself even deeper. She screams that she did not mean it at all. The hero, looking at the candies, says that he has no idea what upset the girl so much, but he is very grateful to her, and he is very pleased. The young man thinks that it is very good that there are some human feelings in this game. Letty looks at the hero and calls him an idiot. In front of us is a clock. The blonde declares that it is time for her to leave. She holds out her fist and wishes her comrade good luck. Lime touches the girl's fist with her own. He waves his hand goodbye and leaves. Letty blushes and says that her heart has started beating very fast in her chest again, and she does not understand why this is happening. A huge number of spectators are sitting around the round arena. It is announced that the first round of the magic tournament is beginning. In front of us are magic formations. The host calls on the spectators to welcome the participants of the first round. The hero is standing next to the wall. The host announces that a goblin named Lime from the Seer dorm is called to the ring, who, breaking all traditions, is participating in the tournament. Having been enrolled in the academy only a week ago, the guy is introduced as a student who knows no fear. In front of us is a horned young man. The host of the event announces him as Orphan Escudo, a Dragonian from the Lucifer dorm and the Breath of Flame faction. The girls in the stands excitedly greet this participant. One of them shouts that the guy looks great as always. The second calls for him to smear the damned goblin. Mylane, covering her face with a fan, asks Eddie, who is sitting next to her, if he really puts a second rank holder against a newbie. The professor replies that this is quite natural, since he is not going to joke. Wesker calmly watches what is happening. The judge, looking at the hero, asks if he is sure that he does not need a weapon. The guy replies that everything is fine, and he can cope without improvised objects. Orphan, smiling, says that he seems to be underestimated here. The judge asks not to engage in unnecessary conversations. He stretches his left hand to the side and gives the command to begin the duel. White stripes are visible in the air. Orphan promises to finish off the enemy in an instant. Red translucent wings appear behind the guy. He uses the Dragonian form, Wyvern skill. The guy's female fans look up in shock. One of them says that Mr. Orphan immediately used his trump card, which means he is going to finish off the goblin as soon as possible. Dragonian unleashes a stream of red energy on the hero, using the skill Elemental Coating level 20. Orphan, putting his hand forward, angrily shouts that he will turn this bastard into ashes. Lime raises his left hand, thinking that the enemy is using a piercing attack, and this is very boring. A crack appears near the guy's leg. Chains are visible around the hero. They are wrapped around his legs. Green branches, in turn, curl around the chains. Letty asks in amazement, what is this? Orphan smirks, thinking that he never said that he would fight fairly. The enemy's hand is visible above the hero chained to the ground. Orphan loudly shouts that he will now finish off the goblin. Lime looks up. The hero's leg is wrapped in chains. Lime looks over his left shoulder. He sees a girl raising her index finger. It is reported that this is Rinu, who ranks third in the Breath of Flame faction hierarchy. Cracks appear on the chain. The hero thinks that the green dragon form that Rinu has allows her to control all plants. Orphan dives at Lime. He shouts that a smart person always comes to battle prepared, so he will now kill the goblin. In front of us is the hero's left eye. We see a trace of a powerful blow. Orphan's fans joyfully shout that the guy managed to win. Letty screams out the name of her comrade in fear. Stones fall onto the arena. In front of the hero's face is visible the demonic sword Mjolnir. With this weapon, the young man blocks the blow that Orphan deals him. The Dragonian, with his mouth wide open, shouts that this is simply impossible. Lime looks out from behind his sword. The guy finds himself above his opponent. He hits him on the back of the head with the handle and slams his head into the ground. Lime approaches the horned guy lying on the ground. He looks at the judge and says that his opponent seems to have passed out. The young man asks if this means that the fight is over. The spectators in the stands joyfully raise their fists. Lime is declared the winner. Eddie and Mylane look at the arena in shock. Wesker thoughtfully says that Lime hides it well, but his level of darkness is already at the SSS rank. Letty joyfully raises her hands and shouts that it was incredibly cool. The hero walks along the pavement. He is very happy that he won in the first round. The guy notices a girl with purple hair. It turns out that his sister Lily and the slave he bought from the merchant are standing in front of him. The fairy hanging next to the hero's head explains that the girls really wanted to see his fight, so she dressed them up as students so they could watch the duel. Lily, happily clenching her fists, tells her brother that he was just incredible and looked really cool. Lime pats the girls on the head and says that he is very glad that they are okay. Lily hands the hero a red package. The boy looks at the gift in bewilderment. Lily says that she and Nya had to work hard to bake it. Lime opens the package and sees a pie. He looks at the little girl with green hair and asks if her name is really Nya. The boy, smiling, thanks both his sister and the former slave. Lily, happily clenching her fists, shouts that her brother will succeed and wishes him luck in the next fight. The boy promises to definitely win it. Lime is standing next to the table in the waiting room. He understands that it is time for the second duel. Lime looks around, noticing something. A girl with a bandage on her arm screams that something bad has happened, and the one who was with the hero just recently suddenly lost consciousness. Lime asks again in amazement. Young people run out of the waiting room. The girl asks the guy to hurry. The hero sees an empty passage between the columns in front of him and assumes that they are talking about Lily. Lime runs out to the area between the trees. The girl shouts to him that it is here. The hero looks around in bewilderment, but does not notice anyone. Rinu appears behind him. She asks if the young man is wondering where he ended up. Lime looks to the right of himself. Green branches are wrapped around his leg. They reach the young man's chest. Lime says that he cannot believe that he fell into such a banal trap. He understands that he lost his vigilance after seeing his younger sister. A purple crystal is visible above Rinu's hand. The hero says that it seems like a member of the Breath of Flame faction is in front of him. The girl giggles. Green branches wrap around the boy's arms. Easily tearing them apart, he declares that such a trick will not work against him twice. Two dark figures are visible behind Rinu. She sarcastically says that she already understood everything. The hero is surrounded by horned students. Rinu declares that their only task is to detain the guy. Gaia comes to the forefront. He says that the tournament can go to hell, and right now the hero will fight against the entire Dragonian order. Pointing at the hero, he declares that no one will even notice if he dies here, and the best thing is that all this can be presented as an ordinary accident. Lime looks at his opponent. Rinu, smiling, asks if the boy has really forgotten how to speak out of fear. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Lime states that 3 minutes will probably be enough for him, and is asked again in bewilderment. The boy holds up 3 fingers and explains that he will deal with everyone gathered here in 3 minutes, otherwise he might be late for the next match. Gaia, smiling madly, asks the young man if the young man is joking. Gaia calls the hero a bastard and declares that he will not hold back. The boy, opening his mouth wide, shouts for Lime to prepare for death. Streams of purple energy are visible around the hero's feet. He replies that his opponents are the only ones here who need to prepare for something. Lime seems unfazed. He is going to use all his power. Looking at his opponent, the young man suggests that they finish everything before the second match begins. Flames are visible around Gaia. He uses the dragon form of Salamander. The lizard he has transformed into lifts his head. It is reported that the level 38 dark magic skill elemental coating is used. Gaia brings down a wave of fire on the enemy using the skill Conflagration Blast. Lime puts his left hand forward. Purple circles appear in front of him. It is reported that the guy is using the Suicide Veil skill. A powerful explosion is visible in front of Gaia. Lime stands with his left hand extended. The enemy flies up to him from behind, calls him an idiot, and reminds him that the hero's back is completely exposed. We see the trace of the blow. Lime defends himself from the blow with his demonic sword. A purple sphere appears in the guy's hand. He brings down a stream of energy on the enemies with the flare bomb skill. A cloud is visible above the young man's head. The lizard spews a fiery sphere from itself. Gaia screams that he is not finished yet. The hero, standing with a sword, is attacked from all sides. Someone screams that the goblin is surrounded and simply must die. We see the eyes of the young man. A powerful explosion is heard. The members of the Dragonian faction joyfully look at the place where it just happened. It seems to them that they succeeded. The hero in his cloak appears behind them. The guy delivers several blows. Gaia, transformed into a lizard, looks at what is happening in amazement. A stream of purple energy is visible next to Lime. A bright beam hits his opponents. They scream shrilly. The eyes of the horned young man turn white. We see the teeth of the lizard. The monster opens its mouth wide. Gaia calls his opponent an insolent bastard and uses the final form of the salamander skill. A huge lizard rushes at the guy standing with his back to it. Gaia shouts that he will kill the scoundrel now. Lime, raising his left hand, uses the dark boost skill. He delivers a blow and hits the lizard's lower jaw. The monster's head flies back. Lime raises his right hand to strike. White flashes are visible next to the hero. The guy brings his fist down on his opponent. Lime puts his elbow forward. The lizard roars deafeningly. He falls on his back to the ground. Gaia is lying unconscious on the ground. Lime is shaking his hands. He calls out to the one watching him from behind. Rinna looks at the guy in fear. He approaches her. Lime looks at the horned girl and asks how long it has been. Rinu, whose back of his head we can see, asks again in amazement. The hero explains that he wants to know how many minutes the fight he just participated in took. The girl looks at her watch and says that 2 minutes and 30 seconds have passed. Lime walks away from her, saying that this is just great, and he will make it just in time for the start. Sitting on the ground, Rinu watches the guy leave. The hero is standing in the middle of the arena. The host announces that the second round of the magic tournament is starting, and a goblin named Lime is participating in it. We see the young man's right eye. An announcement is made that the young man's opponent is Dragonian. The host stops short and says that it seems that this participant never showed up in the arena, and according to the rules, he is counted as a technical defeat. A purple magic formation is visible on the wall. The hero rubs the back of his head thoughtfully. He hears that the victory is awarded to him. The guy understands that, most likely, his opponent should have been one of those he just defeated. Mia and Lily, open-mouthed, look at what is happening. The hero's sister asks what all this means. The little girl with green hair answers that she has no idea. Eddie jumps up from his seat and screams indignantly. He does not understand what all this means. Weskier, rubbing his beard, says that he is very interested in what happened. Letty, joyfully clenching her fist, shouts that this is a victory. Lily and Mia congratulate each other. The hero's sister says that she does not know what happened, but it seems that Lime won. The judge again declares the hero the winner. The guy's opponents still have not shown up for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds. Eddie grabs his head with his hand. He hears once again that Lime is declared the winner. We see someone's legs. The hero thinks that only in the final did he get an opponent. The young man happily says that he knew that this guy would win in the other half of the tournament bracket. Lime stands opposite his opponent and says that he didn't even think that things could turn out any differently. Loot Arcadia comes out to meet him. The hero's eyes emit a purple glow. We see the top of the kobold's head. The system reports that he belongs to the Black Knight class. Lime pays attention to the last 2 columns of the system window. He thinks that if Loot has already acquired this class, then he is growing much faster than expected. The blonde, whose hand is on the hilt of the sword, says that only thanks to the hero was he able to go so far. Lime thinks that now this guy is able to protect his sister, and this is simply wonderful. The young man, smiling, says that he is also very happy to see Loot. He takes the hilt of his sword in his hand and offers to begin. The hero readily agrees. The kobold lets go of his weapon and says that he really wanted to say the previous phrase, but in fact he gives up. The young man raises his hands. Lime asks him again in amazement. Lute, smiling, looks at the hero, and declares that he is very grateful to him, so as a sign of gratitude he gives up the victory in this tournament. Lime sullenly says that he cannot accept this generous gesture, and wants to have a real duel. He states that if Lute wants to thank him, he must fight him. We see the lower part of the blonde's face. He again puts his hand on the hilt of the sword and asks if the hero is sure. Showing sharp fangs, the blonde warns that he will hardly be able to fight half-heartedly. The hero, smiling, says that everything suits him. The young man just wants to see how much the kobold has grown as a fighter. The young men look at each other. Lute shouts that he is ready. Lime replies that he is too. The referee gives the command to start the duel. We see marks on the ground. Stones are flying in all directions. The guys cross swords. They look at each other. Blades are visible in front of the hero's face. Lime feels very strong pressure from the enemy and understands that this is exactly what should be expected from the one who will become the strongest knight. Clouds of smoke rise around Lute. The guy is holding a sword in his hand. The young man's hair is fluttering. The hero puts his sword back. The guy thinks that the peculiarity of black knights is the ability to release a large amount of mana, and apparently, Lute uses this to enhance his physical abilities. The blonde's weapon leaves a bright trace behind. A bright flash is visible in front of the hero. Lime thinks that, nevertheless, Lute has not yet revealed his full potential. The hero pushes off the ground. He flies up to the enemy and strikes, but he blocks it. Lily and Mew watch the fight in fear. The hero's sister says that her brother has a very strong opponent. The girl with green hair encourages her savior and shouts that he will succeed. Letty looks at what is happening with wide eyes of surprise and mutters that this is simply incredible. Eddie jumps up from his place and, clenching his fist, shouts for Lute, no matter who he is, to just kill the goblin. Traces of blows are visible in the air. The opponents look at each other angrily. Their swords clash again. Pebbles are visible near the hero's leg. He holds out a purple sword in front of him. Lute joyfully shouts that the hero is caught and strikes. The blade of his weapon flies past the hero's head. Lime looks at the enemy's hand with a little fear. Having missed a blow, Lime prepares a counterattack. Fear appears on the kobold's face. The hero, who holds Mjolnir with both hands, shouts that this is the end. Lime prepares to strike with his sword. He does so, but Lute lets the weapon miss him. The blonde jumps back a few times. He looks at his opponent. The hero looks back at him and can't believe that the guy just dodged. The opponents stand opposite each other. Lime thinks that he likes this even more. Lute sadly looks at the broken piece of his sword. He throws the weapon aside. The hero looks at the guy. He also gets rid of his weapon. Lute looks at Lime in surprise. The guys stand opposite each other. The hero thinks that the Black Knights are very vulnerable to complex spells and illusions, and that is why he wants to fight the kobold face to face. Lime beckons the blonde with his hand, thinking that this will be a real test of skills. Lute, smiling, says that the hero seems to underestimate him. Lime raises his clenched fist, asking the guy to understand him correctly, and states that he has complete confidence in his opponent's abilities, but nevertheless, he wants to enjoy this fight with all his heart. Showing sharp fangs, Lute asks the hero not to be offended if he later has to regret his words. Yellow energy swirls around the young man. Lime, smiling, looks at his opponent. He answers him with an equally cheerful look. The young man runs to the door. We see traces of blows. Lime rushes at the blonde. The guys exchange powerful blows. We see the kobold's eyes. The hero's fist flies up to him. Lute thinks that all this is very strange. The battle is turning out to be quite intense, but he feels nothing but pleasant excitement. The fists of the opponents collide. The blonde thinks that he wants to defeat Lime, but at the same time he wants this fight to never end. Lime and Lute continue to fight. The kobold thinks that the longer this goes on, the more he wants to increase his power. The opponents' fists fly towards each other. We see a powerful flash. The hero jumps back. He carefully looks at his opponent. Streams of yellow energy are visible around Lute. The hero understands that the kobold is becoming even stronger. Lime, whose knee we see, rushes forward. He thinks that the situation can soon become very risky, so he wants to finish everything with the next blow. The hero rushes to attack and urges his opponent to show everything he can do. The kobold stands still. Lime misses the target. He looks back. The guy sees the back of his opponent. A yellow flash is visible near the hero's head. Lute strikes. We see the blonde's back again. Lime thinks that the guy used a high-level skill time stop, which means that he managed to awaken even more. The hero's foot hits the ground. Lime thinks that Lute managed to catch him off guard, but he is still a little stronger than his opponent. Purple energy rages around the guy. Lime decides to put all his dark magic into physical abilities. The guy stares at the enemy. He delivers a blow, which Lute defends himself from, crossing his arms in front of him. The hero's fist flies to the block put up by the enemy. The kobold smiles. He grabs the hero's hand and says that he caught him. Lute delivers a powerful kick to the hero's stomach. Surprise appears in the blonde's eyes. Looking at the enemy in amazement, he asks what is happening. The air is filled with purple energy. Lute understands that it was just an illusion. The guy looks to the right of himself. We see his frightened eyes. After making a few jumps, the hero delivers a blow. Lute is imprinted on the ground, spreading his arms wide. He falls to his knees. We see the eyes of the young man. Lime stands in front of the enemy lying on the ground. The hero looks at the kobold with sympathy. The judge announces that Lime is the winner of the duel. The guy approaches the blonde. He stops a meter away from him. Smiling, Lime says that Lute has become stronger. A small stone is visible next to the kobold's face. Lime stands in front of the teachers. It is reported that the award ceremony for the winner of the magic tournament is taking place. Mylane, bowing, congratulates the guy on his victory. Lime, smiling, thanks her. Weskier hands the young man a magnificent prize and declares that this trophy rightfully belongs to the hero. The gray-haired old man, looking at the guy, says that a little later he will be called to a personal audience with King Dail, who will present him with another award. Lime says that everything is clear to him, and he himself is happy that he can finally carry out his plan. The hero turns around, declaring that he needs to go. Weskier asks the guy to stop. He looks at the young man carefully, and asks him to answer who he really is. Lime turns around, looks at the old man in bewilderment, and asks what he means. Weskier states that he is a first-year student who won a magic tournament in which the strongest students of the academy participated. Eddie shakes his head in irritation and looks away. Lime looks at the old man, who states that the guy stands out from the rest. Mylane and Eddie look at Weskier in fear, who tells the guy that he probably already realized that they tried to kill him more than once at this tournament. We see students sitting in the stands. Weskier stands with his arms stretched out along his body. He states that those who plan to destroy the guy will be severely punished, and he himself will also suffer the same fate, since he did not stop them, although he should have. Weskier bows and sincerely apologizes to the hero for having to go through all this hell. Putting his hand to his chest, the boy states that the old man does not need to apologize. He assures that he fought to win this tournament, and is glad that he was able to challenge such difficult opponents. Lime looks up. In front of us is an old man. The hero does not remember this mage as a game character, but, in the opinion of the young man, Weskier makes a very pleasant impression. The spectators sitting in the stands watch what is happening. Weskier raises his hand and, calling the hero a boy, asks him to express his personal opinion on what this academy lacks. Lime, thoughtfully rubbing his chin, asks to let him think, after which he says that the academy declares that it accepts students of any race, but as soon as he found himself within these walls, he saw absolutely unacceptable things. The boy remembers how Eddie called him trash just because he was a goblin, and how his friend Lute was bullied. He tells the old man that the teachers were prejudiced against him because of his origin, and this unpleasant spirit permeates the entire academy. In front of us is the building of the school. Lime says that, in his opinion, the curriculum here is not bad, but discrimination is embedded in the very heart of the academy, from the dormitories that divide students by origin to the teachers who humiliate students based on race. Mylane and Eddie do not know where to look. Weskier, turning away from the boy, says that then for starters he will fire these two. The old man says that he will take the opinion expressed by the boy into account. The hero, smiling, looks at the teachers. They are ready to explode with anger. Eddie cannot believe that he will be fired, and Mylane generally thinks that she has nothing to do with it. Lute approaches the hero. Smiling, the blonde congratulates the guy on his victory. He thanks the kobold and says that he is very glad that his opponent in the final was Lute, who fought simply superbly. Lime smiles, the blonde thanks him. He tiredly stretches and says that fighting in the tournament was incredibly fun, and he is very sorry that this competition has come to an end. The hero agrees with him. We see the kobold's ear. Lime says that he would like to ask for something. Lute, happily clenching his fists, promises to fulfill any request. Lime puts his hands in front of himself to moderate the ardor of his comrade a little. The guy, standing by the wall, sadly declares that he is actually going to leave the academy soon. Lute asks again in surprise. He looks at the guy in bewilderment, and says that he recently entered here. Lime replies that he has his own reasons for leaving this educational institution. Looking down sadly, the young man says that he will definitely return, however. Extending his left hand forward, Lime asks the kobold to promise that he will be his ally for the rest of his life. The blonde, who has a bandage on his cheek, asks in surprise why he needs to be an ally if they are already friends. The guys stand opposite each other. Lime asks if the kobold can call him a friend if both King Dail and his entire retinue declare him an enemy. Lute asks why his comrades suddenly started talking about such things. Lime looks closely at the blonde and asks for a promise. The kobold looks at the hero in amazement. A smile appears on his face. The guy agrees to do what he was asked. He extends his hand and declares that he promises to always, no matter what the circumstances, be on the hero's side. The young men shake hands. Lute smiles. Lime happily thanks his comrade. The hero points his finger at the kobold and says that he must praise his comrade. He says that his sword skills have improved significantly, and that he only lost because he fell for a very clever trick. Lute recalls the episode of the battle with the hero, and says that in this case he will continue to train to be even better during their next fight. Lime waves his hand and leaves. He says that Lute is doing everything right. He waves his hand back and says goodbye until the next time. We see the academy building again. The hero passes under a high arch. The guy notices something. 2 girls run up to him. Lily and Mew grab the boy by the hands and start congratulating him. The fairy, with her arms folded across her chest, watches this cute scene. Lily says that she expected nothing else from her beloved older brother. Mew says that the guy was incredibly cool. Lily happily says that she will tell all the villagers how her brother defeated everyone in this academy. Mew tugs the boy's sleeve and asks if he will go to the village with them. The hero strokes the girl's head and thanks the little girls for coming to support him. Letty peeks out from behind a tree. She looks at the hero and the 2 girls with wide eyes, trying to understand who these children are with the guy, and what they are doing here, since they clearly cannot be students at the academy given their age. The girl clutches her head. She cannot understand why she is hiding behind a tree at all if she came here to congratulate Lime on her victory. The system reports that the Awakening quest has been raised to level 4, the range of magic skills has been expanded, and in addition, the unique fast travel skill has become available. Lime looks at the goblin village. The guy smiles happily. He says that he has not been here for only a week, but it feels like a whole year has passed. The young goblins notice the young man and express their admiration for him. The children with green faces are simply delighted. One of the girls calls the young man a savior. A small child asks to play with them. The kids crowd around the boy and bombard him with questions. Someone asks what those strange clothes are. He says that the outfit looks really cool. One of the kids notices that Lily and Mew are back too. Lime looks at someone. It is an elder leaning on his staff. The old goblin smiles through his mustache. The villagers are planting crops and happily eating food near their houses. The elder thinks that the village is thriving thanks to the hero. Lime puts her hand to her forehead and smiles. The elder thinks that the boy gave excellent advice on how to improve the quality of life in the village. The old man remembers his conversation with the boy, when he said that the land in the village is infertile, and the goblins do not have enough water and fertilizer to grow crops, as a result of which all the villagers are starving. The hero, looking at the old goblin, asks why they decided to settle here. His interlocutor, closing his eyes, states that they did not have much of a choice, since goblins are driven out from everywhere they go. The old man says that he does not even know what to do, but he is not eager to go in search of new land. Lime, looking closely at the old man, states that, of course, this should not be done. He reports that, having examined the village, he realized that its inhabitants have problems with agriculture, and it seems to him that this land was deliberately cursed by someone. We see a vague figure in a dark cloak. The old goblin, looking at the young man in amazement, asks if he is sure of his words. Lime notices circular formations on the ceiling and even in the sky. He tells the old man that seals are scattered throughout the village, defiling the land, sucking life out of it. The boy, raising his left hand, declares that, in his opinion, these seals were not placed by a goblin, and in order to properly farm, they need to be destroyed, returning fertility to the soil. The old goblin asks if the boy can destroy these seals. Lime, smiling, replies that, of course, he can do it, and asks to rely on him. A purple magic formation is visible above the boy's head. He thinks that in order to destroy all the seals at once, it is necessary to destroy the largest one hanging above the village. A card with a hexagram is visible behind the sad goblin's back. Lime thinks that, judging by what he saw in Fantasy Frontier, goblins have almost no magic, and it is unlikely that anyone in the settlement could know such a powerful spell. It seems to the boy that someone deliberately drove these creatures into a trap and forced them to live on this land without giving them any means of subsistence. The boy takes his sword out of its sheath. We see the magic formation again. The eyes of the young man are in front of us. He strikes. Lime destroys the seal. He looks ahead gloomily, thinking that whoever put these seals on will definitely pay for it. Lime stands near the old goblin. He promises that now everything will be fine with the village. Its land is no longer cursed, and the water source located near the village will soon be restored. We see the idyllic picture of the villager's life again. In front of us is the top of the hero's head. The guy thinks that the village has now begun to live in a new way. Lily, looking into her brother's eyes, says that since he came to visit them, he simply has to try their new dishes. The little goblins joyfully shout that they will eat, and they need to have a real feast. Lime, smiling, agrees to try what was prepared for him. The young man enjoys the food with the villagers. He thinks that his weekend has flown by. Lime eats with appetite. The guy remembers that the food prepared by Lily and Mew turned out to be incredibly tasty. In front of us are joyful goblins. The hero really liked the fact that the villagers were happy that day. The goddess sighs heavily, folding her arms across her chest. Lime thinks that this entity would be very pleased to see the joyful faces of the creatures she cares for. Sunbeams fall on the window. It is reported that the action takes place in the morning of the next day. Lily and Mew burst into the hero's room and shout that it is time for him to get up. The guy, smiling, greets the little girls. Closing his eyes, he says that it is time for him to return to the academy. The girls are very upset. They do not understand why the young man is leaving them so quickly if he arrived only yesterday. Lime replies that he has unfinished business at the academy. He thanks the little girls for their care, thanks to which he was able to have a good rest. Lily, smiling, says that there is nothing to thank them for. Mew wants to give the guy something as a farewell gift. Lime holds a bracelet with a green stone in her hands. He asks what it is. Miu, folding her hands in front of her face, replies that she made this decoration together with Lily. The hero's sister, clenching her fists, says that this is an amulet that will protect the guy from everything bad. Lime looks at her hand, on which an elegant decoration flaunts, and thanks the girls with all her heart. Lily exclaims that she is very glad that her brother liked the gift. Miu says that the guy does not have to thank them. The girls wave their hands to the young man, declaring that they will look forward to his next visit. The fairy hangs between the sashes of the open window. Looking at the hero with concern, she asks if he is really going to go to an audience with King Dial. She warns that this character will be very difficult to defeat. Lime asks the girl not to worry and says that he has a good plan. He says that he knows everything about this scoundrel from the skills he uses to his fighting style. In front of us is the left eye of the young man. Lime says that he must not lose to this demon. The fairy, thoughtfully rubbing her chin, says that all this is very strange, since she is almost sure that the goddess did not grant the young man the power of clairvoyance. The blonde creature, looking intently at the young man, asks how he knows about everything then. Approaching the very face of the hero, the fairy asks if he is really a goblin. Lime giggles. Smiling, he assures that he is the most ordinary goblin, and besides, it is time for them to have an audience with the king. In front of us is a castle that looks very ominous. It belongs to King Dial and is located on the magical continent. We see a character in armor and a horn helmet. It is reported that he sits in the throne room of the castle. Dial smiles wryly. He says that he is very interested in the goblin boy who won the magic tournament. The hero, smiling, says that before they go to King Dial, he wants to try out the fast travel skill. The fairy, who is hanging above him in the air, asks again in surprise. Lime says that she will see everything herself now, and offers her to reach into his pocket. The guy clicks on the system window. Only a faded blue stripe remains in the place where he stood. Lime finds himself in his room in the seer dorm. A blue magic formation is visible under his feet. The fairy, sighing, says that her master has also mastered teleportation, but for some reason she is not surprised at all. Lime smiles. He thinks that he can teleport to any place where he has already been in the game Fantasy Frontier. This was a common thing. But in this world you should not show everyone such a skill. The hero takes the scroll in his hands and explains to the fairy that he actually just needed to pick up an invitation to an audience. The guy, adjusting the hood on his head, declares that he can now set off. In front of us is a black castle that belongs to King Dial. There is a guard standing next to the gate. He notices something. The hero is standing not far from him. The guard puts his axe forward and demands that the guy stop. He angrily shouts that there is no place for lower demons here and the young man must get away. Lime shows him a paper with a seal and asks if they will let him in even with this. The fighter looks at the document in amazement. He bows low and, apologizing, says that the hero can pass. In front of us is the large hall of King Dial's castle. The hero, looking around in surprise, says that he expected nothing else from the castle of one of the 7 generals of the Demon King. The fairy, looking out of her pocket, asks if the guy will continue to admire the local architecture. Lime, with a winged creature hanging next to his head, states that the girl is wrong and knows it, and he is just trying to distract himself a little. The hero notices something to his left. A man in pince-nez bows and declares that the young man was expected here. He points to the door and says that the hero must enter it. Lime, clenching her fist, quietly tells the fairy that if everything does not go according to plan, she must fly away from here as soon as possible. The tiny creature hides in his pocket, having asked the hero not to say stupid things, since she can actually help him. Lime enters the door. Behind him, a drawing decorating the walls is visible. The guard standing at the central gate of King Dial's castle yawns. We see the back of a young man dressed in a black cloak. He asks for forgiveness. The guard looks at the guy in bewilderment, and asks who the hell he is. The visitor to the castle raises his left hand and says that the student who recently entered has prepared a gift for King Dial, but was apparently very worried and forgot it in his room. The young man asks to let him give the young man this item. The guard asks again in surprise. We see the lower part of the gate. The fighter lets the visitor through, warning him that he must do everything very quickly. The guy agrees. The young man smiles. In front of us is the throne room of King Dial's castle. The hero walks forward. His gaze is tense. Lime thinks that in the game this place was a battlefield with a dangerous boss. The young man walks along a magnificent purple carpet. The hero, smiling, thinks that he has finally reached his goal. The cruel King Dial, one of the generals of the Demon King's army, sits on the throne. He greets the visitor. Lime thinks that he often fought with this character in the game, but in real life it all feels completely different. The guy bows, thanks the king for the invitation and introduces himself as a student of the Academy of Magical Arts. The goblin Lime, Dial states that he knows who is in front of him. The king, who has a horn helmet on his head, says that he watched all the guys' fights at the tournament, after which he asks if he really is a goblin. Lime calmly replies that he belongs to this race. Dial, sitting on the throne, says that he did not even know that goblins could have such power. The hero replies that he trained every day to achieve such results. The king asks in bewilderment if the young man could really master the dark art on his own. He confirms this. We see the faces of the two interlocutors. Dial raises his right hand and says that this is not even bad, since in the future the hero will be able to join his army, which needs such strong fighters. The king says that, according to the rules of the tournament, he is obliged to give the winner a rare treasure. Dial points at something with his finger, and says that the hero can choose any item. Lime sees the cursed sword Arundite, the powerful shield demon's wall, and the magical armor chains of Hades in front of him. The young man looks at these artifacts thoughtfully. He knows that all these things are legendary weapons that could be knocked out of bosses in Fantasy Frontier, and at the same time the chance of their drop was extremely low. He thinks that he does not really need these items now and is trying to figure out which one to take. Lime says that he will take the sword Arundite. Dial, raising his right hand, says that this is good. We see this sword up close. The king holds it in his hands. He demands that the hero come up and take his reward. Lime approaches Dial. He stretches out his hands to the weapon. The king says that he forgot to warn the young man about something. We see the hero's eyes. Dial, on whose neck precious stones shine, says that when he became king, he ordered the servants to get a special stone to decorate the throne room. Lime looks closely at Dial. We see glowing stripes on the walls. The king says that the power of this stone is very simple. When a demon with bad intentions enters the throne room, the crystal begins to glow red. A drop of sweat runs down the young man's cheek. Arundite hangs over his hand. The hero's face is distorted in pain. He curses mentally. Lime makes a series of jumps back along the carpet. Blood drips onto the floor. Lime grinds his teeth in anger. He understands that Dial has lured him into a trap. The young man holds his left side, from which blood flows. The king holds a sword in his hand. He admits that the young man demonstrated excellent skill, managing to react so quickly to the blow. Dial, whose eye we see, declares that the guy is good at everything, but such a dangerous element must be destroyed immediately. He raises his hand up. Dial orders his soldiers to kill the villain. Red eyes are visible in the doors and under the floor. Monsters appear in front of the hero. We see a cyclops and several other creatures. The enemies are approaching the young man. The boy lowers his gaze. He is surrounded by monsters on all sides. Dial demands that Lime stand still. Smiling, the king says that the hero can throw a tantrum, begging for mercy, but for his evil thoughts he will face a punishment that is worse than death itself. The hero looks at his opponent. A smile appears on the boy's face. He asks to understand him correctly, promises not to beg for mercy, and then declares that since Dial knew about his evil intentions, there is no point in hiding them any longer. The young man, surrounded by enemies on all sides, boldly says that he came here for Dial's head. Lime declares that after the king's death, this entire territory will belong to him. The opponents look at each other. Dial asks if the boy is serious now. He confirms this. Lime, smiling, declares that his enemies may be hysterical, begging for mercy, but he will not spare them. Dial, grinning wryly, calls the hero an insolent boy. Lime suggests that the king attack. He opens his mouth wide and orders his subordinates to finish off the bastard. The monsters bare their teeth. The hero jumps. The figures of the monsters blur. The young man, holding his left side, asks the fairy to heal him. A purple sphere is visible next to the winged creature. The girl says that she would really like to heal the guy, but she cannot do it. The young man understands that all this is because of the bleeding debuff that Arundite imposes. Lime lands on a high column. He remembers that in Fantasy Frontier, entire raids were assembled to fight Dial, since one player could not cope with a huge crowd of monsters. We see two monsters. Another one climbs up the column. Lime thinks that in order to get to Dial, in the game it was necessary to deal with his soldiers. Raising his left hand, the young man smiles. Standing on the column, he brings down purple energy on his opponents, after which he says that although he is alone here, he has no less strength than an entire raid. A bright flash occurs. Judging by the eyes, the young man notices something. The column under his feet trembles. The guy understands that the monsters decided to get to him by destroying these structures. He jumps to another pillar. A winged demon appears behind him. The monster strikes. However, the hero is no longer on the column. Lime flies to another pillar. The guy looks back at the winged opponents. He puts forward his index finger and uses the dark worm skill. Purple threads entangle the winged demon. One of them firmly holds the monster by the leg. We see the face of the young man. Clouds of smoke rise around the column he is standing on. The monster gets hit in the face. There is a bright flash. The boy holds onto the purple thread, then he puts his right hand forward. Purple projectiles fly at the hero's enemies. The Cyclops looks at the boy in fear. The energy the hero uses destroys the monsters. Dial, gritting his teeth in rage, looks up. Lime, smiling, asks who he should kill next. Bright flashes are visible under the hero standing on the column. The monsters are dying. We see the fist of one of them. Lime stands over the corpses. One of the monsters approaches him from behind. The Cyclops raises his huge fist to flatten the boy. The hero jumps into the air. Dial, smiling, calls the goblin an idiot. In front of us is the boy's left eye. A huge monster is rushing at the boy. Lime puts his hand forward with spread fingers and uses the dark magic skill Fireball. Another flash occurs under the young man among the monsters. We see the hero's eyes. Lime lands on a column. and flying monsters are visible above his head. The boy jumps onto the next column. The monsters pursue him. Dial, grinning maliciously, says that the boy won't be able to jump like this forever. A horned monster with red eyes rushes to attack. Lime strikes him with a blow of his sword. A trace of the blow is visible behind the monster's back. It looks like the boy is tired. He holds his left side. Dial, grinning, asks the hero what happened to him and whether he accidentally ran out of breath. New enemies approach the column on which the boy is standing. Lime, smiling, says that he thinks this battle is coming to an end. Dial joyfully shouts that this is exactly how it is, and very soon he will finish off this damned goblin. The monsters climb up the column. The hero thinks that he deliberately avoided the attacks of these monsters. The guy puts his left hand to the side and says that the jokes are over. He asks what Dial will say about what is about to happen. We see the hero's boots. He jumps from one column to another. On one of them you can see the trace of the jump. The young man draws a familiar geometric figure on the columns with his movements. Lime closes his eyes and casts the dark magic spell Goblin Kinship. The boy closes his eyes and a magical formation appears under the monster's feet. The young man mentally casts a spell calling on the Goblin King to come to his call and fulfill his order, following the light from the impenetrable darkness. We see someone's legs. Their owner holds a staff in his hand. An old goblin with a crown on his head materializes in the air. Smiling, he declares that he hasn't stretched his old bones in the world of the living for a long time. Dial asks in surprise who else is this. The demon looks at the Goblin King standing in front of him and asks the hero if he really summoned just one old man to fight against all of his generals. Dial, whose eye we see, declares that the young man is simply ridiculous. The monsters surround the old goblin from all sides. Lime, smiling, says that this is a king who has his servants. The old man raises his staff above his head. One of the monsters covers his eyes with his hands so as not to be blinded. A fighter with green skin and an iron mask on his face appears from under the ground. There are more and more goblins. In the end, it turns out that the monsters are confronted by a huge army of these creatures. Dial looks at what is happening in amazement, and, not believing his eyes, asks if the summoned spirit was really able to summon someone else. Lime, raising his left hand, says that Dial thought to defeat him with the help of numbers, but forgot that he was dealing with goblins, who are strong only when there are many of them. The young man says that he is looking forward to the bloody massacre in which the army of demon generals and the army of goblins will meet. The enemies begin the battle. The red-eyed monster bares his terrible teeth. He strikes and hits one of the goblins on the head. The monster shows sharp fangs. Several more enemies appear in front of it. The battle continues. Goblins armed with swords advance on the enemies. Some of them fire from a bow. Arrows hit the winged monsters. The goblins, who are more numerous, begin to overcome the monsters. The huge cyclops is surrounded from all sides. The monster falls to the ground, pierced by many swords. Dial angrily says that his soldiers fell at the hands of some goblins. The warriors with masks on their faces calmly stand in their places. The Goblin King declares that he was glad to help his lord. The fighters dissolve into thin air. The same thing happens to their old commander. We see the hero's legs. Lime approaches the enemy who has risen from the throne and offers to move on to the second round. The young man raises his right hand. Dial angrily calls him a bastard and declares that he will make him beg for mercy. We see the king's leg. Dial, clenching his fists, declares that he has not killed anyone with his own hands for a long time. Lime, smiling, says that he will consider this a compliment. Powerful streams of energy rise around Dial. The hero looks at the enemy, thinking that he is very strong, and even the air in the hall has become heavier from dark magic. The young man puts his hand forward. He intends to show everything he can. A blood stain is visible on his clothes. The fairy is very scared. She calls the hero an idiot and reminds that he has not yet recovered and has not healed his wounds. We see a hand holding a sword. Lime thinks that he cannot heal because of the bleeding that Arondite causes. The hero, whose hand is still outstretched, realizes that he must defeat the enemy before his strength is completely exhausted. A bright flash occurs. The hero holds a sword in his hand. He deflects the blow that Dial inflicts. The king rests his hand on the ground. Lime blocks the blow with his weapon. Dial smiles predatorily. We see the horns of his helmet. The young man notices something. The king's palm generates a huge amount of fire. A yellow sphere is visible between his hands. The fire charge hits the hero's feet. A blade is visible next to the king's open mouth. Dial shouts that his enemy is caught. He throws a sword emitting a red glow at the enemy. The weapon hits the hero's hand. We see the guy's leg. Lime is holding onto his hand, in which a dagger is sticking out. The guy looks at the enemy in bewilderment, and cannot believe that he has 4 hands. He remembers that there was nothing like this in the game. In front of us is the young man's right eye. Lime thinks that when using fire magic, Dial throws a gravity cage at the target, from which it is simply impossible to escape. The young man finds himself inside the cage. He looks back over his right shoulder. A powerful fiery explosion occurs. Dial giggles. The king's face shows surprise. Lime takes the dagger out of his hand. His opponent asks in bewilderment if the guy is still alive and if he really is a goblin. Lime, putting his hand back, asks if it is really so hard to believe. The blood stain on the hero's clothes noticeably increases in size. The young man thinks that he has almost no strength left, since he did not expect the battle against Dial to be so difficult. We see the king's leg. He says that he even became curious how much longer the hero can hold out. Dial rushes to attack. Traces of blows are visible around the hero. We see the guy's face. Lime barely dodges another attack by the enemy. Dial continues to actively swing his sword. Lime looks at his opponent's blade in fear. He understands that if he does not reflect this attack, then he is definitely finished. In front of us is the young man's left eye. The guy falls on his back to the ground. His sword flies to the side. Lime punches the ground. A black cage is visible above his head. Blood is dripping down the boy's forehead. The hero throws the cage aside. He gets to his feet and looks at the enemy with anger. Dial, smiling happily, asks what happened and if his opponent is exhausted. The boy is holding a purple sword in his hands. The king says that he has just begun. Lime looks at the enemy in bewilderment, trying to understand what he is talking about. The king admits that he is a wonderful warrior who has not let his guard down for a second throughout the entire battle. We see that this character really has 4 arms. Dial says that the boy has been watching his enemy's every move and has been dodging attacks perfectly, and now, as a sign of respect, he is going to demonstrate the full power of the demon army general. The king opens his mouth wide. He thrusts his sword into the ground. The hero looks at the enemy in fear. He seems to understand what Dial is planning. We see a powerful fiery whirlwind. The king uses the forbidden technique dance of the antlion. Lime is simply horrified. He understands that he cannot cope with the enemy's special technique in his current state. Before us are the eyes of a young man. The ground is cracking under the pressure of flames. Large stones are flying upward. The fire is raging with all its might. Dial, with his mouth wide open, screams that this flame cannot be extinguished, and he will burn the goblin to ashes. Lime steps back. He thinks that the enemy's technique is not so powerful, and he just needs to get to this bastard. The flames scatter stones. The hero holds his bloody left side. The guy understands that he is not in the condition to do what needs to be done. Lime, whose forehead is covered in blood, is breathing heavily. The fairy asks the guy for permission to try to heal him again. The young man angrily calls the girl a small annoying midge. The fairy looks at her master in amazement. There is a powerful explosion. The fairy flies away from the guy. He calls her. The winged creature clings to the stone with its hand. The fairy fails to hold on, and she flies towards the raging flames. Dial, putting all 4 hands in front of him, screams like a madman that he will grind the goblin and all his servants into dust. Lime puts his hand in front of him. He understands that he must save the fairy, but he is at the limit of his strength. The guy clenches his fist. He understands that if he had at least a little more mana, he would try to do something, but now it is hardly possible. The young man lowers his gaze. He cannot hear the scream that the fairy makes. Lime notices something to his left. The guy sees a character in a black cloak. It turns out that this is Letty. The girl appears in front of the hero sitting on the floor. He asks what she is doing here. The blonde declares that she is not going to answer stupid and irrelevant questions. Letty, looking at the guy, says that she saw everything, and that he, as it seems to her, ran out of mana. The young man, holding his bleeding side, says that if he had a little more mana, he would be able to stop the bleeding and get to Dial, but now he can't do it. The young man's eyes are sad. Letty stands in front of the guy and asks, since that's the case, to allow her, the princess of the Dark Elves, to provide all possible assistance. The young man asks again in bewilderment. The blonde, smiling, declares that she will help the hero cope with Dial, but after that he will be in her debt. The girl closes her eyes. She puts her hand forward with spread fingers and uses the energy exchange skill. Lime looks at the blonde in amazement, who is standing on a magical formation. The young man looks at his hands, realizing that Letty is sucking mana from the environment and transferring it to him. The beauty reminds the guy that he is in her debt. The girl closes her eyes. She falls into the hero's arms. The young man looks at his savior. Lime notices something. He raises his hand and sees that his wound is healing. Letty is unconscious. The hero understands that the special technique of the elf princess draws mana not only from objects, but also from herself, and the girl gave him everything she had, after which she fell down without strength. A huge pillar of fire is approaching the young man from behind. Dial screams that the goblin cannot hide from it, and this flame will catch up with him, wherever he hides. Lime clenches his fist and calls the girl's name. Purple energy flows around the guy. He says that thanks to Letty he has fully recovered, and now he is sure that he can kill this tyrant. The hero's eyes are filled with determination. We see his hand. Lime says that each technique has its weaknesses. The hero stretches out his right hand. He points his index finger at the enemy and declares that now he only needs to concentrate energy. The fairy flies back, continuing to scream loudly. The king generates an incredible amount of flame. He repeats like a machine gun that the damned goblins must die. The bastard opens his mouth so wide that it seems like it is about to burst. Lime stands with his index finger extended forward. The young man thinks that he needs to focus dark magic on one point and deliver just one precise blow. Lime emits a powerful black beam that breaks through the wall of fire. Dial screams deafeningly. We see a bright flash of fire. A fiery whirlwind rages above the king. The hero is visible inside the circle. Dial falls face down on the ground. Lime stands with his mouth slightly open. The guy walks, raising his right hand. He says that he admits that Dial turned out to be much stronger than his game version. The helmet flies off the king's head. Lime smiles. The fairy, screaming piercingly, flies back. A huge fiery whirlwind is visible above Dial. The king falls face down on the ground. Fiery jets are visible under the fairy. We see the face of a winged creature. The girl clumsily falls on her butt. The fairy looks around, not believing that she is saved. Someone is calling her. The hero approaches her with the blonde in her arms and says that someone needs to restore their mana. The fairy, above whose hand a purple vortex is visible, declares that she will do it with ease. Letty lies in the arms of the young man, closing her eyes. The fairy declares that she does not spare anything for real heroes. Lime, smiling, looks at the girl. The system reports that King Dial has been defeated. The awakening quest has been increased to level 5. The range of magic skills has been expanded. The unique skill Light in the Darkness has become available. And the hero has received King Dial's sword, Arandite, as a reward. The young man, rubbing his chin, looks at the system window, and is happy to receive a new unique skill. He remembers that his game character had one, and it was a pretty powerful and useful spell. Lime clenches his fist. He says that Arandite is generally wonderful. The guy thinks that the fight was very difficult. He almost completely exhausted his mana, and if not for Letty, he would not be alive. The blonde opens one eye. The hero welcomes her into this reality. Smiling, the young man says that he defeated King Dial, and all thanks to the girl. Letty sighs with relief. She says that she is very happy about this fact. The beauty's eyes widen in amazement. Blushing, she grabs her face and asks the guy to put her in her place. Lime, who is still holding her in his arms, asks again in surprise. The guy jumps back far and embarrassedly apologizes. Letty, on all fours, declares that nothing terrible happened. She shakes off her suit and says that everything is fine. The girl cannot hide her happiness. She thinks that this is not the first time Lime has held her in her arms. The blonde remembers how she flew into the air with the guy and then fell down. She thinks that this time it is good that he did not throw her from heaven to earth. Lime calls out to the blonde. She, turning around in fear, asks what happened. Raising his left hand, the young man says that Letty never told him what she is doing here. The hero looks at the girl with gratitude. He bows and declares that first of all he wants to thank her with all his heart, since only thanks to her mana was he able to defeat King Dial. The young man has a happy smile on his face. He thanks Letty again. Putting her fist to her chest, the blonde says that the guy does not have to thank her. Raising her right hand, the girl admits that she would never have thought that the young man was seriously thinking about attacking Dial. But he not only started a fight with this bastard, but also managed to defeat him. Letty declares that the hero is simply incredible. Blushing, Letty lowers her gaze. She understands that with each of their new meetings she falls in love with the hero more and more. The fairy, smiling, flutters in the air. She asks the girl to continue the story. She replies that she has nothing more to add, and she said everything she wanted. The young people look at each other. The hero asks to still say why Letty came here. The blonde, looking at the young man with serious eyes, says that it is a long story. The guy and the girl are standing next to the dilapidated columns. Letty says that, to be honest, she entered the academy for the same purpose as Lime. The hero asks again in surprise. Looking down sadly, the blonde says that she, the princess of the Dark Elves, had to avenge all her people. Lime looks at her in surprise. He remembers his first meeting with the girl and how those around him discussed the fact that a princess of the Dark Elves was entering the academy. The hero tells the girl that he heard rumors that she was a princess, but did not fully believe them. Letty sadly says that there is some truth in this. She is a princess, but her country no longer exists. The young people stand opposite each other. Lime says that he does not understand what Letty means. She declares that her country no longer belongs to the Dark Elves. In front of us is the blonde's right eye. She declares that her country has become a puppet state, or more precisely, an ordinary slave colony. The hero is immersed in thought. He remembers that in the game Fantasy Frontier, the Dark Elves were not even close to anyone's slaves. We see the lower part of the blonde's face. She remembers the magnificent city she lived in and says that her father, the ruler of the country, made a deal with the Demon King. Letty remembers her father and some events from her past. She says that in exchange for the most valuable resource of the Dark Elf country, Orichalcum, the Demon King promised to recognize their country's independence. But less than a year later, he broke the peace treaty and invaded at the head of an army of demons. Her father was put into an artificial coma. He is alive, but due to a strong magic spell he cannot wake up. The interlocutors stand next to each other. Letty says that in exchange for the life and safety of her father, the elves swore allegiance to the Demon King. A black magic formation is visible behind the girl. She says that her father ruled the country for many centuries, and the people simply adored him, so the elves could not condemn him to death after everything he did for them. The girl raises her fist. She says that now their best magicians are used to pump magical energy from Orichalcum. We see how this process happens. Lime, looking at the blonde, declares that all this is simply terrible, but he still does not understand why the girl followed him to the castle of King Dial. Letty, clenching her fist, declares that her position no longer plays any role in her country. She cannot save her father and rule the state. So for the sake of her people and for the sake of her father, she decided to take revenge on the Demon King. The blonde resolutely looks at the young man, pressing her fist to her chest. A black magic formation is visible behind her. Putting her hand to her chest, Letty says that she entered the academy to meet King Dial and take the sword Arandite from him. Lime looks at the girl in surprise. We see the weapon in question. The blonde says that this sword is capable of freeing her father from eternal sleep. Raising her left hand, Letty states that if she defeated King Dial and took his sword, she could free her people. The girl raises a clenched fist. Lime looks at the blonde with understanding. She, smiling, says that, to be honest, she did not expect that she and the boy would have similar goals. Next to the magical formation, a bony hand is visible. Lime smiles. Letty, thoughtfully rubbing her chin, says that Lime is indeed too strong for a goblin. The boy turns away from the blonde. She says that she senses some kind of catch here. We see the girl's eyes. She declares that this, however, does not matter at all, and Lime is her hero regardless of whether he is a goblin or not. Next to the hero, the legs of a fairy are visible. The young man, looking at his interlocutor, asks who rules her country now. The blonde, with her mouth slightly open, looks at the young man. We see the girl's legs. She begins to say what the name of this creature is. A monster appears behind the blonde, above whose head a cross is visible. He speaks for Letty that her country is ruled by a lich, the Emperor of Dark Souls. The guy and the girl look at this creature in fear. Lime screams for Letty and the fairy to hide behind his back. Having pulled out a sword, the young man turns to the enemy. The fairy hides in his pocket. The lich, demonstrating even teeth, declares that he would never have thought that the cruel King Dial would fall from some two youngsters. Letty, clenching her fist, asks what this foul creature is doing here. The lich's eyes emit a blue glow. The monster asks the hero if he is really a goblin. Then he answers himself that this is simply impossible, and suggests that he is some kind of mutant. We see the hero's eyes. The young man understands that the lich exudes an incredible amount of dark magical energy, and is also a general in the Demon King's army. Letty, pulling her bow, demands that the lich answer her question immediately. Lime tries to stop the girl. Streams of blue energy rise around the monster. A blue cloud is visible around its neck. Extending its long fingers in front of itself, the lich declares that dark elves have never impressed him. Some sounds are heard from the monster's mouth. A magical formation appears under the blonde's feet. The girl looks back over her shoulder in fear. She covers her head with her hands. Letty looks at the enemy in horror. In front of us is the hero's hand. Looking calmly at the enemy, he declares that he would not dare to harm his dear friend. The monster looks at the boy carefully. In front of us is the profile of the hero. Lime understands where he saw this magic circle. The boy's memory flashes back to the formation he noticed in the goblin village, the same one that made the soil infertile and dried up the water sources. The boy clenches his fist. He thinks that the lich not only captured Letty's homeland, but also did not allow the goblins to find their place in this world. The blonde looks at the boy in shock. She cannot believe that he just called her his dear friend. From under the hood, the monster's teeth are visible. The lich points a finger at the hero and declares that everything is happening as his master, the demon lord, predicted, and that he chooses this goblin as the most important creature to analyze. The boy, looking at the enemy, asks again in bewilderment. The lich holds out his knuckles and declares that he will first get rid of the annoying bugs. Letty falls to the ground. Lime looks around in fear. A ghostly dagger is sticking out of the girl's chest. A magical formation can be seen under her head. The girl disappears inside it. The hero calls out to his friend. The lich, smiling, asks if the young man hasn't noticed the flow of his mana. The monster warns that he is not the most ordinary demon the hero could have met. A cross is visible above the monster's hood. The lich asks the goblin what choice he will make. Lime looks at the monster in fear. We see the young man's eyes. A burning village is visible inside the magical formation. The hero understands that this is a portal that leads to a goblin settlement. The lich, holding scales, asks whose life is more important to the hero. Goblins run among the burning houses. A burning children's toy lies on the ground. Lime calls the lich a bastard. He glares at the young man. The hero puts his hand on the hilt of the sword. He looks angrily at the enemy, who advises him to hurry. Next to the lich, a portal leading to the village is visible and Letty is lying on the floor. The monster says that the young man will have to make a choice. The blonde is unconscious on the ground. The young man calls out to her. An hourglass hangs above the lich's hand. The monster says that the lives of all the villagers and the life of this girl are at stake. He says that they will all die in 30 minutes. We see a map of the area. The monster says that now both the goblin village and Letty are under its control. The vile creature puts its hands in front of itself. It asks whose life the goblin is going to save. The lich looks menacingly at the guy and repeats his question. Lime looks down. White stripes are visible above the monster's hand. The lich asks the goblin to surprise him with his choice. We see vague outlines in front of us. Now we see the lich's face. Lime is shocked by the abnormal amount of dark mana he feels from this creature. The young man, opening his mouth, declares that he is not going to choose at all. He strikes and cuts the giant monster. Streams of purple energy rise around the lich's skull. The eye socket of this creature is shown close up. 2 halves of the crystal fall to the floor. Lime, looking at this stone, thinks that the lich's clone was created with the help of orichalcum, and this technology was discovered by evil elves. The crystal darkens. The young man understands that the lich himself is still alive. The fairy calls out to the young man from his own pocket. The winged creature asks what they should do now, because the entire goblin village is in danger, where the young man's sister and her friend are. Lime, putting his right hand to the side, tells the fairy that, as he already said, he is not going to choose anyone. The girl, clenching her fists in anger, asks what they should do then. The hero puts his left leg aside. Looking resolutely at the fairy, the guy declares that he is going to save everyone. In front of us is a goblin village. It is reported that this happened an hour ago. Mia happily says that she has everything ready. Lily, who has forks in her hands, asks her friend to show. We see a cake. Lily says in amazement that it looks very appetizing. The girls examine the culinary masterpiece. The hero's sister praises her friend for decorating the cake with strawberries. Mew declares that thanks to Lime they have fresh berries, which she used to decorate the cake. The girls, armed with forks, offer each other to try the delicacy. They enjoy the food. Lily wishes her friend a bon appetit. Something happens behind the girls. They turn around in fear. Black stripes are visible above the floor. The door swings open. Scary monsters are moving along the village street. One of them grabs a young goblin by the leg. A cyclops skull is visible behind the frightened girl. Lily, covering her face with her hands, says that this is a real nightmare. Mew fearfully asks her friend if this is what she thinks about. Lily, covering her mouth with her fist, confirms that this is the very event that her brother warned her about. The hero tells the village chief standing in front of him that the defiling seal has been removed from this land, and now there should be no problems with clean water and crops. Lily, happily clenching her fists, says that now she can make sweets at least every day. The young man with a worried look declares that this is not all. We see the girl's leg. The brother asks Lily to listen to him. The young man sits down in front of the little girl and tells her that, in his opinion, the demon who placed the defiling seal on this land will soon appear in the village. The guy raises his index finger. Lily and Mew repeat this gesture, after which they say the guy's words that they must use the secret passage and help all the villagers escape. The monsters are exterminating the goblins. Lily screams loudly for her tribesmen to run to her. The goblins run into the purple portal. One of them thanks the little girls. They scream for the rest to run into the saving gate as quickly as possible. The monster, with its mouth wide open, screams that no one will escape from it. Lily looks at the monster. She thinks that she cannot allow these creatures to go into the portal after the villagers. Lily grabs some kind of weapon and screams for Mew to step back. In front of us is the leg of one of the girls. Lily destroys the portal with a blow of her hammer. In front of us is the cracked edge of the weapon. Mew runs up to her friend. She says that she had no choice, and asks the little girl for forgiveness. Mew shakes her head. She asks Lily not to apologize, and states that, in her opinion, Lime would have done the same. Lily holds the shaft in her hands. The girls turn around. A huge monster is approaching them. Lily looks up and remembers her brother. Lime, who is in the throne room of King Diol, clenches his fist resolutely. The boy says that using the skills he received, he will definitely save both Lily and Letty. The boy calls out to the fairy. She, looking at him, asks what her master will order. The winged creature hangs above the boy. The fairy says that she understands what she should do. Lime says that she relies on the fairy, and that there should be no mistake. The boy raises his hand palm up. He says that first they will save his little sister. The boy touches his finger to the system window. Lime finds himself in a goblin village captured by monsters. A magical formation appears above his hand. The boy uses the dark magic skill search technique level 58. A purple liquid is visible under his feet. Streams of the same color swirl around the young goblin. The boy sees a crumbling figure, and then a devastated village street. Now Lily and Mew's silhouettes are in front of him. We see a white trail. The boy rushes past the enemies, cutting them into pieces. The monster, raising his left hand, giggles disgustingly. He says that the girls have blocked their own path, and these beautiful souls will be perfect for the experiments that his lord, the Lich, is conducting. Lily holds a hammer in her hands. She asks Mew to hide behind her. The little girl, looking at the monster in fear, tries to object. Lily resolutely says that she will defeat this enemy. The monster, holding a staff, declares that this is useless resistance. Showing off its magnificent teeth, the monster says something in an incomprehensible language. The metal from which the hammer is made flows down. The monster approaches Lily and wishes itself a bon appetit. Lime rushes forward along the street of the burning village. Along the way, he destroys the monsters he encounters. We see the eye of a young man. The young man says that there is very little time left, and they need to run faster. A blue whirlwind is visible above Lily's head. The girl asks her brother to help her. She closes her eyes in horror. A bright flash occurs. The girl covers her eyes with her hands. Lily opens her eyes in amazement. Mia falls unconscious to the ground. The little girl runs up to her friend and tries to scream for her. The monster slowly approaches the girls. Lily does not stop calling Mia. The monster, rubbing its chin, lets out a cry of surprise. Mia opens her eyes and thanks her friend for saving her. The girl smiles. Lily, who has tears in her eyes, hears that her friend had a lot of fun with her. Mia begs Lily to run away while there is still time. The monster, baring his teeth, says that he does not like this, and he will not allow anything like this. He states that nothing will change from the fact that Mia switched places with her friend, and she will simply die next. We see the lower part of Lily's face. Sobbing, she tells the monster that she will never lose to such a creature. Judging by the expression in the monster's eyes, these words affect him. Streams of blue energy swirl around the monster. He screams that he is now going to kill the girl. A black stripe cuts the monster's face in two. Lime stands with a sword in his hand. The cut monster screams in bewilderment that he himself was the next to die. The hero breathes heavily. Lily looks at her brother with tears in her eyes. Lime, gritting his teeth in anger, apologizes to his sister for being late. Mia lies unconscious on the ground. Lily draws her brother's attention to her. The boy's hand is shaking. He says that Lily can rely on him. Black streams swirl above the hero's fingers. Lime uses summoning magic. The boy, closing his eyes, asks the goblin priestess to demonstrate her power. A girl appears above the magic formation with a staff in her hand. Smiling, she says that if she was called, it means that the matter is very urgent. Lime, who is holding Mew in his arms, asks if the goblin priestess can heal the girl. The healer, looking at the baby, says that she is on the verge of life and death, but it is still possible to cure her. Raising her right hand, the goblin priestess says that first they need to take Mew to a quiet place. Lime, looking at the healer, says that the baby is at her complete disposal, and she can do whatever is required. The goblin priestess, in front of whom the staff is visible, closes her eyes. She dissolves into thin air along with Mia. Lily looks at her brother with tearful eyes and thanks fate for his appearance. The young man looks at his sister, smiling. We see the little girl's eyes. The girl folds her arms across her chest. She understands that her brother is acting as if he urgently needs to save someone else. Lily looks down thoughtfully. She comes up to her brother from behind and calls out to him. The girl thanks the hero for saving her, but wants to say something to him. Lime looks at her sister in surprise and asks what exactly she wanted to say. Lily, almost crying, says that it seems to her that he has some other things to do. The young man is shocked. He does not understand how the little girl could guess about this. The girl hits herself in the chest with her fist and declares that she is, after all, his little sister. Lily takes her brother's hand. She holds it with both hands and declares that, as it seems to her, now there are those who need her brother's help more than her. The guy sadly lowers his eyes. He thinks about Letty. In front of us is a castle in which a blonde is located. A mark from some kind of blow is visible on the brick wall. Blue smoke rises above the girl. A dagger sticks out of her chest. Letty looks up, trying to understand where she is. The girl sits down. She looks at the blade sticking out of her chest. Blue energy flows around the blonde. We see these clouds up close. A lich towers over Letty. The monster shows its even teeth. The blonde looks up sadly, realizing that she will have to die here. We see the girl's eye. Letty really does not want to die. She mentally addresses the hero, begging him to save her. The guy, sadly looking at his sister, says that she is absolutely right. Lily says that in this case the guy should do what he must. Clenching her fists, the girl says that Lime should leave her here. The young man objects, declaring that there are still monsters here. Lily puts her hand to her chest and says that for this reason she will borrow her brother's friends. The young man, looking at his sister in bewilderment, asks again. Lily stands with her legs apart. She says that she does not want to be protected all the time. Pointing her finger at the hero, she demands that he trust her and finally go about his business. The young man looks at the little girl in shock. Smiling, he says that he understands everything. Pulling his hood over his head, Lime declares that he completely trusts his sister. Lime and Lily are standing on a lawn in the middle of the forest. The young man, putting his hands forward, calls the goblin heroes. They immediately appear in front of him. Before us are many warriors belonging to this race. Lime, putting his hand forward, declares that he calls them only for a short time, and asks them to protect the inhabitants of this village to the best of their ability. The goblin commander, wearing a helmet, declares that they are not at all indifferent to this settlement either. He approaches the boy and states that they will definitely carry out the order. The boy thanks the commander. Lime tells her sister that she is now going to save her dear friend. Lily, happily clenching her fist, replies that she understands everything. The brother and sister punch each other. The girl wishes the boy good luck. He says that he will need it. The girl looks at the hero in surprise. There is a smile on her face. She realizes that her brother still wears the bracelet that she made for him. Lime turns to the goblin commander and states that he has one more request. The hero runs forward. We see the boy's face. He thinks that he cannot use fast travel to quickly move to the place where Letty is now. The boy gets down on one knee. He understands that he must think of another way to quickly move. A magical formation is visible under his hand. The boy summons Goblin Strongarm. We see a trace of the jump. The hero asks the summoned creature to throw it with all his strength. The giant takes the guy in his hand and swings. The goblin firmly pushes his foot into the ground. He grits his teeth from the strain. Lime flies forward. In front of us is the edge of the magic formation. We see another part of this circle and the hero's leg. The young man sits on the goblin dragon. Judging by the expression on his face, the young man is very determined. He thinks that he will definitely save Letty. A huge lich towers over Letty lying on the floor. The blonde looks up sadly. She thinks that this is the end, and she will be killed now. The toothy monster looks menacingly at the girl and says that the time has not come yet. The lich remembers the moment when his double was cut in half. The monster thinks that this goblin dealt with his copy very easily. We see the edge of the monster's robe. The lich says that the analysis is continuing according to plan. In front of him is a magic formation. The monster wants to see horror on the face of his enemy. The lich cries out in surprise. Inside the magical formations he sees the corpses of his fighters. Not believing his eyes, the monster screams that all the warriors he sent were killed, and this simply cannot be. The monster simply does not believe that the hero managed to get to the goblin village from Dial Castle in time. The lich turns around, thinking that all this is very dangerous, and the goblin may appear in this place very soon. Letty looks up sadly. Blue energy flows around the monster's neck. It thinks that it needs to kill the girl right now, and then fight the hero when he comes here. The monster stretches out its hand. Lime flies on the goblin dragon. He asks the green creature if it can increase its speed. The lizard declares that this is the maximum it can do. The young man, looking ahead in fear, curses. He urges the dragon on as best he can, thinking that he needs to have time to save Letty. The lich, hanging over the blonde, declares that his plans have changed, and she will die right now. The monster's hand holds a weapon. Tears roll from the girl's eyes. She mentally calls the hero and begs him to save her. Lime urges on the goblin dragon. The lich stands over Letty with a scythe in his hands. He declares that it will hurt her only for a short moment, and then she will stop feeling everything. The girl, closing her eyes, begs the hero to come to her aid. The guy grinds his teeth in anger. He understands that he does not have time. The lich strikes, demanding that the girl become his servant. Letty closes her eyes. Tears roll from the blonde's eyes. There is a bright flash. The blonde is amazed. A tiny light shines in the lich's eyes. A young man with blonde hair stops the lich's weapon with his sword. The guy's hand trembles. The young man strikes. The monster's scythe flies away. The bony hand that holds the weapon shakes finally. The lich angrily asks who is in front of him. We see the young man's legs. He declares that his name is Lute Arcadia, and he is a dark knight. A fairy hangs over the blonde's head. The guy, whose back we see, tells the monster that Lime is his best friend. The monster bares its even teeth. Lute, looking resolutely at the enemy, says that the lich, one of the 7 great kings of the demon lord, is about to die by his hand. Lime talks to the fairy. It is reported that this happened half an hour ago. The hero, behind whom the house is visible, says that before heading to the goblin village, he is going to use the fast travel skill to stop near the seer dormitory. The fairy asks again in surprise. The winged creature hangs in the air, spreading its arms. Lime says that the fairy must stay in this place and pass on something to him. The girl opens her mouth. Lime says that the fairy must pass on a request to him to become an ally. The fairy asks in surprise if this is all that needs to be said. The hero answers that the guy should understand. The winged creature hanging over the guy's head says that everything is clear. Lime says that she also has to give him something. The young man hands over the sword. He says that mistakes are unacceptable, and he really hopes for the girl. The blonde stands in front of the lich, who asks if he really is the Dark Knight Lute Arcadia. The guy, putting the sword back, says that he will take the lich's life. The monster puts forward his left hand. A trace of a powerful blow is visible above his head. The monster looks around in surprise. Lime flies down through a hole in the ceiling and calls Letty. The girl smiles. She recognizes the hero. Lute frowns that the hero appeared here very quickly. 2 comrades stand in front of the lich. The blonde says that he is a little sorry, since he was just about to finish off this creature. The young people exchange glances. Lime suggests killing the lich together. Lute agrees that this is a great idea. The monster, with his mouth wide open, calls the boys smug bastards and asks if they really are going to tease him. Lime, with his eyes closed, says that no one is going to tease the lich. Standing next to him, Lute accuses the monster of enslaving the empire of the Dark Elves and putting a curse on their princess, Letty. We are reminded of how the blonde was lying with a ghostly sword in her chest. Lime claims that, on top of everything else, the vile creature has cast a pollution spell on the secret goblin village. We see Lily bending over Mia and the monsters attacking the settlement. The hero says that the lich attacked his sister and her friend, and also sicked his fighters on ordinary villagers. Glaring at the monster, he asks if it really thinks that he, a piece of shit, will be treated like a being with some dignity. The monster opens its mouth and calls the guys inferior creatures. He promises to kill them. The lich puts his hand forward. We see a bare foot. In front of us is the mouth of terrible monsters. The lich calls his army to help himself. He uses the Dance of the Dead skill. Letty screams in fear. Lime takes out his sword and tells his ally that the time has come to do it. The guys stand next to each other. The hero declares that the blonde must bring down all his darkness on the lich. He asks his comrade to breathe in time with him. We see the faces of the guys. Lute confirms that he understood everything. The friends attack the monsters summoned by the lich. Letty looks at them in amazement. Vile creatures attack the hero, who defends himself with a sword. Lute strikes. The monster's skull flies into two parts. Corpses lie in front of the lich. The monster is clearly scared. We see its eye sockets. Streams of yellow energy swirl around Lute. Lime attacks the lich from behind. The monster looks around. The guys strike in unison. Now they run away. A vague silhouette is in front of us. Some scraps are flying in the air. Lute is surprised. In front of him lies a crystal split in two. The guy says that the lich was not real. Looking around, he asks where the main body of this creature is. The monster, appearing behind the blonde, calls his opponents idiots and says that they destroyed only part of his body. The lich is sure that the guys will never be able to defeat him, since he hides his presence and attacks from a blind spot. The monster, opening his mouth wide, screams that he will kill both of them now. The lich is surprised. He sees two magical formations in front of him and asks where the other one of his opponents is. There is an earring hanging from the lich's ear. Lime says that this creature's special technique is Dimension of Nothingness, which allows the user to disappear from the enemy's sight and use surprise attacks, while the skill is applied randomly and cannot be predicted. We see the lich's profile. The hero says that if the enemy activates the highest level of detection skill in advance, they can predict the location of the lich. Waves of purple energy spread around the hero's head, standing in front of the monster. The young man, smiling, looks at the enemy, and declares that he knows all of his techniques. The lich looks at the guy in fear and, stuttering, asks what is going on here. Lime, smiling, says that it is a great relief for him that his old strategies worked on this enemy, and that even if history changes, the lich will hardly be able to do anything, since it is just a trash boss. The hero stands in front of his enemy. He, with his toothy mouth wide open, asks the young man not to do what he is going to do. The hero holds a sword in his hand, saying that he will destroy the lich to avenge all the villagers that this creature killed and the dark elves that it enslaved. The young man raises the sword above his head. He strikes several times. We see black cracks. The lich, judging by his expression, is mortally wounded. Deep cracks are visible on his skull. Elements of a computer interface are visible in front of Lime. The lich states that he is dying, but he managed to complete the analysis, and he sees a creature that was summoned from another world by the goblin goddess. We see the character in question. Lime looks at the enemy in surprise. He, stretching out his right hand, declares that the hero is not even a demon, but a real abomination and rather belongs to the light forces. The monster's skull dissolves into thin air, and the lich finishes by saying that he will send the results of his analysis to Hermes, the demon lord, and that the hero must be prepared for dire consequences. Lute runs up to the boy from behind, joyfully shouting that they have managed to win. The blonde looks at his comrade in surprise and calls out to him. Lime looks down thoughtfully. He understands that the demon lord already knows about him. Of course, this was bound to happen someday, but from now on he will face a brutal battle at every step. Lime clenches his fist. Lute looks thoughtfully at his comrade. The hero sits down in front of Letty, who is lying on the floor. The girl is still unconscious. Finally, she opens her eyes and asks where she is. The blonde sits up. Lime tells her that the spell disappeared just recently, so the girl's thoughts must still be clouded. Letty recognizes the boy. The boy asks her to rest a little more. The blonde, smiling, says that the hero seems to have saved her again. We see the girl's eyes. Lime asks why she thought about it. Letty answers that she thought about how she owes her life to the hero again. Streams of green energy are visible around the girl. She says that maybe she doesn't look like that at all, but in her homeland she is the strongest knight and has saved hundreds of her compatriots. Closing her eyes, the blonde says that after she met the hero, all he does is save her. The boy puts his finger on the girl's forehead and reminds her that she once saved him too. Lime, smiling happily, reminds her that they are friends. The girl grabs her forehead and repeats this phrase. Joyfully clenching her fists, she thanks the hero. Letty gets to her feet and declares that she is okay, and they can go. We see the back of the blonde's head. She again falls unconscious into the hero's arms. Coming to her senses, she thanks him. Lime replies that she does not need to do this. Letty looks at the boy lovingly. In front of us is her right eye. She quietly pronounces the hero's name. Lime looks at her questioningly. We see the lower part of the girl's face. She tries to say something, but realizes that she can say something that she will later be ashamed of. Putting her hand to her chest, she declares that the hero is always hers. Lime looks at the blonde excitedly, waiting for the end of the phrase. In front of us are the girl's eyes. Letty thinks that it is too early, she should not talk about it. But the words are about to fall from her lips. Someone politely coughs nearby. Lute apologizes for disturbing the young people. Smiling, he asks the hero if he will introduce him to the girl. The fairy hanging in the air next to the blonde says that Lime is unacceptably ignoring the girl's true savior. The pink fairy is visible next to Lute's head. The hero apologizes to his comrade. Letty does the same. Lute, in front of whom the embarrassed hero is visible, says that he also played an important role in this story. According to him, he knows how the girl feels, but it so happened that all the glory always goes to this goblin. Letty grabs her head. She tries to understand since when bad thoughts began to haunt her. Lime raises his finger and suggests celebrating the victory. He states that after this Lute can introduce himself to everyone who does not know him. The young man puts his hand on his comrade's shoulder and says that he wants to introduce him to his little sister. The boys look into each other's eyes. Lime says that he really wants his loved ones to meet his faithful comrade. Lute smiles happily. We see the happy faces of young people. The hero says that it is time to return to his village. Residents of the hidden goblin village are removing large stones. A girl with white hair looks at something in surprise. 2 children are grieving near a grave. The window of the house is illuminated by the sun. The healer is healing Mia lying on the bed. The girl opens her eyes. Lily takes her friend by the hand and calls her by name. There is a happy smile on the baby's face. Mia recognizes her. Lily delightedly tells the healer that her friend has come to her senses. Goblin Priestess, smiling, confirms that Mia has regained consciousness and now it will take time for her to fully recover. Lily asks again in surprise. The girl closes her eyes. She says that she is incredibly happy. Clouds of purple smoke appear around Goblin Priestess. She says that she needs to go, and that the little ones should take care of themselves. Lily sincerely thanks the healer. Mew, looking up, states that it seems she survived. Lily shakes her hand. She looks at her friend and says that Lime saved her. Mew, looking up, says that it was him after all. The girl remembers how the hero extended his hand to her. She states that the hero always helps her out. We see the door handle. Lily looks out the door and asks who is there. In front of us are huge eyes of the little one. Lime greets her. The girl throws herself on her brother's chest. She welcomes him home. Lily points to the huge amount of food prepared and says that she made it all just for her brother. Lime, Letty and Lute look at the food happily. The hero happily exclaims that now they can begin the feast. The young people are sitting at a long table. The blonde stands up, puts his hand to his chest, and introduces himself as Lute Arcadia, a student at the Dark Knight Academy. He abruptly lowers his head and states that he has been friends with Lime for some time now, and he is very pleased to meet everyone he does not know here. Lily, smiling happily, thanks the guy for looking after her brother. Lute sighs heavily. He has a feeling that he is meeting a girl in the presence of her father. Letty, raising her hand, happily shouts that she is next. The girl says her name, and that she is also a student at the Dark Knight Academy. The blonde opens her mouth. Putting her hand to her chest, she declares that she is Lime's friend. The girl realizes that she almost blurted out too much. The little girl with green hair says that her name is Mia, and Lime saved her life too. The boy's sister says that her name is Lily, and she is very pleased that her brother has so many friends. Letty smiles. She understands that she is the boy's sister, and Mia is not his relative after all. The blonde remembers how the hero stroked the girl's head, and also how she looked out from behind the tree, trying to understand who these children were. Lily, bowing, tells her brother's friends that she really hopes that they will continue to look after Lime. Letty and Lute are very surprised. Lime does not know what to say. Rubbing his chin with his fist, the guy suggests making a toast. The participants of the feast clink glasses. The plates with food are empty. The hero has a mug in his hand. We see the guy's eyes. Someone asks him to clarify whether the pressure on low-ranking demons will really increase greatly after the recent events. Lime and Lute look at each other. The blonde asks if his comrade seriously thinks that they need to meet the demon lord as soon as possible. He replies that he really wants to get to this character, but only under favorable conditions for himself. The hero states that he must do something first, after which he calls out to Letty. The blonde looks at the hero in surprise and says that she is listening to him. He looks at the girl and says that first he wants to free the empire of the Dark Elves. Letty, looking at the guy in surprise, asks if he will really help do this. The hero, smiling, replies that of course yes. He says that the lich who led the occupation forces has been killed, and now it will be much easier to do. Lute, smiling, says that he will also help in this matter. The blonde thanks the guys. Lime asks her sister if she doesn't mind staying in this village for a little while longer. The girl, smiling, replies that of course she will stay here, and her brother can do whatever he thinks is necessary. The hero thanks his sister. The young man, smiling, looks at Letty and Lily. His face is reflected in the tea he drinks. Lime thinks that the most serious trials will begin after he frees the elves. Hermes, the Lord of Demons, sits on the throne. He sees the hero in front of him. The monster's eye glows ominously. A red circle is visible above the horned monster's head. Hermes understands that the guy represents another world, and this seems really interesting to him. In front of us is a nice city. It is reported that it is in the empire of the Dark Elves. Leg is standing on the edge of a cliff. Letty and Lute are visible behind the hero. The young man stares ahead. He sees guards standing at the city gates. People are walking along the streets. One of the guards points his finger at a man pulling a wheelbarrow. The fighter greedily bites into the apple. Letty sadly says that nothing has changed here, and the occupiers continue to control her homeland. The blonde looks sadly at her compatriots, and asks them to wait a little. promising to definitely free them from slavery. Lime, raising his right hand, says that chaos is probably reigning in the ranks of the enemy now due to the death of the Lich, and now it will probably be easiest to penetrate the city. Lute thoughtfully rubs his chin behind the young man's back. Lime says that the main problem is the gate. The blonde, showing his thumb, says that Letty must know some way to penetrate the city. The girl says in surprise that this is not true. A fairy is visible next to the hero's head. The blonde says that there are no secret passages here. The hero, smiling, says that in this case they will go straight ahead. He turns to Letty and says that she will have to be patient a little. The girl is surprised by these words. Guards guard the gate. Someone approaches them. One of the soldiers turns his attention to the visitors. In front of him is a gorgeous blonde with a chain in her hand. The guard menacingly asks who she is. The girl says that she caught a dark elf who escaped from the Empire, and wants to return her to give a gift to the ruler of the city. The girl smiles seductively. Letty is chained. One of the guards looks into the notebook, after which he recognizes the escaped princess Tyra Letty Luelf. The girl in the purple dress, smiling, says that she learned that the princess escaped after rebelling against the occupation army, so she tracked her down, caught her and brought her here. She says that there is not a single scratch on her captive, so she is waiting for an appropriate reward. The girl, smiling, puts her hand on Letty's shoulder. The guards call her a greedy pig, but allow her to pass. The blonde bows low. She is told where the headquarters are. The young people stand in a narrow alley. Lime says that they succeeded and apologizes to Letty. The blonde looks at the young man with wide eyes. She says that she does not need an apology, since the trick they pulled is most likely the best way to get inside safe and sound. Letty smiles happily. She says that the hero is still very strange if he comes up with such wonderful tricks and surprises her time after time. The fairy, who played the role of a spectacular blonde, says offendedly that she is always forgotten. Lute, raising her hand, asks what they will do next. Letty pulls the hood over her head and says that now she will contact the resistance forces of the Dark Elves. The young people walk past the shops. Lime notices something. In front of him are prisoners tied with chains. He looks at them, trying to understand where they are being taken. Letty, whose face is hidden by the hood, explains that elves who own special magic are sent to the mines behind the castle, where they will extract orichalcum. We see dark elves with green crystals hanging between them. The blonde says that these people will be cleaning the mineral, working day and night, and in fact, they are no different from slaves. Lute sadly says that all this is too cruel. The fairy, folding her arms on her chest, says that goblins are treated no better. The hero, whose back we see, is silent. The young people approach the building. Letty says that they are here. She touches the stone with her hand. The girl pronounces a spell in a language incomprehensible to her comrades. The crystal glows brightly. A dark passage opens under it. The blonde turns to the hero and tells him to follow her. The young people walk along the stone passage. They approach the door. Letty smiles happily. The gray-haired old man gets up from his place. He recognizes Her Highness. Sighing happily, the elf says that he cannot believe that the girl is safe and sound. Letty, smiling, states that she is also very happy to see Elrin. Raising a finger, the blonde reminds him that she asked to be called a knight, not a princess. The old man says that this word suits Her Highness perfectly, despite the fact that, as he heard, she went to study in the Dial domain. Elrond, looking at the blonde in shock, states that her return may mean that she defeated the cursed demon. The blonde, smiling, states that this is exactly what happened. She asks to gather the rest of their comrades. The young people stand in front of the dark elves. The hero places a sword on the table. Elrond recognizes it, and states that this is the same cursed weapon. Letty, pointing at her comrade, states that it was he who got this sword for her. Elrond whispers to the girl that he does not believe it, since he is just a goblin in front of him. Letty indignantly shouts that the old man should not say such things, since this guy saved her life. Lime laughs, standing behind the blonde. Elrond bows low and apologizes to the boy, who states that everything is fine. The old elf clears his throat. In front of him lies a sword. Elrond says that with this weapon, which removes the curse, they can save the emperor, who is imprisoned in Luelf Castle. Letty's father lies on a bed behind bars. Elrond says that this is their chance to raise the flag of rebellion. His comrades joyfully raise their hands. Letty, putting her hand to her chest, says that her father was put into a coma by a dark mage and commander-in-chief of the occupying forces, whose name is Renchia. Lime asks if he really is a dark mage. We see the eyes of the boy. The boy understands that the said scoundrel is a representative of the same profession as him. In front of us is the character Letty is referring to. The girl says that he is the most powerful mage of the continent of demons and, as they say, his dark magic is stronger than even that of the 7 great kings. Lime, smiling, pulls his hood over his head. He says that he understands everything, and all this means only that they must destroy this magician. Elrond sullenly calls Renchia a vile traitor. The hero looks at the old man thoughtfully. He understands that the elves are somehow connected with this character. The young man asks Elrond if they still have to kill this Renchia, given that the Lich is no longer alive. The old man looks at the young man in shock. He asks if he heard wrong, to which Lime replies that he defeated this creature. The elves look at the hero in amazement. He, smiling, declares that, to be more precise, he defeated the Lich together with Lute, who is standing next to him. Letty, smiling, tells her fellow tribesmen that she warned that this guy is not an ordinary goblin. The elves clench their fists in joy. One of them says that Lime has defeated one of the 7 great kings, and if he is with them, they have a great chance of winning. The second shouts that they must show what the dark elves are worth. Someone calls out to the hero from behind. He turns around. The girl, putting her hand to her chest, asks if the guy will become the messiah for this country. Letty looks at the young man with hope. He, smiling, replies that, of course, he will try to do this, because this is exactly what he came here for. We see the lower part of the girl's face. Lime asks Elrin to tell him a little more about the country of the Dark Elves. The guy says that he wants to form a resistance strategy. The young man looks at a huge sheet of paper. A map with chips on it lies on the table. The hero touches a chip and asks if those present like his plan. Elrond, in front of Letty, doubts that such a thing is even possible to accomplish. The blonde confidently says that nothing is impossible for the hero. Lute, smiling, says that it seems that Letty is more confident in Lime than he is. Elrond puts his hand to his chest and says that in this case he will trust the guy and give him his soldiers at his disposal. The hero asks in surprise if the old man is sure of his decision. He answers that the Knights of the Dark Elves value strength above all else and follow those who demonstrate it. Letty calls out to her comrade. Behind the girl's back, her fellow tribesmen are visible. She tells the guy that he is now in charge here. Lime looks at the blonde with a little surprise. He says that in this case they have agreed, and asks to find him a map of the castle of Luelf. Elrond says that he will gladly do this. He also promises to help with medicines and weapons. The old man raises his hand and addresses his men, ordering them to prepare for the operation that will begin in 2 days at dawn. The soldiers make it clear that they have understood the order. Lime and the elf stand in front of the door. The fairy states that she will scout out where the occupation forces are in the castle and make a map of the entire area. The hero thanks her for her help. Lute stands next to Lime. The hero wishes his friend a good night. Lute states that they will now be busy liberating the empire of the Dark Elves. The boy admits that he has not been bored for a minute since he met the hero. Smiling, the blonde looks back at his comrade and states that he had no idea that there was such a restless and interesting person in the academy. Lime points at his friend and states that he is exactly the same. Lute asks if the hero really thinks so. The fairy sighs heavily. Lime tells his friend that he fought the Demon Lord's army. Lute replies that he had to help his friend who was in trouble. Then the blonde admits that his sister would be very angry if she knew what he was doing. A thoughtful expression appears on the blonde's face. He states that, in addition to everything, he was not happy with the fact that the Demon Lord's army was chasing weak monsters. Lime, looking at his friend, remembers that he is, after all, a kobold. Lute puts his hand to his chest and says that he has no idea what will happen next, but has decided for himself that he will follow his comrade. Lime, smiling, says that it is not for nothing that the guy is a dark knight. The blonde asks the hero to shut up. We see a brick wall. Young people wish each other good night. In front of us is the hero's hood. Lime thinks that Lute is very strong, and he expects the most outstanding feats from him. The hero lies on the bed. We see someone's leg. Letty appears in the doorway. The hero asks in surprise what she is doing here. The young man, looking at the blonde in shock, asks what happened. The girl, wrapping herself in a blanket, asks if they can talk a little. Lime replies that, of course, they can. The guy and the girl are sitting on the bed. The hero realizes that he is alone in the same room with the girl at night. He understands that he should not have sent the fairy on reconnaissance. Letty calls the hero. He responds in fear. The blonde, looking at the young man, says that she wants to tell him something, after which she says that Renchia is an elf. We see 2 hands in a magical formation behind them. Letty says that Renchia is incredibly talented, and learned magic himself. He was so exceptional in this matter that he even invented a new type of dark elf magic. Renchia comes out the door. Letty reports that this elf had incredible ambitions, and one day he left the country dissatisfied with the fact that it was almost impossible to conduct research in the field of magic in the Empire. Behind the blonde, fighters are visible. She reports that Renchia has returned, already being the commander of the occupying army of the Demon Lord. Lime remembers the old man's face when he called Renchia a traitor. The young man understands what Elrond meant then. The hero, looking at the blonde, says that he thinks Renchia is trying to seize power in the land of the Dark Elves with the help of the Demon Lord's army. Letty replies that, in all likelihood, this is true, but they already said about him that he would be the next ruler of the Empire. Lime thoughtfully rubs his lip with his finger. He thinks that there seem to be some other motives involved here. It seems that the young man understands something. He says that if Renchia was to become the next ruler. The girl, smiling, interrupts him, and declares that the hero understood everything correctly, and she was to become the bride of this scoundrel. In front of us is the right eye of the blonde. She declares that if he establishes control over the Empire, she will be forced to marry Renchia, the executioner of her own people. Lime looks at the girl in shock. He understands why she ran away from her country. Letty looks down silently. We see the lower part of the hero's face. Now we see his hand. The blonde has tears in her eyes. The young man takes the girl's hand. She calls him by name in amazement. Lime takes the blonde's hand. He asks her not to worry and promises not to let such a scoundrel marry her. Letty, with tears in her eyes, looks at the young man and asks if he is joking. The hero decisively declares that he will definitely protect the girl. We see the guy's left eye. Lime thinks that protecting this girl is the fastest way to snatch this country from the clutches of the Demon Lord's army. Letty is ready to burst into tears. She throws herself on the young man's chest and calls him by name. The blonde is sobbing. She thanks the hero and declares that she is a knight, so it seems to her that she should always be strong and give her best. The girl stands leaning against the wall. Letty admits that sometimes she is filled with doubts and feels real horror. Lime, smiling, strokes the girl's head. He says that everything she does perfectly. Letty grabs the guy by the sleeve and calls him by name again. The young man looks at her embarrassedly. Shedding tears, the blonde says that if she manages to break off the engagement with Renchia, but does not finish the phrase. Looking the young man straight in the eyes, she again tries to pronounce her proposal. A fairy appears above the heads of the young people. She clears her throat, attracting their attention. The winged creature, rubbing her chin, says that she worked late at night, as she was assigned to do so, but as soon as she returned, she saw that some citizens were doing something incomprehensible here. Letty and Lime blush deeply. The hero fearfully asks when the fairy managed to return. We see two black figures, a fairy mimicking the young people, making up phrases that they allegedly said to each other. Letty indignantly screams that she did not say anything like that. The fairy lies down on her bed and says that it does not matter at all, and she herself really wants to sleep. The lovers can continue their business when they complete a combat mission. The fairy, indignantly grumbling, covers herself with a blanket. Letty and Lime are silent. We see a character sitting on a throne in Luelf Castle. He knocks on the armrest. The fairy, located inside a green ball, watches the elf, who says that it seems that an insect is flying somewhere nearby. In front of us, the fairy, transformed into a spectacular beauty, who led Letty past the guards. Renchia says that, according to the report, his fighters saw a suspicious slave trader who brought the princess to the castle, but no one knows where she eventually went. The blonde guy rests his head on his hand. He states that all this means that someone outside has entered the castle grounds. We see the character's leg. He states that now at any moment we can expect some kind of move from the Elven Resistance movement. We see Renchia's face. He states that this time he will crush the rebels, and then become the Emperor of the Dark Elves. Energy flows above the green sphere. Renchia states that Letty will belong to him. In front of us is a magnificent garden. It is reported that this is happening the next day. Letty is surrounded by roses. Lime thanks his comrade, who said that he bought what he needed. Lute, looking at the hero in bewilderment, asks what he is going to do with these shabby clothes. Lime points his finger at the dress that the blonde guy is holding in his hands and states that it will be needed for the operation. Lute asks again in bewilderment. A system window is visible above the hero's head. The guy thinks that after defeating the Lich, he unlocked a new unique skill, Dark Synthesis. The boy takes a rose in his hand. He wraps several of these flowers in a dress. The boy closes his eyes. Purple energy flows around him. Lime uses the Dark Synthesis skill. A bright flash occurs. The boy sees a magnificent dress in front of him. Letty looks at this outfit in shock and is amazed at how beautiful it looks. Lute is incredibly surprised. We see the dress up close. The hero explains that not only does it look beautiful, but due to the fact that it is saturated with darkness, it has increased durability and is able to withstand even a small explosion. The hero's comrades look at him in surprise. Lime says that he is going to make several more of these outfits. Lute asks if they should wear these clothes. Lime, smiling, says that his comrade is very clever, and they will do so since they will go to a masquerade ball. In front of us is a socialite with a fan. Lime informs us that this event is held once a year to demonstrate the might of the occupying army, and Renchia, who rarely leaves his headquarters, will probably be there. We see the Emperor again, lying behind black bars. The hero says that they will infiltrate the ball, defeat Renchia and force him to tell us where Letty's father is. In front of us is someone's leg. It is reported that the action takes place on the evening of the next day in Luelf Castle. In front of us is a transformed fairy in a magnificent dress. Lute looks very elegant. Letty is simply gorgeous. The hero adjusts his gloves. Smiling, he declares that now is their turn. We see the eyes of a young goblin. We see the hero and his allies. Letty raises a finger and says that Elrond and the others are waiting for a signal, and will begin to act as soon as they manage to determine the location of her father. Lime adjusts the mask on his face. He says that he understands everything, and in this case it is time to begin the operation. There are a lot of people in the hall. The guests are smiling and talking to each other. We see several more visitors. Now their legs are in front of us. Lime asks if Renchia should really be here somewhere. Letty replies that the scoundrel is bound to show up here. All the guests are wearing masks. The hero says that all this makes the search very difficult. Lime looks in surprise at two guests who approach him. A woman in a blue dress says that it seems she has not been introduced to the young man. A man in uniform standing nearby says that the guy also does not look like a distinguished soldier of the Demon Lord's army. Lime, showing an envelope with a seal, says that he has an invitation. The guy understands that the local nobles are very vigilant. The man, looking at the hero, asks if this letter is a fake. His companion, smiling, says that commoners and ordinary soldiers have recently begun to forge such invitations in order to get into the ball. Holding a folded fan in front of her, the woman declares that in this regard, she would give the hero a small test to understand whether he and his companions are worthy of attending this event. The woman opens her mouth. Smiling, she says in an incomprehensible dialect that, despite his fine clothes, the hero creates the impression that he comes from the slums. He defiles this hall with his presence and must leave immediately. But he will not understand anything because he does not know the language in which all this is said. Letty thoughtfully rubs her chin. She understands that this is the ancient elven language, but does not catch the meaning of the phrases. Lime holds out his hand in front of the blonde. He looks back at her and says that he will sort out this situation himself, and these two deserve an answer that will make them regret their ignorance. The hero adjusts the mask on his face. He thinks that a scandal cannot be caused, so it is necessary to put the arrogant nobles in their place quietly and calmly. The young man pulls the mask over his face. The woman in the blue dress lowers her fan and apologizes, stating that the hero seems to have understood nothing of what she said, and therefore she wants to repeat everything in modern Elven. Lime raises his left hand, saying that there is no need for this, and then declares that the woman insulted him, thinking that no one would understand her. The stranger, smiling, asks again. The interlocutors stand opposite each other. Lime declares that he does not want to disappoint the woman, but in fact he speaks much better Old Elven than she does, and that is far from all, because he also knows about 30 regional dialects spoken in the Empire, and he understands that the woman uses the dialect of the southernmost part of Kruan. Smiling, the young man declares that she does not even belong to the capital's nobility, but pretends to be someone unknown, and that is why she put on a completely stupid dress. The woman is shaking with anger. We see the young man's leg. He declares that the dignity of a nobleman is determined not by his place of birth or the size of his territory, but by how he behaves. Menacingly looking at his interlocutor, the guy says that if she understood him, she should immediately get out of his sight. The woman fearfully covers her face with a fan. Her companion calls the hero an ignoramus, and grabs his sword. Lute stops the man's hand. He says that he should think carefully if he does not want to die on this very spot. Lute says that the nobleman is making a scandal out of nothing. He looks at the guy with hatred. The man and the woman run away, promising to remember how they were treated here. Lime sighs heavily. Letty asks how the guy knows the ancient Elven language so well, because even among the members of the Emperor's family there is no one who fully understands it. The young man, smiling, declares that he cheated a little. The guy thinks to himself that all this happened thanks to the goblin summoning. It turns out that, adjusting the mask on his face, the hero unnoticed by everyone summoned the goblin scholar. It is reported that among ordinary goblins, not shining with intelligence, rare individuals are sometimes born who can understand and speak almost all the languages of the continent. A ball with an eye is visible above the young man's head. Lime thinks that he adopted the goblin's knowledge, and thanks to this he spoke the ancient Elven language fluently, thanks to which he was able to rebuff the bitchy lady. The young man smiles. Looking down, Letty declares that this is not a deception, but something else. The girl looks around in surprise. She sees many admiring ladies in luxurious dresses. They excitedly declare that they heard the entire conversation. One of the girls, putting her hand to her chest, asks the hero and his companions not to think that all the guests of this ball are the same as those two who have just been disgraced. In front of us is a girl with a fan. She declares that these aristocrats have always been very arrogant and caused trouble out of nowhere. The third beauty secretly reports that no one like these two. The fourth, smiling, declares that the hero really put them in their place and now she is his fan. Lime laughs. The girls ask each other what the guys' names are. Lute and Lime introduce themselves. One of the girls, slapping herself on the cheeks, declares that she is simply delighted with these beautiful names. The beauties surround the guys. One of them asks Lute to dance with her. She immediately has competitors. Letty looks very unhappy. Clenching her fist in anger, she tells the fairy standing next to her that it was actually she who gave the hero the name he now bears. The fairy asks what her highness is going to do with all this. We see someone's leg. Renchia comes down the stairs. Letty notices him. Renchia smiles. The blonde looks at the young man in amazement. Lime turns his head. He understands that a target has appeared in front of him. We see a hand in a glove. In front of us is Renchia, the commander of the occupying army and a dark mage knight. He thanks everyone who came to the masquerade ball. Those present admire the elf and thank her for the event she has organized. Someone says that it is a great honor to be there. Renchia raises her hand, calming everyone down. The elf makes movements with his finger. He declares that he wants to show something. We see red material. The guests open their mouths in surprise. A green robe with a white collar and a statue of a knight are visible behind the curtain. Here we see the second of these objects. Renchia says that it is made entirely of orichalcum. Renchia, raising her right hand, declares that their active efforts are bringing success closer every day. And now, if they can sell these objects to the Demon Lord, they will receive a huge profit. Renchia, raising her hands, declares that he will give all this profit to those present. Letty remembers the elves who work in chains in the mine. The girl thinks that this thing was obtained thanks to the exhausting and incredibly hard work of the elves, and its fruits will be received only by the top of the army and some representatives of the aristocracy. We see a socialite covering her face with a fan. Renchia, smiling, says that it is time to begin the dance. The joyful expression disappears from the elf's face. He declares that he would like to say so, but something prevents it. Lime's face becomes alarmed. Renchia demands the attention of everyone present. He declares that it is necessary to carry out the extermination of pests. Before us is the Lich and Letty. Renchia states that, as everyone present knows, contact with the Lich King, the commander-in-chief of the army, was recently lost, and at the same time, Princess Letty was spotted in the capital of the empire. We see a fairy sitting inside a green ball. The dark elf says that, in addition to everything, an enemy spy was spotted flying over the capital last night, and this is no coincidence. Lute tells his comrade that he has a bad feeling. He replies that all this is not good, and Renchia has found out that they want to destroy him. Renchia, smiling broadly, states that the rebels who dared to turn their swords against the empire are here, in this hall. The young man's eye emits a glow. Renchia points her finger at the hero and says that this is the leader of the conspirators. Lime looks closely at the enemy. Armed warriors appear around him, ordering the guy to stand still and not move. The young man understands that it will no longer be possible to secretly eliminate the scoundrel. Purple streams appear near his hand. Renchia raises her hand and demands that the rebels not rush with their actions, as he does not want to create bloody chaos. Smiling, the blonde declares that the elves have a great tradition, and they can arrange a soul-sworn duel. Letty looks up in fear. Lime asks what kind of duel this is. The guy looks at his ally. She says that this is an ancient elven tradition, and the loser must fulfill the wish of the winner. We see two crossed daggers. The girl says that this is an oath that cannot be broken. The blonde looks at the hero in fear. She says that arranging such a battle in the heart of enemy territory is incredibly dangerous, so the young man should refuse the duel. The girl looks at Renchia in amazement, who declares that she is very well versed in the traditions of the elves. The guy first calls her a rebel, and then declares that he recognized Princess Letty. The blonde looks at Renchia in fear. We see her eyes. The girl understands that she was recognized. The villain, smiling, says that if his opponents do not accept the challenge, then no one knows what can happen to the rebels who are in the castle and around it. Letty, behind whom Elrond is visible, understands that this will be a disaster. Lime frowns at the enemy. He declares that if he wins, the guy will tell him all his secrets related to dark magic. It seems to him that the young man has exceptional power in this regard. In front of us is the left eye of the hero. Lime understands that Renchia learned about him from his immediate superior, the Lich. The blonde puts his hand to his chest and declares that, on top of everything, Letty will marry him, and he will officially become the emperor of this state. Letty looks at Lime in fear. The hero, meanwhile, thinks that if the loser must fulfill all the conditions of the winner, then this suits him perfectly. He says that he accepts the challenge. The girl calls out to the young man. He takes off his mask and declares that his promise to protect the girl has not disappeared. The hero resolutely looks at the enemy and declares that he agrees to the soul-sworn duel. In front of us is the arena of Luelf Castle. We see the faces of the opponents. The spectators raise their hands. Letty, Lute, and the fairy are sitting in the stands. One of the spectators, raising his hand, says that soul-sworn duel will allow him to find out all the information about the rebel army and put an end to it once and for all. He admires the leadership qualities of Mr. Renchia. His interlocutor says that Lime is incredibly stupid if he agreed to a challenge from the strongest dark mage of the Demon Lord's army. The young man looks closely at his opponent. He understands that he uses a rod of orichalcum, which increases the conductivity of magic to the maximum. The mentioned weapon is visible in front of Renchia's face. Lime thinks that it increases the enemy's strength several times. Renchia stands with a rod in her hand. The hero thinks that he has not seen this character in the game, and in addition, this is a dark mage, the same as himself, and all this suggests that the fight will be exciting. The command to start the duel sounds. The spectators support Renchia. The hero puts forward his right hand and uses the level 39 dark magic skill Flare Bomb. A large purple cloud appears in front of the elf. Renchia calls the enemy a naive rebel, and uses the skill with Suicide Veil level 59. The hero looks at the enemy, realizing that he uses magic above level 50. We see the young man's leg. The guy understands that in order to win this fight he must come up with something original. He uses the skill Acceleration. A powerful green whirlwind is visible above the boy's head. Renchia uses the level 62 Supernova skill. He asks the hero what happened and urges him to give a worthy rebuff. Lime understands that his opponent is acting too quickly. Fear appears on the boy's face. He curses mentally. We see a powerful green flash. Letty fearfully calls out to his comrade. Lute does the same. In front of us are someone's legs. Lime brings a clenched fist to his face. He thinks that the power of his opponent's dark magic is much stronger than his own, and it must be some powerful combination of elven magic. Renchia smiles. He uses the level 43 dark magic skill Abyss Hole and asks what happened to his opponent. In front of us is the handle of his staff. Waves of green energy are visible under the hero's feet. We see a trace of a jump. Lime looks at his enemy in fear. He thinks that something is wrong here. It seems to him that Renchia is somehow manipulating the darkness. The blonde uses the level 53 death pressure skill and offers the hero to taste it. Lime raises his right fist. A powerful blow falls to the ground. The young man's hand lies on the ground. The guy looks down, he cannot understand what is happening, and realizes that he is not able to control his inner darkness. Renchia, smiling, uses the level 42 falling acid skill. Large green drops fly at the hero. The young man looks to his right in horror. Letty looks at her comrade writhing in agony. She tries to shout to him. The hero gets to his feet. He uses the suicide veil spell. We see the hunched back of the young man. Renchia, from whom green circles are spreading, uses the level 65 Hellblaze skill. Clouds of green smoke rise in front of the hero. We see the profile of the young man. Lime curses under his breath, realizing that his opponent is using his skills too quickly. Renchia, smiling, states that low-level monsters are absolutely pathetic creatures. Lime, smirking, states that he has only just begun. Renchia, who is standing calmly with a staff in his hand, reasonably notes that his opponent has not been able to cause him any damage so far. The hero asks the elf to shut up and just wait a little. He says that for the strongest mage in the Demon Lord's army, Renchia is too impatient. The dark elf, smiling, states that the hero has no idea about politeness. We see the lower part of the hero's face. The boy thinks that despite the fact that he just made a loud statement, he has no idea how to hurt his opponent. Renchia, holding out her right hand, declares that she will now finish off her enemy. Lime turns his attention to the green statue. We see the right eye of the young man. He looks at the monument. A bright green flash occurs above Renchia's head. The elf uses the skills Dark Blizzard and Fire Bomb level 50. In front of us are the faces of two young people. Lime cannot believe that his enemy uses fire and water magic at the same time. He says that together these two skills will combine into dark magic of level 100, which the goblin will not be able to withstand no matter how hard he tries. Lime looks ahead in fear. He understands that he is in mortal danger. We see the eyes of the young man. The hero falls somewhere through space. He notices something in front of him. In front of him is the goddess of goblins. She says that the guy seems to have overestimated himself, and asks if the hero has become too reckless after winning against strong opponents. Lime looks at the girl in shock. He realizes that in front of him is definitely the goddess he has already seen in the same space. The girl, raising her hand, declares that she did not resurrect the guy in this world for him to die in such a ridiculous way. She points her finger at the hero and declares that she is giving him an ultimatum. He must stop fooling around and defeat the weakling he is currently fighting. Lime thoughtfully says that he agrees with the goddess, and believes that the reason he ended up here again is because his inner darkness is betraying him. We see the green statue again. The hero says that most likely it is due to the magic of the artifact made of orichalcum, which is installed in this arena. The goblin goddess, looking down, says that the guy seems to have understood everything. He declares that if he only guessed about it before, now he is completely convinced. Lime rubs his chin thoughtfully, remembering his opponent's face, as well as the magic he used. He says that the abnormally fast rate of casting spells and the ability to use two skills at once are also most likely related to this artifact. The goblin goddess, putting her left hand to the side, says that the young man is starting to figure it out. The hero asks if the girl is really praising him now. She asks the guy to stop fooling around. We see the goddess's face. She says that she will help the young man only once. We see the goblins praying in front of the image of the girl. She says that she helps the young man because she feels how, thanks to him, faith in her is returning to this world. Smiling, the goddess puts her hand on the hero's shoulder and asks him to continue working in the same spirit. Lime, looking at the girl with a little surprise, assures her that she will do so. Rings are visible on the goddess's feet. She says that they are hanging loose, and she needs to leave. The girl spreads her arms out to the sides. She states that the hero should already know what and how to do. She calls him the Messiah and calls him to go forward. Judging by the expression on his face, the hero is shocked. He puts his hand forward with his fingers spread. Lime stops the green energy right in front of him. Renchia, looking at her opponent in amazement, asks how he was able to block this spell. Lime smiles happily. He thinks that he cannot be considered a messiah if he allows someone to destroy him here. There is great tension on the hero's face. He thinks about stopping his opponent's incredibly fast spells and the use of dual skills. Renchia, putting her staff forward, declares that now he will definitely finish off the damned goblin. We see the boy's eye. In front of us is the mark of a very powerful blow. Lime is on all fours. Renchia smiles happily. Letty and Lute are trying to shout to their comrade. The princess, clenching her fists, asks the hero to just give up. He replies that he is completely fine and will not do that. The hero looks at the blonde. Lime whispers something. The kobold seems to understand what the boy wants from him. We see a trace of a jump. Lime rushes forward. He thinks that in order to prevent the rapid use of spells, he needs to get close to the enemy. Streams of purple energy swirl around the boy. He uses the dark magic skill Chaos Enhanced level 43. Renchia looks at her opponent with concern. The blonde looks around, trying to figure out where the next attack will come from. The hero approaches the enemy from behind. We see the eyes of the boy. Lime strikes, but Renchia blocks it with her staff. The dark elf looks at his opponent with a smile and says that it was a good try, but unfortunately for Lime, The staff made of orichalcum has the properties of an excellent melee weapon. Renchia, in front of whose face the hero's blade is visible, smiles. We see the leg of one of the opponents. Lime realizes that the dark elf not only casts spells very quickly, but also moves incredibly fast. The hero tries to use the acceleration skill. Renchia, opening her mouth wide, screams that the hero is too slow. A powerful explosion occurs in front of Lime. The young man lies on the ground. Renchia raises her weapon over his head and screams that she will kill the enemy now. Lime looks at the dark elf with hatred. He, opening his mouth wide, screams that all this is useless. He plunges his weapon into the hero's back. A piercing scream is heard. Lime lies on the ground. The referee approaches the body. He declares that there are no signs of life, and the participant in the duel is dead. Renchia, smiling, declares that this is the end of the duel. The judge extends his hand towards the dark elf and declares that Commander Renchia is the winner. The blonde raises his hands and, turning to the spectators, asks if they saw what happened. He pompously says that justice always prevails. Renchia seems to notice something. One of the spectators in the stands points at something. Renchia turns her head. Blood drips onto the ground near the hero's foot. Lime rises to his feet. Renchia looks at him in shock. Raising his right hand to chest level, the dark elf screams that this is impossible, and he was sure that his opponent was killed. Blood oozes from the corner of the hero's mouth. Renchia calls him a bastard. Dark figures are visible behind the villain. They grab him from all sides. Renchia screams hysterically, not understanding what is happening here. In front of us are emaciated pointy-eared creatures. Lime explains that they are elves who were tortured by the scoundrel and died as slaves. Renchia cannot escape from the hands of the dead. He demands that they immediately let him go. Lime, with blood flowing from his mouth, screams that he will take the dark elf with him straight to hell. He begs in horror not to do this. We see the collar of the dark elf's suit. Renchia sits on the ground and looks in shock at the part of his suit that flew off. Lime stands in front of him as if nothing had happened. Renchia asks if it was just an illusion. The hero, whose eyes have become multicolored, asks if his opponent liked the vision of victory. The guy uses the dark magic skill Evil Eye level 65. Renchia looks at the enemy in shock, and asks if this happened at that very moment. The dark elf remembers the evil look of his enemy. He touches his chest with his hand and realizes that the artifact that was on his neck has disappeared somewhere. Lute calls out to his comrade. A magical formation is visible on the statue that stands next to him. The blonde shouts that they are all ready. Exactly the same circles are visible next to Letty and the fairy. Renchia, who no longer looks like himself, shouts that this simply cannot be, and he does not understand how Lime noticed what he is doing. The hero calmly replies that everything was, in principle, obvious, and the rapid use of skills and dual spells are not the dark elf's own abilities, but what the orichalcum statues placed around the arena provide him with. We see a knight statue and a green brooch. Lime says that Renchia has placed dark magic spells in each of the statues, and this allows him to instantly activate them with the brooch. The young man remembers the face of the dark elf casting the spell. Now he sees a powerful explosion above his head. Lime says that the bastard simply activated pre-prepared spells one after another. The hero destroys the green crystal, after which he declares that Renchia will no longer be able to use this pathetic trick. Lute loudly says that all the statues are sealed. Renchia, sweat running down his face, gasps in fear. Lime clenches his fist and looks at the enemy, saying that these statues also generated a field that disrupted the balance of his darkness. But now this effect has stopped working too. Powerful streams of purple energy rise around the young man. Lime says that it is his turn. He looks at the enemy with multicolored eyes and expresses hope that he is ready to take the blow. Renchia puts his hand in front of him and asks him to wait. He says that the duel is already over, since he surrenders. The hero's fist flies at him. The blow hits the blonde in the stomach. Renchia opens her mouth wide. Lime rests his foot on the ground. He delivers several more powerful blows. Blood gushes from the dark elf's mouth. A purple glow is visible around the young man's hand. Lime looks at the enemy with hatred. Another blow hits the bastard right in the face. The spectators present in the stands see the trace of a powerful blow. Renchia lies against the wall. Lime clenches his fist. An announcement sounds that he has won the duel. The young man loudly calls Letty. The girl approaches the defeated enemy. The blonde looks at Renchia and declares that, according to the rules of soul-sworn duel, she orders to report the location of her father, the Emperor of the Dark Elves, who is being held in captivity. Blood is flowing from Renchia's mouth. The scoundrel declares that the Emperor is in an underground tunnel, which is located under the castle of Luof. There is a secret door with an imperial emblem, behind which there is a secret room. The girl, gritting her teeth in anger, looks at Renchia. The blonde is surrounded by fighters with swords. They demand that she stop, and declare that the elves cannot act here at their own discretion. Letty looks at them in fear. A mark from a blow is visible in the air. It hits the back of the head of one of the fighters. 2 more guards are hit next. We see a hand holding a sword. Its owner tells the princess that they will do the rest. Next to Elrond, 2 dark elves are visible. The blonde, looking happily at the old man, thanks him. Then her face becomes displeased. She reminds him that she is a knight. Elrond, smiling, looks at the girl. Lime happily says that it is time to finish their counterattack. We see a trace of a jump. The young man hangs in the air. With his mouth wide open, he announces to those present that this is a declaration addressed to the occupation army and all elves. Those present in the stands look at the hero. He declares that the commander-in-chief of the occupation army, the Lich King, has been destroyed, and the commander of Renchia has been defeated, and the invading army no longer has a single chance of victory. Elrond looks at the fighter with whom he crossed swords. Lime says that all this was possible thanks to the Elven resistance movement, which bravely fought to restore the independence of their country. We see the face of the young man. He announces to the audience that the final cleansing of the remnants of the occupation army is currently underway. The guy addresses the citizens of the empire and asks for help in freeing his brothers who are forced to work for the enemy. The elves on the platform smile happily. The hero calls on them to join the ranks of the resistance. The dark elves joyfully clench their fists. Lime goes forward. Lute calls out to him. Putting his hand to his chest, he declares that his comrade can leave the rest to him, and he himself must go and help Letty. Lime agrees with this proposal. An emblem is visible on the wall in front of the blonde. Letty puts her hand to the stones and whispers a spell in her language. A bright flash occurs in front of her. The girl's eyes widen in surprise. She runs into the room and calls for her father. The emperor lies on the bed, bound in chains. Letty understands that she will never be able to break them. The girl tugs at the chains, but they do not give in. She cries in despair. A hero appears behind the blonde, asking to let him do what needs to be done. The cursed sword Arundite appears in the guy's hands. Lime strikes several times. The chains fall to pieces. The emperor opens his eyes and asks where he is. Letty throws herself on his neck. He recognizes his daughter. Lime smiles. In front of us is a nice town. The hero thinks that peace has come to the land of the Dark Elf Empire. Elrond orders something to his subordinates. Thanks to him and the army of the rebels, the occupation forces were expelled from the entire country. The shackles fall from the girl's hands. All the elves who were turned into slaves are freed. We see the elves smiling happily. The hero thinks that he, who came out of the secret goblin village, freed an entire nation from the clutches of the demon lord. We see the back of the hero's head. The guy resolutely looks forward. He says that the next step will be an attack on the headquarters of the demon lord's army. People have gathered in the throne room of the Dark Elf Emperor. The emperor, smiling, declares that this means that the one who saved his state stands before him. Lime, bowing, says that he did not do it alone. Letty, pressing her hand to her chest, looks at her father. A fairy is visible behind Lute. The hero reports that all his allies made a huge contribution to the victory. The emperor, closing his eyes, declares that the young man does not need to be modest, since modesty is often excessive and even tasteless. The dark elf sits on his throne and, laughing, says that he did not want to offend the young man in any way. Elrond declares that he would also like to express his gratitude to the hero. The old man rubs the bridge of his nose. He says that the traitor Renchia could have kidnapped their princess if not for Lime. Elrond turns to the emperor and asks if he thinks that this hero can be rewarded by giving him her highness as a wife. Letty is shocked to the depths of her soul. The emperor rubs his chin thoughtfully. He says that in the history of his empire there are no recorded cases of mixing of representatives of the ruling dynasty with other races. But it seems that the first such precedent may happen, and the dark elf's partner will be a goblin. The man, smiling, says that he would like to see what his grandchildren will look like. Letty, blushing deeply, asks her father what he is saying. The emperor, looking at the girl in bewilderment, asks if she really objects to this idea. The blonde answers that she is not entirely against it, after which she begins to mumble something inarticulate. Elrond laughs loudly. He says that in this case everything is decided, and he is ready to congratulate the future newlyweds. Letty clutches her head. She does not understand what to do, because she has not even walked hand in hand with the hero yet. Lime puts her hand to her chest and asks everyone to listen to him. The young man says that he is flattered by this offer, but now is not the time for weddings. The emperor, sitting on the throne, asks what the young man means, and he replies that at this very moment the demon lord's army is most likely tracking his every move. We see hordes of terrifying monsters, and Lime says that the invasion of this army is imminent, and so they need to come up with a plan as soon as possible. The emperor, before whom the young man stands, states that this is true and asks what should be done, and Lime replies that he will try to come up with a defense plan. The young man decisively states that they should also consider striking the demon lord's headquarters. Elrond is amazed and asks if the young goblin is serious. The fairy and Lute smile. Letty looks at the hero excitedly and mentally calls him by name. We see the young man from behind. He asks the crowd not to worry, assuring them that only a few select fighters will be sent into enemy territory. But now that the Dark Elf country has severed ties with the demon lord, it can no longer remain neutral. The emperor rubs his chin thoughtfully. He says that he has a strong ally, and all this now makes sense. He raises his hand and calls the old man. Elrond replies that he is listening to his lord. We see green matter. In front of us are weapons of all kinds. The emperor says that the hero sees before him artifacts made of orichalcum, which have been created by the dark elves for many generations, and he can use them as he pleases. Lime looks up in shock and says that this is simply amazing. A fairy flying next to him declares that they must take everything they see. The emperor, sitting on the throne, tells the hero that if the young man needs anything, he is always ready to help. Lime thanks his majesty. The hero looks at the ruler of the state. He is smiling, declares that he will pray for the success of the Messiah of the Elven nation. The emperor, spreading his arms wide, says that before setting off on a campaign, the hero must attend a feast that will be held in honor of the victory. Lime and Lute are standing next to each other. We see a woman's leg. The young man, smiling, turns his head. In front of him stands the absolutely irresistible Letty. The fairy, sitting on the hero's shoulder, clutches her head. The blonde looks at the young man with loving eyes. Lute enjoys the food. Letty looks at the hero, who also enjoys the exquisite delicacies. Elrond bows before the young man. Lute attracts the increased attention of the girls present at the event. The fairy explains to little Lily how a real lady should behave. The dancing begins. Lime thoughtfully looks into the distance, standing on the balcony. Lute comes up behind him and asks why the hero of the evening has withdrawn from everyone. The hero sheepishly replies that goblins are not used to being the center of attention. Lute, smiling, states that the same applies to kobolds. The blonde comes up to the hero and stands next to him. He says that it seems that they have made a good name for themselves in this country. Lime still modestly replies that he did not do anything special here. Lute thoughtfully says that being next to the hero never gets bored, and that he always shows him worlds that he did not even dream of. Lute, looking at his comrade, states that this is exactly why he wants to be next to him further. Lime looks at his friend. He raises a clenched fist and says that he wants to become stronger. He asks if Lime can show him how to become as strong. The hero, looking at his comrade, states that of course he will do it. The latter asks again in surprise. The boy's mind flashes back to how Lute fought. The hero thinks that this fighter's potential is probably even higher than his own, and now the blonde is weaker only because he does not have the knowledge of the game fantasy frontier that he has. Lime stretches out his fist in front of him and says that it will be a long and difficult road. He asks if Lute will get tired. The blonde, smiling, says that he will try to cope. The guys touch fists. Lute says that he is ready for anything. Letty and the fairy look at their friends. The winged creature says that sometimes she is very jealous of guys. Lime goes to his bed. The fairy covers herself with a blanket and says that everything was very fun, but she is tired. The hero replies that he can barely stand on his feet too. The fairy swings her legs, lying on the bed. She asks what the hero is going to do. He, looking down, replies that he wants to summarize everything that came to his mind before going to bed. We see a map of the world. Lime, smiling, says that he needs to develop a plan to storm the Demon Lord's castle. Lime looks down. In front of the boy is a world map. He thinks that the demon continent is ruled by the 7 great kings of the Demon Lord's army, and so far everything corresponds to the plot of the game fantasy frontier. The boy remembers the 2 defeated opponents. He says that they have already liberated the domain of Diol and the Lich, and now they must reach the Demon Lord's castle and defeat its owner. In front of us is a dark figure. The hero states that in order to get there, you need to go either through the domain of the dark soothsayer Valency, or through the territory ruled by the archdemon General Shanel. We see another dark figure. In front of the boy are visible elements of the system window. Lime thinks that the Demon Lord, thanks to the Lich, already knows who his enemy is, and most likely, it will be impossible to pass peacefully through these lands. The fairy, raising her left hand, says that naturally there will be obstacles on their way. She knows of at least several outposts on the way to the castle, and there are also dragons that fly over these territories. In front of us are the winged creatures in question. The fairy states that these creatures will immediately devour the hero. Lime replies that he knows about it. The fairy, hanging in front of the guy's face, states that traveling by land is not an option, and getting to the castle by air is also not possible, so she does not understand how it is possible to get there at all. Lime, smiling, states that these are not the only possible options. He understands that the knowledge gained in the game gives him a huge advantage. The young man, pointing to the map, says that in this place there is usually an impassable mountain range, but at its foot there is a mine of dark crystals that goes right through the range. In front of us is the entrance to the mine. Lime states that, in other words, this is a shortcut that leads directly to the Lord's castle. The fairy, thoughtfully rubbing her chin, asks how the young man can know about this, because no one has ever heard of the dark crystal mine. The young man, smiling, replies that he has his own ways of obtaining information. He remembers that in the game he had to get to the Demon Lord's castle exactly along this path. Putting her right hand aside, the fairy says that she has already gotten used to these surprises, and she has nothing to be surprised about anymore. The hero, smiling, suggests conducting a slightly deeper simulation of this plan. He says that low-level monsters work in the mine, who are forced to do hard labor, but shifts are often changed there. The hero thoughtfully rubs his chin. The fairy looks at him, folding her arms across her chest. The young man holds a folded map in his hands. He says that they seem to have decided on the route, and for today the planning work can be considered finished. The fairy, yawning, says that she can finally sleep. Lime tiredly falls onto the bed. He thinks that everything is clear with the route, and now it is necessary to work on the battle plan. The young man falls asleep, thinking that today his head is no longer working, so he will think about the rest tomorrow. We see a window located next to the young man's bed. The fairy is sleeping. White streams of energy appear next to the bed. Lime is sleeping, lying on his side. The streams of energy become thicker. The window is glowing. The next morning comes. Lime is still sleeping. He opens one eye and notices something unusual. We see the hero's hand. He finds a blonde next to him. The guy jumps off the bed and lands next to the wall. The girl, rubbing her eyes, looks at the goblin in surprise. Lime asks, scared, who the hell she is and what she's doing in his bed. The fairy, awakened by the boy's screams, wakes up and looks at him in surprise. Fluttering next to his head, she says that even if Lime is the messiah of an entire nation, there are things he shouldn't do. The boy screams that the winged creature got it all wrong. The blonde who ended up in his bed yawns. She points at the boy and says that he defeated Renchia and thus earned her praise. Lime asks in amazement who she is. The girl, raising her index finger, says that the hero seems to have never seen her in this form. Opening her mouth, she declares that she is the one who brought the boy into this world. Lime looks at her in shock. We see a bright flash. The hero realizes that in front of him is the goblin goddess. He holds out his left hand and asks the girl to wait a second, then says that she is different from the goddess he saw before in size and many other characteristics. The blonde, looking at the guy with irritation, says that he seems to have some dirty thoughts in his head again. He denies it. The fairy, thoughtfully rubbing her chin, asks the goddess how she managed to end up here, on the continent of demons. The goddess asks if this is really bad, and states that thanks to the hero's efforts, she was finally able to manifest in this world, although some of her feelings have not yet fully opened up. The hero irritably asks why the goddess snuck into his bed. The girl states that she looked simply amazing, and the boy did not notice it because he slept like a log. White streams appear under her hand. She remembers how she approached the sleeping hero in her nightgown. We see the girl's eyes. She tries to wake up the young man. The goddess says that she slapped the hero on the cheeks and even pinched him, but he never bothered to wake up. The girl says that in the end she got tired herself and lay down on the nearest bed. The goddess touches the blanket with her hand. She says that she does not remember at all what happened next. The blonde covers her mouth with her fist. She says that stupid conversations tire her, and it is much more appropriate to talk about why she actually descended into this kingdom. Lime, sitting on the floor, looks at the goddess in amazement. She calls him the messiah of the goblins and says that she will give him her strength for the upcoming battle with the Lord of Demons. The guy looks at the blonde in surprise. She falls on the bed, saying that first she still needs to get a good night's sleep. The young man does not understand whether such behavior of the goddess can be considered normal. Before us is the magnificent interior of the throne room. Someone says that yesterday's feast was simply delicious. Lime bows to the emperor and thanks him for his hospitality. He says that he should have said these words himself, after which he asks if the hero is really about to leave his castle. The emperor closes his eyes. Elrond whispers in the hero's ear that his majesty drank too much during yesterday's feast. The dark elf, sighing heavily, says that if the young man has any problems, he can immediately contact him, and the dark elves will do everything possible to help the young man. Lime, standing in front of the throne, thanks his majesty. We see the goblin's eye. Lime says that in this case he would like to ask for a favor. The emperor, looking closely at the young man, says that he can ask for anything. The hero is holding a map in his hand. He opens it, and pointing his finger at the forest, says that he needs permission to enter this region of the Dark Elves' country. Elrond looks at the guy in surprise. He understands what territory he is talking about. In front of us is a scary dark forest. Lime says that Elrond understood everything correctly, and he needs permission to go where even members of the imperial family cannot go, namely, the Forbidden Place. The emperor, closing his eyes, declares that he will not even ask how the young man knows about this place. We see a dark figure in a magical formation. The emperor says that this territory was closed to everyone 500 years ago. He asks if the young man really wants to go there. Lime confidently answers that he needs to get there at all costs. The emperor wearily declares that he gives the appropriate permission. Elrond raises his hand and reminds the emperor that this place is very dangerous, and whoever goes there without knowing the customs of the Dark Elves will surely die. A girl appears in front of the old man. She says that in this case she will accompany the hero. Putting her hand to her chest, Letty declares that she will become the hero's guide. Elrond looks at the girl in surprise. Her father says tiredly that it seems completely useless to stop her. The emperor smiles. Folding his hands in front of him, the monarch declares that his daughter's task will be to protect Sir Lime from danger. Letty happily thanks her father. The girl approaches the hero. She says that it seems the Dark Elves are counting on him. The blonde laughs cheerfully. Lime smiles back at her. A fairy flutters near Lute's head. The hero, smiling, says that it is time for them to hit the road. The young people go to the door. Elrond notices something. The goblin goddess covers her mouth with her hand. The old man realizes that this character does not seem to have been with the hero before. We see forested mountains. Lime thinks that on the far edge of the Dark Elf Empire there is an ancient forest. It is a completely wild land where the sun never shines. In front of us are terrible monsters. The young man thinks that for 500 years this was a forbidden territory inhabited by ancient monsters hiding in the darkness. We see a blue sphere. Lime remembers that in the game Fantasy Frontier this forest contained the most valuable treasures that he will need if he wants to challenge the army of the Demon Lord. In front of us is a map of the area. Letty shows where to go. The Goblin Goddess continues to yawn. The hero asks if she is really going to accompany his squad. The girl looks at the guy in surprise. She puts her hands on her belt and says that, of course, she will do it, since she went through a lot of difficulties to incarnate in this world. The hero states that he has been pondering these words all morning, but still does not understand what they mean, so he asks the goddess to explain them. Goblins are seen worshipping the blonde behind her. She says that in order to descend to the demon continent, she needs the faith of her followers, and now that she has enough, she can appear before everyone. We are reminded of some of the hero's feats. The goddess states that all of this was possible thanks to what the boy did. The hero rubs his chin thoughtfully. He remembers that in Fantasy Frontier there were filling bars that tracked religious influence, and based on the amount of faith in a particular deity, one could receive the blessings of these entities. The boy looks at the blonde walking next to him. He asks if her descending into this world means that the situation here is becoming completely desperate. The goddess thoughtfully states that everything is a little different. However, the demon lord, ruling over various monsters, usually ensures the well-being of his subjects. Goblins are visible above the goddess's head. She states that the demon lord is now thoughtlessly destroying his own brothers, including the goblins that she takes care of, and if everything continues in this way, the monsters will die out even before their final confrontation with people. She says that Hermes was not like that in the past. We see the lower part of the blonde's face. She suggests that this is the result of some strange phenomenon. The hero looks thoughtfully at the goddess. He thinks that in this case he is the only one who can somehow influence the situation. We see the backs of the talking characters. The hero asks if the goddess has a name. The girl thinks about it. Raising her right hand, she states that the title of Goblin Goddess can be shortened to Godgob, and that is how others can call her. The hero feels like he's going to throw up. He declares that this is a completely idiotic name. The goddess, whose top we see, is furious. She grabs the boy by the neck from behind and screams at him to think about who he's talking to. Lime admits that he was wrong. Letty, who is watching the fight between her two allies, understands that she will have to compete with another beauty. In front of us are the girl's eyes. We see a dense forest. Letty declares that they have arrived at the place, the Forbidden Land, the great forest of the elves. The blonde notices something in front of her. Frightening creatures come out of the forest. The hero is very surprised by this. Adjusting the hood on his head, he declares that, apparently, the phenomenon that the goddess mentioned earlier has begun to occur. Godgob discontentedly declares that she has a very good name, and the hero should use it when addressing her. Then she says that she is not going to help the boy. He replies that he did not even doubt it. Lion and Lute stand next to each other. The hero calls out to his comrade, who declares that he is ready to act as soon as he receives the command. The young man and his companions are standing in a tiny clearing. Lime, raising his index finger, declares that they will start by destroying the monsters. We see terrible monsters. A horned creature, growling loudly, rushes forward. It opens its mouth wide in front of the hero. The monster gets hit on the head. The young man ends up behind it. Lime lands on the enemy's back. The hero uses the dark magic skill Sinister Analysis. In front of us is another group of monsters. The young man thinks that the fumes that envelop this forest make the creatures inhabiting it completely insane and aggressive. Lime calls out to Lute. He hovers over one of the monsters. He shouts that he hears the guy. Lute asks his friend if these creatures need to be dealt with. The guys fight the monsters. Lime asks Lute not to slow down. He shouts that he will try. Having dealt with the enemies, the guys shake off their clothes. Lime says that they dealt with the monsters very easily. Letty looks at her allies in shock. Godgob standing next to her says that they coped because they are under her protection, and she did not expect anything else. The squad goes through the forest. Letty, raising her right hand, says that this ancient forest was closed to visitors more than 500 years ago, and no one knows what can be in it. She says that, if you believe the legends that go around among the dark elves, this area has another name, the Lost Forest. The blonde comes to a huge stone. She says that, according to rumors, if someone gets lost here, they will never be able to get out. Lute says with concern that he remembers this landmark, and they have passed through here before. Lime looks around. He states that they are most likely dealing with the labyrinth effect that legends speak of. Godgob, yawning, says that it is so dark below that even if they look at this forest from above, they will not see anything. Lute sadly says that if things continue like this, they will wander through this forest forever. The fairy flies up to her goddess and asks if she is going to help her comrades. Godgob says that if they cannot cope with such a minor problem, then she sees no point in helping them. Letty, smiling, says that everything is fine, and that is why she went with the squad. A jewel appears in her hand. The girl says that it is time to use the artifact that her father gave her. The hero looks at the artifact in surprise and recognizes the pendulum of guidance. Letty, closing her eyes, says that the guy is absolutely right, and this is the most ancient lens in the history of the Dark Elves, made of orichalcum, which has been passed down from generation to generation for tens of thousands of years. Amazement appears in the blonde's eyes. She asks how the young man knows about this artifact. He, raising his hand, makes excuses, stating that he heard about it by chance. Letty does not believe that the guy could find out about the treasure of the imperial family. The blonde, smiling, says that Lime is an incredibly strange goblin. She adds that this particular orichalcum crystal is believed to contain the knowledge of the entire continent of demons. Letty, pressing her fist to her chest, says that she will ask the pendulum of guidance to direct them in the right direction. The girl lifts the decoration above her head and says something in her own language. A green beam is visible among the trees. Lime and Lute make a sound indicating amazement. Letty, smiling, suggests that her allies move on. The party continues their way through the forest. Lime strikes. Lute does exactly the same, only with her foot. Godgob sits under a tree with a bored look. The heroes put her on their shoulders. Letty points at something with her finger and calls on her allies to look in that direction. A bright light is visible in the dark forest. The girl says that they seem to have escaped the lost forest. The young man looks ahead carefully and seems to understand what is in front of him. He sees a huge crater. We see the same object from a bird's eye view. Lute also notices something. In the middle of the crater there is a wooden house. The fairy hanging above the hero's head says that she thinks someone lives there. Lime states that this is where they were going. We see the eyes of the young man. He thinks that here, in the very center of the lost forest, lives the great elder of the dark elves. We see the character in question. The guy thinks that this is a great sage and one of the strongest characters on the entire continent of demons, which in itself is the greatest treasure of this world. The hero approaches the door. He knocks on it. The old man appears behind him and states that many centuries have passed since he saw the last visitors here. The hero turns around in fear. There is no one behind him. Lime understands that he did not feel anyone's presence at all. He says that if there is no one here, then it is just an illusion. The elder appears behind the guy again. He says that he is very rude, and he is right next to him. Lime looks back again. The young man turns around sharply and again does not see anyone. He asks how this is even possible. The old man, sitting on the young man's head, says that he is here. The elf jumps off the top of the guy's head. He stands in front of him, putting his hands behind his back, and asks what business brought the hero to this forgotten place. Lime, looking at the old man, thinks that he is much smaller than he thought earlier. He says out loud that he came to the elder to talk to him, because he wants to save this world from the impending crisis. Amazement appears on the dark elf's face. He asks if this means what he thinks. In front of us is a horned creature with red eyes. Lime says that the old man is absolutely right, and he is going to fight the demon lord. In front of us is a gray-haired old man. This is the great elder of the dark elves, Principier Luelf, who lives in the depths of the lost forest. We see green crystals and the emperor of the dark elves. The hero knows that the old man is the founder of the empire, as well as the inventor of the orichalcum purification technology. He is the grandfather of the emperor, and also a great sage who has the greatest knowledge on the continent of demons. Principier is standing in front of magical information. Lime understands that at least this is how this old man was presented in Fantasy Frontier. Dried plants hang from the ceiling. The party members look at the old man. He, sitting on a small stool, asks why they are staring at him like that. Lime remembers the majestic old man with glowing eyes and thinks that a great sage should look exactly like this. He looks at the white-haired old man and asks if the great sage Principier really stands before him. He replies that there is no one else here and he is very sorry if he disappointed anyone with his appearance. Lime, smiling, says that Principier should not be offended. He is just very different from what they say about him. The guy thinks that this may be another effect of the mutation of this world. Principier sniffs. He points his finger at Letty and states that the girl seems to have elven wine. The blonde honestly admits that this is true. She takes out a bottle and says that she carries it with her as an ingredient for cooking at a picnic, or in case something needs to be disinfected. Since they are walking through a very dangerous lost forest, the old man says that there is no need to delay, and Letty should immediately open the bottle. Godgob looks at the old man in bewilderment. The fairy hanging next to her head thinks that this elf is not all right in the head. Principier closes his eyes in pleasure. He declares that this is the first time in many centuries that he drinks elven wine, and would drink much more if he were given any. He says that winemakers are disgusting moral monsters, but what they do is simply magnificent. Letty beats his fist on the chest and declares that this is the best wine that is made only for the imperial family. Lute asks his comrade in bewilderment if this is the character the hero was looking for. Lime answers that this is indeed the case. An empty bottle lies on the table. The old man declares that the wine was excellent, and he is very pleased. The hero looks closely at the old man. Putting his hand to his chest, he asks for forgiveness from the great sage and declares that he has a request. The guy asks if the old man can teach them how to control darkness. Principier asks again in surprise. Before us is the left eye of this dark elf. Streams of purple energy rise around the hero. The old man states that the boy is already using darkness. Lime says that they need to learn something much deeper and stronger. In front of us is a powerful old man emitting blue energy around himself. Lime states that it is about the dark physical boost skill, and they want to master this secret art. Principier asks in amazement how the young man learned about this skill. System windows are visible behind the old man. Lime thinks that dark physical boost is an extremely rare skill that allows you to significantly increase the level of darkness in the body, and only Principier was able to master it. The hero understands that if he masters this skill, he will be able to avoid the exhaustion of darkness, as happened during the battle with Dial. Lime stands with his hand outstretched. He thinks that he will also be able to freely use all the powerful dark magic that he managed to learn. We see a bright flash. The young man knows that dark physical boost is a passive effect that gives infinite mana points, and the ability to use skills unlimitedly. The guy looks thoughtfully in front of him. He thinks that now he has many learned skills at his disposal. But in this world everything depends on how a particular character controls the darkness inside himself. So mastering dark physical boost will be the optimal solution for this game and the shortest way to complete it. The old man, whose beard we see, is thinking. We see an outstretched hand in a burning city. The hero says that the demon lord will strike within a few weeks to try to recapture the domain of Dial and the Lich, and after this happens, the hidden goblin village, the empire of the dark elves, as well as the settlements of countless innocent creatures will be destroyed. The young man says that he is going to stop the demon lord before this happens. And that is why he wants to learn the secret art that Principier owns. The hero looks at the great sage and begs him to share his knowledge. The old man states that he is grateful to his guests for the wine, but he cannot fulfill the request. Lime, in despair, slams his fist on the table and calls out to the great sage. Principier stands with his hands clasped behind his back. He says that the goblin does not need to lose his temper, since he has already decided that he will not take any more students. Looking sternly down, Principier demands that everyone leave his house. A blue pendant is visible on the hero's chest. Placing his hand on the table, the boy states that he thinks the old man is acting this way because his previous student betrayed him. Principier turns around in amazement. In front of the old man stands a young man with a sword. Lime says that the demon lord was taught by Principier in his youth. However, after the great sage passed on his secret art to the promising student, he changed greatly and became a cunning and evil ruler. We again see the impact crater in the middle of the forest. Lime says that the giant crater that surrounds the sage's small house was actually formed when the old man tried to stop the demon lord from turning into an evil abomination. Principier, looking at the young man in shock, says that this is simply impossible. He asks how the hero knows something that no other living soul knows. Lime, who learned all this in the game Fantasy Frontier, says that he will not say another word, and what is more important now is that the demon lord is going through a mutation. Hermes stands with his arms wide apart. Lime says that the old man's former student is trying to drench the continent of demons in blood. The boy places his hand on his chest and asks to share the secret art with him to stop this monster. Principier looks at the boy in amazement. He sees his previous student behind him. The old man remembers how Hermes asked him to share his secret art, and he feels like this is another case of divine intervention. Putting his hands behind his back, the sage tells the hero that he would like to refuse the request. The boy looks at the dark elf, who states that the low-level goblin has piqued his interest after all. Letty, pressing her hand to her chest, shouts that the elf seems to have agreed. We see the sage's leg. He states that first he must make sure that the hero has what it takes to master the secret art. A green glow appears around the old man. He demands that the hero come outside with him. Lime states that this is exactly what he wants. The opponents stand opposite each other. Letty, Godgob and the fairy are watching what is happening. Lute is preparing to give the signal to start the fight. The hero has a sword in his hand. The guy understands that if the old man rejects him now, all the efforts and feats he has previously made will be in vain. Lime expects to end this duel very quickly. The command to start the fight sounds. Lime breaks away. He flies up to the old man. We see the guy's eyes. Principier looks back at him. The young man strikes, but the dark elf is not in the place where he just was. Lime is confused. He realizes that his opponent is hiding his presence again, and does not understand where to look for him now. The old man's weapon approaches the guy's head. The young man manages to remove his head in time. Principier looks at his opponent in bewilderment, and asks how he managed to dodge. The goblin and the elf are facing each other again. The hero realizes that he barely feels his opponent's presence. Principier asks how the boy is going to counter his next attack. He dissolves into thin air. Lime stares at the old man. He understands that he is erasing his presence, and he will not be able to do anything unless he finds a way to see his opponent. We see the boy's leg. He decides to use a skill that can only give a result once. A white trace is visible inside the crater. Purple streams swirl around the hero. He uses the level 99 dark magic skill Wave of Darkness. A purple whirlwind appears. We see the boy's eyes. The boy thinks that he will not be looking for the enemy's body, but rather his darkness. Lime notices a silhouette in front of him and realizes that he began to see the dark elf. The hero strikes. He holds a sword in his hand, realizing that the attack again did not give a result, and the old man disappeared again. Principier declares that the hero is acting very naive. The boy looks at him in amazement. The old elf swings his sword and shouts that it is over. This time, he misses. We see the old man's hand. Principier realizes that the hero used his presence to lure him into a trap. Lute, who is watching the duel, realizes that Lime used the same trick at the magic tournament. The blonde remembers himself at that competition. The hero ends up behind his opponent. Principier looks back at him. The old man stops the boy's weapon with 2 fingers. He looks at his opponent in bewilderment. The sword flies upward. It sticks into the ground. Lime looks down sadly. Principier, who is holding the staff with both hands, declares that the hero did not erase his presence, but used it as bait, and although it was only a momentary effect, he was able to deceive his opponent's senses. The old man, closing his eyes, says that he did not expect anything like this from a goblin. Lime, with his mouth open, looks at the elf. He lowers his staff to the ground and says that he will accept the young man as his student. Lime looks at Principier in surprise, who declares that classes will begin tomorrow. The old man, turning to the hero, declares that their next meeting will take place in the same place in the morning. The hero, bowing, thanks the elf. The boy's allies are incredibly happy. Letty shouts that she had no doubt that Lime would succeed. Godgob agrees that everything was extremely obvious. Principier sits on the hero's leg and counts to 1,000. It is reported that this is happening on the very first day of training. Lime rests his finger on the ground. The old man counts to the specified mark. Sweat runs down the boy's face. Completely exhausted, the boy falls to the ground. Principier tells the goblin to listen to him carefully, after which he says that everything in this world consists of 6 elements. In front of us is a magical formation. The old man lists the elements. It turns out that they are fire, water, earth, wind, light and darkness. He states that for monsters, darkness is a source of strength and the element without which their bodies cannot do, and if the darkness is depleted, then there can be no talk of any restoration. We see the clenched fist of the hero. Principier states that many monsters mistakenly believe that they have inexhaustible reserves of darkness, and use it very wastefully during battles, as a result of which they are defeated. In front of us is a translucent figure. Principier states that his secret art uses a special breathing technique that calls forth the darkness hidden deep within the body and increases it exponentially. The old man stands in front of the exhausted hero, his hands behind his back. He says that in order to learn how to use this technique, you need to start from the very basics, namely, with controlling the body and mind. Lime says that he understands. Principier asks Lute, who is standing upside down, if he is a kobold, and then states that this guy seems to be much better at manipulating darkness. The blonde confirms his belonging to the said race. Principier, raising his index finger, says that in that case this training should be easy for Lute, and asks the guy to do another 1,000 push-ups. Lime, hanging upside down, thinks that the training the old man is offering him is incredibly difficult, but he wants to overcome all the difficulties and master the skill he needs. Principier sits on a stone lying on the hero's back and counts to 1,000 again. It is reported that this is happening the next day. Godgob and Letty are watching the training. The fairy, settling in a cup, says that the guys have a very difficult time. Letty, clenching her fist, encourages her comrades. She says that they can do it. The goblin goddess yawns, as is her custom. A fairy flies out of the teacup and asks Lady Godgob what she meant when she said the demon lord had changed. The goddess, sipping her tea, states that it is a very good question and feels that she must tell the whole story. In front of us is an army of monsters with their leader hanging over them. Godgob says that everything happened several thousand years ago after Hermes came to this world and gained great power after being taught by a sage. He gathered an army to get rid of the rule of the humans who dominated the demon continent. In front of us is a clawed hand of a demon. Godgob states that Hermes, in order to strengthen his army, wanted to obtain the power of the dark gods, just like herself. A purple sphere is visible above the monster's hand. The goddess says that their goals were the same, as it was nothing but the prosperity of the monsters. We see a throne in the distance. Godgob states that Hermes fought to take revenge on the humans who destroyed the demons and drove them to the farthest corners of the continent, eventually banishing the humans and reigning over the demon continent as the lord. We see the face of the creature in question. The goddess states that after winning the war, Hermes united all the monsters of the continent to strengthen their faith in the dark gods. In front of us is a dying goblin. Godgob states that when faith in the gods began to weaken, the demon lord began to persecute low-ranking monsters, goblins, kobolds, orcs, and some rare elves. There are dead monsters on the ground. The goddess states that although there were gods who ruled over each of these races, they were unable to defeat the demon lord. The dark elves are mining orichalcum. The goddess says that the atrocities that are known to her interlocutors from the hidden goblin village and the dark elf empire have in fact spread throughout the demon continent, and now they are on the verge of an even greater mass destruction. We see a scene of monsters being exterminated. Godgob says that they must prevent this for the sake of all monsters, and that is why she has transferred all her powers to the hero. We see the back of a young man. Godgob states that this guy is obsessed with the desire to save the goblins and the entire world. Letty, looking at the goddess, says that they managed to protect her homeland. However, as far as she understood, a huge number of other creatures now need saving. Godgob sadly says that this is exactly how it is. The fairy sits on the edge of the cup and asks if she can ask another question. The goddess asks what it is. The winged creature, covering her mouth with her hand, says that it is simply wonderful that Godgob was able to incarnate in this world, but it is unclear why she constantly wants to sleep. The goddess, frowning at the fairy, says that one day she will understand everything. Lime continues to hold a huge stone on her back and Principier sitting on it. We see snow-capped mountains. It is reported that this is happening on the 7th day of training with the great sage. In front of us is the hero's knee. He is sitting in the lotus position. The young man's leg flies up. It turns out that he is leaning with one finger on the tip of a sharp needle. Principier looks at his student in surprise. He stretches out his hand forward. The old man brings down a stream of blue energy on the young man. He flies past the young man, who seems not to notice anything. Lime continues to stand upside down, leaning on just one finger. Principier thoughtfully moans. He shoots several charges at his student. You fly past. The boy's eyes are closed. Principier flies up to him with a staff in his hand. We see the dark elf's eye. Lime opens his eyes. The needles fly in different directions. Principier looks in surprise at the place where his student had just been. The old man turns around. It turns out that the hero is high above him. The boy looks down. He dives down, putting out his hand. The guy is upside down again, leaning on the tip of the needle. Lute, who sees all this, says that this is simply amazing. The elf standing next to the kobold says that the goblin seems to be beginning to understand how to properly use the darkness, and the next step should be to apply the knowledge gained in a real battle. The old man and his students are standing on the platform on the edge of the crater. Lime, looking at the old man, asks if this will be a battle with the beasts that live in the Lost Forest. Principier demands that the boy silently follow him. They approach a clearing. The dark elf says that it is quite suitable for battle. A magical formation is visible above the old man's hand. Lime and Lute look around in surprise. Principier tells them that they are in an area that can materialize thoughts, and is a technique that has been passed down from generation to generation by the dark elves. The old man points his finger at the young man and asks if he has mastered the ability to revive the souls of heroes. Lime says that he really has. The guy looks at the old man in shock, who states that the young man will have to use this skill. A magical formation is visible around the hero's neck. The old man demands that he use the mentioned spell. Lime, with his mouth slightly open, uses the summon goblin skill. We see the creatures that have come to his call. Lime and Lute look at them in amazement. The heroes recognize Diol and the Lich. Principier states that the boy should not worry, as they are just avatars that he extracted from the boy's memories. We see two of the hero's former opponents up close. The old man states that he once conducted experiments, exposing golems to the mysterious properties of the soil of the Lost Forest. Purple streams rise above the ground. We see two monsters. Principier states that, after saturating the soil with the power of the revival spell, he recreated the hero's strongest enemies, taking the necessary information from the boy's memories. The old man says that, in essence, they are mindless puppets that can only exist within this zone, but the hero will have to fight against them. A sword appears in the boy's hand. He thinks that the old man's training is incredibly original. Principier demands that the hero, without knowing rest, continue to fight Diol and the Lich, whom he calls puppets. Lime, smiling, replies that he is ready to do this. Lute asks what he should do. The old man looks back at the kobold and assures him that he too will have to face a very strong opponent. The hero's eyes turn white. Lute, holding a sword, declares that he understands everything. The goblins living in the hidden village are doing agricultural work. Lily holds the shaft with both hands. She wipes the sweat from her forehead and declares that she is finished. The girl turns to her friend. She offers to rest a little and drink tea. She replies that she will do it with great pleasure. Nia notices something. A winged creature approaches her. The little girl draws Lily's attention to it. A white bird lands in front of the girls. They run up to it. The little girls notice a note hanging from their necks. Lily assumes that this is a letter from her brother. Mew, clenching her fists, says that they should read it as quickly as possible. The hero fights his opponent. In the first lines of his letter he asks how Lily and Mew are doing, after which he says that everything is fine. Lime opens his mouth. Lute is visible next to him. The hero writes that the girls have most likely already gotten used to life in the hidden village, but no one knows when the demon lord will strike next. The blonde screams loudly. In front of us is a purple portal. Lime writes that now that the secret passage has been restored, it needs to be checked regularly. Then he asks the girls to be patient a little longer. Lily and Mew look at the letter. The hero's sister tries to understand what period of time the phrase "a little longer" can mean. Godgob stands with a displeased look. Lime writes that he has a new comrade, and he will soon introduce the girls to her. We see the mark of a powerful blow. The guy writes that he cannot return yet, but is doing everything to become stronger in the end. Lime slams his fist on the ground. The young man raises his right hand. He promises the girls to defeat the demon lord and then return to them. The hero rushes to attack his enemy. It is said that this is happening on the 30th day of training with the great sage. Behind the guy, a lich with a scythe is visible. Streams of purple energy rise around the weapon. We see the hero's leg. The young man strikes his opponent. Diol rushes at him next. Lime looks closely at this enemy. He hits the enemy with a charge of purple energy. In front of us are the faces of two young people, crossing weapons. They are desperately fighting. Next to the hero, a trace of a blow is visible. Lute looks ahead in fear. Pushing off the ground, the kobold rushes to attack. Lime puts forward his index finger. Traces of many blows are visible in front of the young man. The hero approaches the lich from behind. The guys are standing on the yellow sand. Lime, smiling, declares that they finally did it. Lute is also happy. He confirms that they managed to defeat the enemies. The guys touch fists. The hero praises his comrade for using both hands at once during the fight. Lute says that the hero also looks simply amazing, and defeating 2 of the 7 great kings with his bare hands is a real feat. Between Lime and Lute, a tiny figure of Principier is visible. The old man hums thoughtfully. Folding his hands behind his back, he says that it is time for the guys to begin the final test. A wooden deck is visible in front of Letty. A blue vortex is spinning above the blonde's hand. The girl sharply throws her hand forward. She looks at her hands in surprise and says that the power of her wind arrow spell has increased many times over. Godgob, raising his left hand, says that all this is thanks to her teaching abilities. Letty, looking at the young people, asks what they are doing there. The guys approach the old man. He opens his mouth and states that it has been 1,000 years since he last used this power, and then offers to begin. Streams of blue energy rise around the old man. Lute smiles and looks at the dark elf. The hero asks in amazement if this is even legal. We see the old man's hand. Principier transforms and now looks much younger. He demands that the boys attack him. The dark elf smiles and states that if his students cannot use everything they have learned from him, then both will die. Lime and Lute look at the dark elf with determination. Letty, putting her hand to her chest, states that this simply cannot be. We see a white trail. Someone rushes past Lute. The blonde receives a powerful blow and flies back. He falls to the ground, raising a huge cloud of dust. Now Principier attacks the hero. He hits him with his knee. Lime also flies far back. The friends are at roughly the same point in a huge crater. Lute states that he expected nothing less from the Demon Lord's teacher. The blonde smiles. The hero standing next to him asks if their opponent can be considered a great sage if he is some kind of pumped-up monster. We see the boy's right eye. Lime thinks that with everything that just happened to them, he sees a chance to win against this opponent, since they have become much stronger since they started training. Lime looks to his left. He remembers looking around, thinking about how he cannot sense the presence of the old man. Principier rubs his neck. He stands in front of his opponents. Lime tells Lute to remember everything they learned during training. The blonde replies that he understood his comrade. The hero, raising his right hand, uses the dark physical boost spell. Lute opens his mouth wide. We see the knee of one of the opponents. Principier states that the guys still lack skill. The fighters clash again. A powerful flash occurs. Lime puts out his right hand forward. A mark from a blow is visible next to the blonde. Letty, looking at what is happening in shock, says that it is simply unbelievable. A fairy flying nearby says that the air itself is shaking around them. Lute, who has a sword in his hand, looks to his left. He jumps and appears above his opponent. The young man, armed with 2 daggers, uses the Dark Knight skill Cross Edge. We see the eyes of the old man. He raises his left fist and blocks the blow. The blonde, gritting his teeth in anger, looks at his opponent, thinking that he is made of steel. Lime flies up to the dark elf. He strikes with his fist. The hero is amazed. A bright flash is visible between the heads of the opponents. It looks like they both fly into the air. Lute approaches the dark elf from above. Principier puts his fist forward and brings down a powerful stream of energy on the enemy. The blonde is sitting on the ground, his head down. Principier looks at him with a satisfied look. The dark elf looks to his left. He sees a hole in the ground and wonders where Lime has gone. Principier seems to notice something. Lime flies up to him. The sage puts forward a clenched fist and shouts that the boy has been caught. His hand continues to hang in the air. Principier realizes that he seems to have fallen for another bait. The hero grabs him by the leg. Principier's eyes appear amazed. The boy launches the transformed elf high into the air. Principier looks at the goblin in bewilderment. Judging by his eyes, he is incredibly amazed. He sees the hero below, whose outlines have ceased to be the same. We see the boy up close and understand that this is indeed true. The hero's eyes emit an eerie glow. Fear appears on Principier's face. The sage realizes that this goblin has mastered the dark physical boost skill simply by using it in battle. We see a trace of the jump. Lime rushes upward after his opponent. A bright flash is visible in front of the hero's face.